The boy's vacant gaze took in the Konoha market street, where dead bodies and streams of blood painted a gruesome scene. The villagers' deep-seated hatred for the boy, which had been forcibly repressed, erupted with a furious vengeance after he passed his shinobi graduation exam. This event was secretly manipulated by nefarious elements seeking political leverage. On the same day the boy passed, some of his childhood tormentors were brutally murdered and their mutilated corpses were displayed in the village square. A forged note falsely implicating the boy was attached to the bodies. This heinous act, committed on the anniversary of the Kyuubi attack and fueled by provocative speeches from the mastermind's agents, shattered the villagers' restraint. They were consumed by a bloodthirsty frenzy, losing all reason. Rumors of the boy stealing the sacred scroll of seals to release the Kyuubi further ignited their zeal. In their mad quest for revenge, the villagers killed the only two people who had ever cared for the boy. Irika Umino was murdered for the crime of passing the demon child, while the third Hokage was betrayed and killed by his own shinobi. The bloodthirsty mob then turned their hunt to the boy. But upon learning of the deaths of his two parental figures, he entered a catatonic state, his mind numb with shock. This severe psychological trauma, compounded by extreme physical torture, stripped away his last vestiges of humanity. He no longer had a will to live and passively accepted whatever the crowd did to him. The crowd's frenzy, however, caused them to overlook one crucial factor: the demon sealed within the boy would not allow its existence to end this way. The assault on the boy's mind caused his brain to shut down, allowing the demon to temporarily seize control of his body. The consequences were unimaginable. The demon-possessed child exterminated 2/3 of the village population in an act of genocide. The plan to gain control of the village had magnificently backfired on its orchestrator. Konoha was now irreparably damaged. Council member Danzo stared blankly at the boy who had single-handedly ruined all his schemes, plans, and maneuvers. He trembled with incandescent rage, seeing everything he had worked for come to nothing. His root forces were annihilated. The shinobi forces were utterly incapable of stopping the boy, with 65% of the Konoha ninja forces now extinct. However, the civilian damage was the highest. Over 11 years, the demon had cultivated an extreme hatred for the villagers due to their xenophobia toward its vessel. It reveled in its temporary freedom and achieved its goal of targeting over 90% of Konoha's civilian population. Konoha would never rise again. As Danzo watched all his hopes crumble, he saw the demon release its hold on the boy, who reverted to his catatonic state. He may have lost, but he would find some satisfaction in killing the one who had cost him everything. As Danzo moved toward the boy, a loud, ringing laugh echoed through the streets. Danzo turned to see the one person who would likely be enjoying this. Orochimaru, the snake Sunin, stood in the blood-strewn street, clearly savoring the events. Looking at Danzo, he smirked. "You were always too ambitious for your own good, Danzo. In your bid for power, you overlooked a simple fact: you never involved demons in human affairs. I had the same plan, but I abandoned it, because I knew it would end like this. You, in your greed and haste, went ahead, and today you've destroyed Konoha itself. I must thank you. In a way, you did my work for me. I always said Konoha was too corrupt to survive. It was only a matter of time before the village destroyed itself, and I must say it happened in a rather spectacular fashion." He laughed again as Danzo scowled. "I didn't anticipate this turn of events. If I had known this would happen, I would never have involved the demon." The crippled man spat with disgust. Orochimaru shook his head. "Probably not like this, but you definitely wouldn't have left him alone. He's a valuable commodity, is he not? Even with a fraction of the unlimited power sealed within him, he's brought down one of the 5 major powers in the world. No wonder almost every nation covets them. Poor child, born the son of the greatest of our kind. Oh yes, I admit it, Minato surpassed even me, but still, to be hated and shunned by the very people he protected, such is the fate of a Jinchuriki." The man sighed dramatically. "They are needed, but not wanted. However, today I believe the world has learned a valuable lesson: either treat them well or don't create them at all. The world will be thanking you, Danzo. You will be remembered as the fool who taught the world a valuable lesson. Because of your actions, from now on, Jinchuriki will either cease to exist or be treated like royalty. It's sad that the one responsible for these events won't live to see it," he mocked the man. Danzo growled. "Why are you here?" "I am here for the boy." "Oh, don't look at me like that. Do you think I'd let the one who fulfilled my ambition be left like this, to be hunted by the world? My shinobi are already exterminating all the remnants of Konoha. Soon, no one will be living in this place. Once their job is done, I will bury the village and mark it as a mausoleum. Only my 2 former teammates and I will remain as the proudest achievements of what used to be Konoha." Before Danzo could reply, he fell dead as a white bone pierced him. As it sprouted from his chest, Kimimaro Kagaya walked in. "Well done, Kimimaro-kun, take the child and bring him to Kabuto. I want him to be cared for very well. Now leave while I finish my preparations," he ordered. The white-haired teenager went to the vacant-looking boy and led him away. The boy did not react at all and allowed himself to be herded like a sheep. An hour later, the greatest explosion in shinobi history reduced and buried an entire village. On that day, the status quo changed, as only 4 major powers remained. Jiraiya and Tsunade were heartbroken with grief. 9 months later, in one of Orochimaru's many bases, Kabuto Yakushi looked at the glass jar in front of him. In it was Orochimaru's most prized genetic experiment. Naruto Uzumaki, the Kyuubi's Jinhyura Ki, was in suspended animation. He had been subjected to many genetically altering experiments that would have been impossible on normal shinobi or human beings. When he arrived, his mind was so heavily fractured and damaged beyond repair that they had no alternative but to use a forbidden technique to completely erase every human emotion within him, sparing him the torture of his hellish memories. Even the intensity of those memories was dampened. The technique was used at such a severe level that he lost most of his memories. He barely remembered his name and those of his few acquaintances. However, the memories of the graduation day and various instances of psychological abuse were still there. But, thanks to the brilliance of Orochimaru's techniques, he no longer felt any emotion. Orochimaru's goal was to create the perfect shinobi. Naruto's body was being genetically engineered to peak levels, and knowledge of certain fighting arts was forcibly imprinted in his mind. However, the pinnacle of his bioengineering skills was successfully proven when he finally integrated cellular samples from the corpse of the second Hokage into the boy. He had previously failed to integrate the cellular structure of the first Hokage, the Nidame's elder brother, to recreate the Mokuton ability. This time, Orochimaru took a more calculated and subtle approach. While not as powerful as his brother, the second Hokage was still a very powerful shinobi, ranking among the 5 most powerful ninja of all time. Orochimaru's goal was to give Naruto the same level of mastery the Nidame had in his elemental abilities. The Nidame had taken elemental chakra manipulation to the highest biological level. His body had attuned and refined his water and lightning natures to the point where they were almost a second skin. The fact that he was also a master of genjutsu was just a bonus. The operation, however, had side effects on Naruto. While his regenerative abilities allowed him to survive the rigorous procedures, his body underwent drastic changes. His body structure changed, and he now resembled a teenage hybrid of Naruto and the Nidame. While he retained his looks, his hair was now white, like the ancient Hokage's, and his whiskers were gone. He also acquired the Nidame's distinctive facial markings, 3 brown, tree branch-like markings, 1 from the bottom of his chin rising up to below his mouth, and 2 rising from behind his ears, stopping just short of the gap between the nose and the spots below the eyes. His eyes also turned brown instead of blue. To Orochimaru's immense delight, he displayed that he had indeed acquired the 2 elemental natures, and they were rapidly evolving to the level of the deceased Hokage. In his exuberance, Orochimaru implanted the knowledge of some powerful water and lightning techniques he knew into the boy. Today, however, was a special day. They were about to initiate the final phase of the experiment, after which the boy would be removed from suspended animation and tested. As Kabuto looked up, he saw Orochimaru busy with a specific sealing array. Orochimaru decided that Naruto's mind was too fragmented and had to be completely renewed. He was going to wipe the boy's mind completely and install a new set of memories. In these memories, the boy would retain the recollections of the village tormenting him and him slaughtering the village. However, he would be devoid of all emotion but not rational thinking. In short, he would be a perfect fighting machine with unparalleled intelligence, a being devoid of most human emotions. According to Orochimaru, this would theoretically mitigate any emotional damage the boy might otherwise undergo. For all intents and purposes, the boy would be a sentient robot. Orochimaru had taken great pains to ensure the Kyuubi didn't interfere. However, he had not realized that the amount of experimentation he had done on Naruto would have destroyed the boy if not for the Kyuubi's heightened regenerative abilities, which had rather unexpected consequences he was about to discover. As Orochimaru neared the end of his operations, the room's entrance was suddenly blown wide open, and the entire Akatsuki stepped in. Madara Uchiha stepped forward and spoke. "Did you really think you could hide him from us, Orochimaru? You were too busy experimenting on your new pet, and you will now regret ignoring us. Hand over the Jinhyura Ki, and we will make your death quick and painless." Orochimaru scoffed and prepared to battle, knowing his chances were slim. He decided to awaken Naruto and field test him to even the odds. In his haste, he forgot that his operation was incomplete. He had finished implanting the memories and removing the emotions, but he had not yet sealed the technique. This meant that although the boy had lost all emotions, he was not barred from learning them again. This would prove to be both a boon and a curse for Naruto in the future. As the battle intensified, the severely weakened Kyuubi made a rash decision. "So, he is here. I must hurry, or all will be lost. I don't know if this will work. The seal forbids me, but it has weakened thanks to the snake, and there's a faint chance this may work," it grumbled, beginning to unleash all its chakra. As the fox unleashed its chakra, the combat in the room stopped. Madara tried to use his Sharingan to subdue the Kyuubi, but because of Naruto's current condition, his Tsukuyomi was useless, and the Kyuubi was unimpeded. The Kyuubi piled on tail upon tail of chakra until it began to seep out through forced cuts from the boy's body. The seal had prevented the Kyuubi from escaping, but the weakening had dampened its effect. The Kyuubi theorized that although it couldn't escape the sealed area, it could force its way out of other parts of the boy's body. The success rate was well below 1%, but the Kyuubi was past caring. It should have cared. The seal reacted, albeit late, and as soon as it sensed a part of the Kyuubi's sentience leaking out, it clamped down. The Kyuubi was now trapped between Naruto and the outside world. Since the seal had not expected this anomaly, it overloaded. Because of the boy's augmented physical characteristics from Orochimaru's experimentation, the Kyuubi was forcibly ejected from Naruto. However, the chakra overload imploded, creating a wormhole that began to suck everything in the area. Because he was unconscious, Naruto was instantly sucked in and vanished, to the horror of everyone. As the force tethering the chakra was cut off, the chakra detonated. The Kyuubi, Orochimaru, and the entire Akatsuki, including Madara and Pain, were annihilated in what would forever be known as the Day of the Black Sun in the shinobi world. The entire rice country was devastated by the explosion. Even though he was gone, the child of prophecy had brought balance to the world. However, his adventures were far from over. His new life was about to begin. As Naruto groggily woke, he was surprised to find himself in a forest. He stood up to get his bearings. His body was still injured and lacerated, but most of the cuts had healed. As he walked, he suddenly stopped. A mile away stood Konoha. But that was impossible, Konoha was dead. Suddenly, he grabbed his head and sat down as a searing pain shot through him. Since Orochimaru's memory modification process had been interrupted, his memories were a jumbled mess. He remembered the torture the villagers inflicted and the murders of Irika and the old man. He also remembered bits and traces of him losing control and slaughtering what appeared to be villagers and shinobi. He stood and stared at the village. He could leave and never return, but that would lead to other problems. He concluded that he had very little information. He had no recollection of what had happened and did not know if he was in the past or another dimension. His most promising option was to enter the village. As he moved forward, he buckled and collapsed. Groaning, his brain was assaulted by memories, feelings, and thoughts of another being. He lay there moaning for an hour until his body stabilized, then got to his knees, panting. The new set of memories were his own. As weird as it was, Naruto had gained the memories of Naruto. So, his initial estimate was correct. He was in the past, or more accurately, a parallel dimension. However, since two souls could not exist in the same plane at the same time, the soul of the apparently weaker Naruto had been absorbed into him. But the Kyuubi was not present in him, and if the younger Naruto's soul was gone, that meant he had perished, and the seal on his body would be activating right now and he sank to the ground as the most massive chakra spike he had ever seen erupted, accompanied by screams and shouts from the village. Naruto could not bear the strain and collapsed. He never saw the Umbu, accompanied by the Hokage, come near him and carry him into the village. In the hospital, Sarutobi paced frantically. When the chakra spike erupted, he feared the demon had ruptured the seal and escaped. He first went to the boy's apartment, but it had burned to cinders. He then traced the boy's chakra signature to the forest outside the wall and raced there. His shock at the boy's new appearance was mitigated by the sheer panic and hysteria gripping the village. As he was lost in his thoughts, the head healer interrupted him. "How is he?" the Hokage asked immediately. "He's tired and has undergone severe strain. However, as far as we can tell, he's completely normal. But his new condition is baffling. We tested him for bloodline capability, considering his new appearance, and the results were surprising," the healer spoke in a hushed tone. "Surprising? How so?" the Hokage asked. "Just take a look," the healer said, handing the charts to the Hokage. As Sarutobi read, he nearly leaped from his seat. "This is," he whispered. "Yes," the healer continued, "that boy is a direct descendant of the second Hokage. He has his exact abilities and his body is showing physical similarities as well. We can't understand how it's possible." The man threw his arms up in exasperation. "Let me see him," the Hokage said and, without waiting for a reply, burst in. He lifted the boy's shirt and gaped. The seal was gone. The old man gulped, channeling some chakra into the spot. Empty. Not a trace of the demon. No residual chakra either. "Hokage-sama," the healer asked, his voice trembling. He knew the implications of such a thing. "The demon is gone. It's truly, completely gone," the Hokage exclaimed loudly. "That's excellent news, Hokage-sama," the man whispered as his eyes began to glow. "This explains it. The demon must have been suppressing his abilities, and with its departure, they've manifested," the Hokage spoke in a whisper. An Umbu entered, stopping near the Hokage. "Hokage-sama, the crowd's getting restless. You must do something," he spoke, almost in a panic. As he began to move forward, Sarutobi stopped, a storm of thoughts swirling in his mind. Rat, he told the umbu wearing the rat mask, wait outside and announce to the crowd that I'll be making a formal announcement in 10 minutes, and allow no oni euro, and I mean no oni euro, into this chamber until then. Execute anyone who tries to circumvent that, regardless of their station. The umbu looked perplexed but departed nonetheless to obey his leader's orders. Doctor, please forgive me for this, Sarutobi muttered as he suddenly knocked the doctor out before the man could even twitch. As the man slumped, Sarutobi began to weave a number of seals and, after finishing, applied the seal to the doctor's forehead. From this moment, you will forget what has happened here, the Hokage spoke softly as the man lay unconscious in his hands. You will forget everything you've learned about this boy's heritage. When asked, you will state that Naruto Uzumaki perished and that the demon departed with him a euro, that is all. Those words were subconsciously imprinted in the doctor's mind. The technique the old Hokage had used was a hidden hypnotism technique taught to him by the first Hokage, one that would subconsciously impart orders to a person, making them compliant. After that, the Hokage again quickly made some seals and summoned Inma, the monkey summon clan king. Sarutobi, what is the meaning of this? Why have you called me now? Inma asked, materializing within the hospital chambers. Inma, time is short, and I need your help. Something of monumental importance has occurred, Sarutobi said quickly, looking at his old friend. I sense that something has occurred on the spiritual plane, Inma spoke as he sniffed the air, and then his eyes fell upon Naruto. Sarutobi, is that? The grizzled ape said in surprise when the Hokage nodded, interrupting him. For some unknown reason, the Kyuubi perished tonight, leaving the boy's body. Furthermore, apart from that, drastic changes have occurred to his physique. He automatically aged by at least 6 years, and above all else, we've learned that he's a descendant of Tobirama sensei, the Hokage spoke in a soft tone. Even Inma's eyes widened. So, you want me to? The ape began when Sarutobi interrupted hastily. Yes. This boy is the last living male of the Senju line as of now, and he cannot be allowed to fall under the sway of the Goikenbane, Council of Village Elders, at any cost. He's suffered enough already without this to add to his plate. I'll announce to the village that the Jinchuriki has perished as well. I want you to take him to the monkey caves now, and then send a message to Tsunade asking her to meet me on the sly. Hurry, Inma, I can't wait any longer. The villagers are getting restless, the Hokage urged, and the ape nodded in agreement. Very well, I shall comply for now, but we need to talk later, Sarutobi, Inma replied softly as he made the seals for the reverse summoning, grabbed the bed Naruto was on, and vanished in a puff of smoke, as Sarutobi left to face the music. The village of Konoha had erupted into celebrations as the news of the Kyuubi's death spread, and spontaneous celebrations broke out everywhere. Once Sarutobi had made his announcement, the roar of joy from the crowd was so loud it could have rent the skies themselves, and the villagers descended into drunken revelry. The council, after hearing Sarutobi's deposition as well as that of the doctor, had accepted the news as well, much to his relief. Danzo had demanded to see the body, but Sarutobi replied by stating that Naruto's body had turned to ash when the Kyuubi had rampaged and there was, unfortunately, no body to show. Although skeptical, Danzo had acquiesced at that moment. Sarutobi had even taken the extra precaution of mind-wiping the members of the Umbu squad who had helped him bring Naruto to the village hospital, and even the Umbu rat as well, as collateral insurance to ensure the truth would stay buried. He and Inma were now the only beings alive that knew Naruto Uzumaki was still alive. That night, as the celebrations began, Sarutobi had deigned to join, and his people had left him alone to mourn the child, whom they knew was close to the old Hokage. As he eyed the celebrations, Sarutobi felt a sickening bile rise in his throat, which he forced down with revulsion. It was said that Konoha was supposedly the beacon of humanity among the great 5 hidden villages, the moral compass that built its foundations on bonds, love, and friendship. The only words that Sarutobi could associate with those that so heavily embraced those notions was utter bullshit. Konoha was no different from its sister villages, for at the end of the day, a shinobi would forever remain a shinobi. All the altruistic word games and hollow reassurances were nothing more than a front to cover the ugliness of the ninja's way. How else could he explain the hypocrisy that ran rampant through Konoha? They worshipped the ground that prodigies from bloodline-wielding clans walked on, their blood giving them the spark of greatness only rarely attainable by other people of their generation, and treated their common peers who were not so lucky with despicable shoddiness. And yet, when it came to the current topic of their celebration, all these noble people, all these kind-hearted people, seemed to lose their warmth and humanity and viewed that person as a being whose worth was less than the dirt they trod upon with their feet. That more than anything, convinced Sarutobi that he had made the right decision when he had sent the boy away with Inma. Suddenly, his reverie was broken as a monkey summoned itself into his chambers. Sarutobi-san, Inmadano has asked me to bring you to his location, now. Tsunadeheim has arrived as well, and one more thing, the child has awakened, the ape spoke in a low, gravelly tone as Sarutobi nodded. Very well, Hiroshi, let us be off then, he said as he laid a hand on the ape's shoulders as it wove the hand seals needed for the reverse summoning, and both Hokage and summon vanished in a plume of smoke. They reappeared on the outskirts of a cave, in a hidden, hilly terrain, which the Hokage instantly recognized as the area near the forests of Otofukugai. As he walked in, he noticed Inma, Tsunade, and another young woman whom he recognized as Shizun, Tsunade's apprentice, standing around a bed upon which the boy was sleeping. "Tsunade, I apologize for this inconvenience, but I hope you understand that I had no other choice," he said, eyeing his student and surrogate daughter. "Hi, sensei," she replied in a quiet tone. Sarutobi looked at her in surprise at her quiet tone. For the first time in a long time, she looked forlorn and confused. He grudgingly realized that it would have to be a shock to her as well. After all, she had believed herself to be the last of her clan, and now, she had learned that her granduncle had a descendant. It was a lot to take in. "Do you have any doubts as to the veracity of my claims?" he asked, and she softly shook her head. "No. I've conducted the tests on the genetic markups myself, and well, he is the descendant of Tobi Jissen. So, I've decided to accept your request and decided to take him in." "But, who is he, sensei, and where did he come from?" Tsunade asked in a vexed tone. It appeared as if she had been holding back that question for a long time, which was apparent from her tone as Sarutobi let out a sigh of relief, knowing that Tsunade would take the boy in after all. "He is or rather was." Sarutobi paused for a minute as he replied, "the Jinhyuriki of the Kyuubi. For some inexplicable reason, the Kyuubi suddenly perished yesterday and left this plane of existence. And even more surprising was that within moments after it left, his physiology and his appearance changed drastically. He actually aged by around 6 years. I've never seen anything like that. Can you explain why that happened?" he asked, looking at Tsunade, who looked stunned. "I don't know, sensei. I may have to conduct some tests myself to ascertain the truth," the slug Sunin admitted. "But still, you haven't answered my question. Who exactly is he? What is his heritage? Whose son is he?" she asked again as Sarutobi shrugged. "We don't know. Minato was the one who made him into a Jinhyuriki, and he died before he could reveal to us who he was. All we found at the scene was a newborn child lying above the dead body of the fourth Hokage, that is all. I'm afraid the secret of his parentage will remain a secret for all time." Sarutobi shrugged as Tsunade narrowed her eyes. "The boy is waking up," Inma interrupted, and everybody turned to see Naruto waking up. As the boy looked up at them all, Sarutobi stepped forward with a kind smile. "Naruto, I would like you to meet Tsunade of the Sunin." The old man introduced the two. Naruto nodded quietly. Tsunade was surprised to see no reaction at all from the boy, but she hid it well. "What brings you here?" the boy asked them quietly. Sarutobi's eyebrows rose. He shrugged. "It has been revealed that you are the descendant of the second Hokage. Tsunade is the last surviving member of that clan, and therefore she is your only living relative. As such, she has come to offer you a home." At this, Naruto stared at the woman. Had he been the Naruto of old, this would have elicited a very different kind of response. Naruto shrugged. "Thank you, but it's not necessary. I don't wish to impose." Sarutobi's eyes rose higher. Something was definitely wrong. This was uncharacteristic of the boy. Tsunade also hid her surprise well. "Naruto, she is your relative. You must stay with her. Your new status brings you enemies as well. You surely understand that, right?" the old man reasoned. Naruto looked at the Sunin. "Who exactly are you supposed to be? My grandmother or something?" he asked her quietly. A vein ticked in Tsunade's temple as Sarutobi hastily began to cough while Shizun turned purple. Inma, on the other hand, gave a hearty laugh. "Of sorts, yes. But you will not call me grandmother," the Sunin glared as she looked at the boy. "Would you rather I call you old woman then?" the boy asked in the same tone as Sarutobi stepped back in surprise. Shizun paled further, praying that her teacher would remain calm. Tsunade eyed the boy. Something was very different about this boy. "Grandmother will be fine. You're the only person who will be allowed to call me that. Remember?" And with that, the Sunin walked out in a huff. Sarutobi spoke up. "Tsunade and I have reached an agreement. As of now, you will reside with her permanently. It would cause unnecessary problems in the village if your newly discovered heritage were to be revealed. It is precisely for this reason that I have secreted you away from the village. The accident, whatever it was, has caused the Kyuubi sealed within you to depart, which as you may notice, has brought many drastic changes in you as well. I've managed to convince the villagers that you perished in that accident as well. As of now, you will gain a new identity and a new name and live as Tsunade's grandson, so that this may never be discovered. Are you okay with this?" the old Hokage slowly asked, as Naruto took in all the information quietly without batting an eyelash. Naruto shrugged. "Whatever you say. It doesn't matter, either way." Sarutobi looked at the boy and nodded and walked out, followed by Inma and Shizun. Outside the room, he was met by the Sunin. "Noticed it, did you?" she asked her teacher as the old man looked at her with his eyes brimming with questions. "Yes. I don't understand. He's never this quiet or unresponsive. He was a massive prankster and loudmouth. However, since the demon left, he's changed too much and too drastically. I don't understand," the old Hokage sighed as he massaged his temple in annoyance. Tsunade spoke quietly. "It's possible that the fox had forcibly repressed his abilities. The traits you described match the behavior sometimes exhibited by foxes. Now that its oppressive presence is gone, perhaps the true nature of the boy is going to come out, she mused. Sarutobi sighed. So, this is what he would have been like without the fox, is that what you're saying? He asked his student, who nodded in reply. Yes. Even I sense something disturbing about the child, Sarutobi. He has no emotions, no reflexive behaviors from what I observed, and that is a dangerous trait in a shinobi. He didn't even react to the change of surroundings, and no other child his age would remain so deadpan at hearing what you explained to him. It appears that it's as if he has lost his humanity itself when the fox departed. You were right in bringing him to the princess. If anyone can heal him, it's her. Inma spoke in agreement as well. Very well, Tsunade. I will leave him in your care. Take care of him, Sarutobi spoke as Tsunade nodded in agreement. You will have to keep his existence a secret. As of now, this boy is the last living male descendant of the Senju clan, and if the Goai Kenbane learns of it, they will not rest until they force you and him back into the village. But I will give you as much time as possible. Do you understand? Sarutobi asked, as Tsunade nodded. You will have to give up your nomadic lifestyle and settle down somewhere remote and inaccessible by any normal means. Can you understand that as well? Sarutobi continued, and she nodded hesitantly. Shizun's face broke into a small smile at that. Well, I must leave now. I can't leave Konoha unattended for long. I will devise a proper new identity for him and send the details to you through Inma. Sarutobi spoke as he walked inside to say goodbye to the boy. It would be another 5 years before they would see each other again. As he left behind him a grandmother and a grandson, who would spend the next 5 years trying to establish a relationship, and during that time, Tsunade would learn just how special her new grandson really was. 5 years later, Konoha would explode with frenzy as the news of the hidden Senju clan heir resonated in its streets. The heir of the Senju clan and the grandson of Tsunade of the Sunin, Senju Reiha, the one who would rock the foundations of the village to its core. As he looked through the window of his office at his village, Sarutobi could not help but sigh in despair. He had been there when the village had just barely formed, learning under the two greatest shinobi in the world as their chosen successor, and he had led it through an era of unprecedented bloodshed and warfare and had brought it to the pinnacle of its prosperity. As he stood there, he allowed his mind to wander over the memories of the people who had so ably aided him in bringing that prosperity to their village. The Senju brothers had founded the village and had brought it great prosperity and stability, but it was he who had preserved it through the bygone ages. He remembered the legends of the past with whom he had worked and of whom he was considered as one as well. Heitake Sakumo, a magnificent shinobi of the likes born once in a generation, who, caught in his own despair, had ended his life prematurely. That had been a tragic waste. It was no secret that Sarutobi had intended to make the man his successor, but his death had left a void, which he had hoped would be fulfilled by his own students, among them the sole legacy of his mentors. And yet, the one in whom he had vested most of his hopes had betrayed him, while the one whom he had neglected had turned out to be his sole crutch in the future to come. Yet, he and Sakumo were the relics of an era that nobody now remembered, and he stayed in the minds of the people only because of the recognition his position brought him, along with the stories of his prowess in a bygone era, of ninjas whose names were forever enshrined in the minds of ordinary people. But then again, from those ninjas who had made a name for themselves, there were those who surpassed understanding and were deemed as legends. Such was the impact that they had upon the world. 3 such individuals were the students of the professor of him, the third Hokage of Konoha, who was recognized for knowing and actually using all of Konoha's techniques, which numbered in the thousands. The 3 students of his team, unlike any other team in Konoha, each became a great individual force and tremendously powerful, each displaying different talents, yet becoming almost equally strong, and even then, never as powerful as they were together, for which they were named the Sunin by Sanshou no Hanzo, a legend among legends, and the only surviving enemy shinobi of his time still alive. The 2 of them were contemporaries and rivals themselves, although their rivalry was but a pale imitation of the greatest shinobi rivalry of all time, of that of Hashirama Senju and Uchiha Madara. Later on, when the Sunin searched for and contacted the particular animals that now distinguished them from their other comrades and gained those animals' blessing to summon their kind, that name evolved and they became known as the legendary 3 ninjas, or the Densetsu no Sunin. Since then they had been called as such: Tsunade, the slug tamer, or Akimaru, the snake handler, and Jiraiya, the toad hermit. Since then, they had always been the Sunin, the 3, the great summoners. Better together than apart, for together they were a force to be reckoned with. What? Sarutobi questioned himself as he looked out his window at the Hokage monument. Would the remainder of his students be known as now? Would they be called the legendary 2 ninjas? The Ninin? Would Orochimaru be remembered as anything other than a traitorous snake? Or would that particular name fade into the world's history books as a legend, nothing more than a memory of a time when a team of ninja as a whole earned such respect? Maybe, just maybe, when future generations speak of the Sunin, they will speak of them with awe and wonder, remembering them as they once were, as 3 parts of a whole, and not as a friendship shattered by betrayal. Chuckling softly at the direction of his thoughts, the Sannin simply relit his pipe and took a puff, watching the morning light stream over the treetops of Konohagakure and into his office, illuminating the spacious interior. Truly, it was no small wonder that so many great shinobi came from this very village, even when peace was so abundant within it. And then his eyes fell upon the Hokage monument, eerily bathing the face of his successor in a halo of golden light. Namikaze Minato, the student of his student, and quite possibly the one man who reminded him of Hashirama-sama himself. An outstanding ninja in every way, he was the one who had single-handedly ended the Third Shinobi War and saved Konoha. Recognizing his worth, the Third had made him the Fourth, and for a brief moment, had enjoyed a break, with his hard-earned but much-deserved retirement. And yet again, when disaster struck, Minato rose to the occasion magnificently, sacrificing himself and saving the village and the world in the process. And yet, it was upon him that it had fallen to preserve Konoha once more. He chuckled wanly. He should have been called the Preserver instead of the Professor. It seemed he was the one who was called every time to preserve the status quo, and he was getting tired of it. As of now, the power of the village was waning, although only a few in the village knew of it. The Kuwabai's attack had severely dented the village's power. Minato's sacrifice had saved the village, but at a terrible cost. Only the myth and reputation of Konoha's legends and past deeds acted as a deterrent against any hostile activities, but it was a thin deterrent. He needed to find a new leader, one who would bring the village back together from the internal strife that was plaguing it. As it was, tensions between the Uchiha clan and the remaining members of the Gowai Kenbane were running high, and meanwhile, regular skirmishes were occurring with Kumagakure on a weekly basis. He recognized the signs. He was getting too old, and he needed to choose the Godame quickly. He would not wait too long and, because of it, leave the village vulnerable. Jiraiya would not be suitable, and his intelligence network would crumble if he abandoned it. It seemed that Tsunade would have to return after all, and if the rest of the council opposed it, citing her absence, he had a fait accompli ready to offer. The last heir of the Senju clan, who would come with his grandmother and become the Godame's right hand, just as Sakumo had been to him. He sat down and began to draft a letter to the daimyo. He had a lot to accomplish, and he hoped that Tsunade would spare Enma when he went to deliver the message. Within days, news spread like wildfire across Konohagakure no Sato. Their village would soon have a new Hokage, as the council had finally backed the Sandaime selection and announced that the inauguration of the 5th-generation Fire Shadow of the Hidden Leaf would take place in 5 days, when Sarutobi would hand over the reins of the village to his former student, the Slug Princess and one of the Densetsu no Sunin, Tsunade Senju. In his office, Sarutobi was busy signing some documents when the telltale sound of an Umbu squad materializing inside his office was heard. Without looking up, Sarutobi spoke, "Please remove your masks, for this next mission will require you to masquerade as Jonin in public." The Hokage spoke softly as rustling sounds came up. Sarutobi looked up to see his best Umbu squad standing at rigid attention with their masks removed. Heite Kakashi, the current commander of the Umbu, and his protégés. Uzuki Uejo, a young and promising Kenjutsu practitioner. Tenzo, the lone survivor of Orochimaru and his genetic mishaps, and the only Mokutan user alive to date, and finally, the newest prodigy of the village, the 13-year-old Uchiha Itachi. "Hokage-sama, we are ready for our mission," Kakashi spoke softly as the Hokage looked up. "Kakashi, for this mission, you shall defer to another ninja who shall act as your superior," the Hokage spoke without preamble while the eyes of Kakashi's subordinates rose for a fraction. Someone with enough rank to command the commander of the Umbu? But who could? "This mission will be led by my apprentice, Jiraiya of the Densetsu no Sunin," the Hokage concluded as the eyes of everyone went wide. To work with a Sunin was the dream of almost every shinobi in Konoha. "I am honored, Hokage-sama, that you and Jiraiya-sama found me and my team worthy," Kakashi replied softly. The other members of his team remained silent, but their eyes revealed the tale. To be chosen by a Sunin to perform a mission, never again would they doubt that they were the best of Konohagakure no Sato. "Your mission, Kakashi, is to rendezvous with Jiraiya near Otofukugai, from where you will accompany him to retrieve and safely escort back to Konoha, the Godame Hokage, Tsunade of the Sunin, my other apprentice," the Hokage concluded, and even Kakashi's eyebrows rose a fraction. His team was by now standing still, realizing that this might possibly be the most high-profile mission of their career. As you know, tension with Kumagakure is at an all-time high, and we suspect that Kumagakure may try to attack Tsunade if this news gets out. That is why, you cannot go out as Umbu, because that will be tantamount to declaring publicly what you are up to. You must keep this mission as low scale as possible, but I don't think that the possibility of anybody attacking you when Jiraiya is with you is high, and it will be even less when Tsunade joins you. Attacking two of the Sunin is suicide for anyone unless they are a cage themselves, and that is disregarding the fact that you all will be present, the Hokage concluded. "Hi, Hokage-sama," Kakashi nodded, chuckling to himself as he imagined the possibility of someone attacking a party consisting of Jiraiya, Tsunade and himself, not to mention his team. "You will depart this night, prepare and outfit yourselves accordingly," the Hokage ordered as the team left his office, immediately via Shunshin. Uchiha Clan Enclave. Fugaku Uchiha's home. "As expected of my son," Fugaku spoke proudly as he eyed Itachi who knelt in front of him, "you have been accepted into the Umbu, and that too as a member of the squad of the Umbu commander himself. the Uchiha clan head spoke as he eyed his eldest son as if he was a prized commodity. Meanwhile, young Suzuki Uchiha, the second son of the Uchiha clan head, was trying futilely to gain the attention of his father but was failing miserably. If Fugaka noticed those attempts, he paid no heed to it. Itaki, as a clan head, I am privy to what this mission is, and I need not impress upon you the importance of this mission. It is your luck that for your evaluation mission, you have landed a mission which many Umbu would give an arm and a leg to be assigned to. I have no doubts that the success of this mission will go a long way in helping our clan integrate with the rest of the village, which is why I have decided to ask Hokage-sama to permit me to accompany you along as well. His father spoke in a soft tone as Itaka nodded softly. Furthermore, this is a great opportunity for you to make an impression on the person you are escorting. Do you understand? Fugaka spoke in a quiet tone as his eyes morphed to reveal the Sharingan. I do, Itaka spoke softly, but I am afraid that I will have to refuse this mission. He spoke with a soft smile as he looked at his father, who almost stumbled in shock. Are you out of your mind? Fugaka nearly screamed, his jowls quivering with anger as his eyes flashed red. Itaka, do you not understand the significance of this mission? You are the pipe connecting the village to the clan, did you forget? He spoke softly as Itaka nodded. I do, however, tomorrow is an important day for me as well. Tomorrow Suzuki begins at the academy and it is the most important day of his life, and it is necessary for someone from the family to be with him. And if you are also going to be on the mission, then he will be left alone. Therefore, I will request the Hokage to let you go in my stead. Surely, even you two must have received the notification from the academy, after all, isn't that so, father? Itaka spoke softly as Fugaka stiffened. Itaka continued in the same light tone, after all, missions will always arise, but I have only one brother, and this day will come in his life only once. Itaka spoke as the young boy looked at him in gratitude. Very well, I will go to the academy, you concentrate on the mission. Fugaka spoke softly as Suzuki's face lit up in happiness. Thank you, Nii-san, Suzuki spoke as soon as their father left. Thank you very much, the boy spoke again, but Itaki could detect the faint resentment in the boy's mind, that their father favored him more. Father can be difficult, Suzuki, but that doesn't mean that he ignores you. You see, the reason why he is so interested in this mission is because it is going to change the entire village. That is why, Itaka spoke softly as the boy's eyes widened. Wow, what mission is that? Suzuki asked in wonder as his eyes widened. You know I can't tell you, Suzuki, Itaka spoke with a sigh as his brother pouted. Fine, the elder Uchiha sighed as he saw his brother's pouting face. It will soon be public anyway, however, you must keep it a secret until I return, Itaka warned as the eager young boy nodded quickly. I am going with my team to bring the Godame Hokage back to Konoha. In 5 days, the Sandaime will retire and the village will have a new Hokage. I am going with my Umbu team to escort the new Hokage back to the village, Itaka spoke softly as the boy's eyes widened. His already sycophantic adoration of his elder brother shot to hitherto unseen levels as he heard the kind of mission his brother would be going on. 2 days later, near Otofukugai. Near Otofukugai, Kakashi and his team, dressed as normal civilians, were sitting quietly in a bar with Jiraiya, who had met up with them there. It was the first time that Itake had met a Sunin, but as he analyzed the man who sat in front of him, the youngster realized that the stories did not do the man true justice. His chakra was so potent that for a second, his Sharingan had been blinded, and the only other persons with whom that had occurred were the Hokage and his father, but even they paled in comparison to Jiraiya. Alright, brats, Jiraiya began with a thin smile as he noticed the Umbu squad looking at him with disguised awe, while Kakashi lazed around, reading his book. He and Kakashi went back a long time, it came with tradition after all. He had trained Minato, Minato had trained Kakashi, and as such Kakashi was inner circle. Besides, he was Sakumo's kid, and that counted as well. The terrain we are going into is very rough, and although I would have preferred to do this alone, I too agree with Sarutobi-sensei that having you around would be useful. Kumonin are getting too frisky in these areas. So, know this, you are here to play escort, that is all, and I warn you beforehand, keep your mouth shut. If you mouth off in front of Tsunadeheim, that will be the last thing you will ever do. Keep your mouth shut, and your ears open, and everything will go smoothly. Jiraiya finished as the members of the Umbu squad nodded gingerly. How far do we need to go, Jiraiya-sama? Uo asked quietly. She was all raring to go and meet the woman who was known worldwide as the greatest kunoichi to be ever born. It is about 30 miles to the west, in the canyons of the mountains bordering the Land of Iron, near the Three Gorges Hill, a very remote and very inhospitable area, and very deadly. Jiraiya spoke softly. The eyes of the others widened. The Land of Iron? Isn't that the samurai land? Kakashi asked quietly as the others fell silent. Samurai land? Itaki asked in confusion after seeing everybody else fall silent, unaware of the significance of that statement. Unlike everybody else. The Land of Iron, Jiraiya began as he looked at Itaki, is a land that is formed by the Three Mountains area, and it is a neutral nation with a strong military on par with the 5 nations. They have no ninjas of their own, and the ninjas of the elemental lands avoid that nation as well. Their lands are guarded zealously by samurai, who are numerous and strong. Jiraiya spoke softly. Then why did Tsunade-sama choose such an inhospitable and inaccessible land to live in? Itaki asked quietly. You will know when we reach the area, Jiraiya spoke enigmatically, and that was that. Soon, their party left for the land of iron, with Jiraiya regaling them all along the way through anecdotes of the past, including him and Tsunade, as well as stories about him and the Yondaime, when he was his student. Needless to say, the journey progressed in a much jollier mood than they had expected. 9 hours later, the journey had been arduous, and the path was extremely difficult. Narrowly winding, strewn with jagged rocks and deep crevices, and many dangerous plants lying about, it was clear that this was a very remote area. And a very inhospitable one, as well, which raised the question as to why a ninja of Tsunade's caliber and pedigree would deign to live in such an inhospitable area in the minds of the Umbu members. Meanwhile, the shrubs at the end of the path rustled, and instantly the hands of all the Umbu members went to their weapons as they took guard. Suddenly, a person stumbled out of the shrubs. It was a woman in her late 20s, wearing a chainmail shirt and a black kimono. She had brunette hair, and her gait gave away the evidence of her shinobi training. She was, they all noted, rather plain-looking, but attractive in her own way. Ah, Shizun, good to see you again, Jiraiya spoke in a warm tone, at which the Umbu released the hold on their weapons by a fraction. Who, Jiraiya-sama, is that you? The woman spoke in surprise as she recognized the Toad Sunin. And, is that, Kakashi? She asked in wonder as she eyed his subordinates. Her cheeks took a rosy tint as she looked at Kakashi, who waved haphazardly in his usual manner. Everyone, Jiraiya spoke for the benefit of the Umbu who were still eyeing the brunette with disguised caution. This is Shizun, the apprentice of Tsunade. She has been staying with her for more than 20 years now. You can all relax now, we are here, Jiraiya spoke as the Umbu nodded and slowly bowed to the medic. Shizun, I presume that you know why we are here? Jiraiya asked the young woman who nodded with a smile. Hi, Madano brought the message 2 days back, we have been busy preparing for it, but... She stopped as hesitation entered her voice and looked at the Sunin. What is wrong, Shizun? Jiraiya glared, and she wilted under his stare. Well, you see, for the last few weeks, we have been having some problems with a group of bandits, Shizun spoke softly as the eyes of the ninja hardened. Well, you see, they are all Ronin, and they have become quite a nuisance in these areas. However, they made the terrible mistake of offending Tsunade-sama, who killed their leader and sent his head to them as a message and warning. She spoke with a quiet tone as the eyes of the Umbu widened. However, because of that, those bandits have become incensed, and as such, She paused as she looked down and clawed the ground with her feet. Jiraiya cleared his throat, at which the girl gulped and continued hastily, well, because of that, they waited for a time when we were not at home, and razed our house to the ground, and Tsunade-sama is rather angry at that. She spoke quietly as the eyes of everyone widened. Shizun-san, where are these bandits? Itaki asked softly as she looked at the young shinobi in surprise. These bandits have dared to attack the home of the Godaime Hokage, and for that crime, their life is forfeit. Where are they located? Uajo asked softly as Shizun fidgeted even more. The white-haired stranger. A sudden, loud crack of thunder shattered the calm. Jiraiya's eyes instantly went wide. He's gone after them, hasn't he? He asked Shizun softly, and she nodded. I tried to find him before he reached those Ronin, but I failed, Shizun spoke quietly. Let's get to him first, we'll go to Tsunadeheim later, or is she with him too? Jiraiya asked quickly, his playful demeanor gone, replaced by a serious expression. No, she's at the campsite. We were about to leave for Konoha anyway, but he decided to deal with those Ronin first. He was away on a training trip, you see, so he didn't know about this. But when he found out, things just spiraled out of control, she said as another loud crack of lightning echoed. Let's go, Jiraiya said without another word, heading toward the sound of the lightning. Kakashi, Shizun, and the others followed silently. As they got closer, Jiraiya signaled for them to stop. They all took defensive positions, kunao and swords drawn, and watched the field. In the visible clearing, a fight was happening, or rather, was about to happen. Around 70 rogue samurai, with swords drawn and enhanced by chakra, were surrounding one person. At his feet were 2 smoking corpses. It was now clear why they had heard the sounds of lightning from this area. The samurai all wore identical body armor and helmets with masks covering their faces, and they had formed a complete circle around the person. The person, they noticed, was standing still, without a trace of fear in his eyes. He was a young man, about 20 years old, with white hair tied in a long ponytail that reached the middle of his back. He wore a chainmail shirt under a white hakama and white pants, along with wooden sandals. His forehead and forearms were wrapped in strips of white cloth as if they were bandages. His outfit was completed by a thin sword that hung on his back and a shuriken holster strapped to his left shoulder. Damn, we're too late, there's no stopping him now, Jiraiya muttered as he took in the scene. Jiraiya-sama, Kakashi began, but the Sunin raised his hands. Be quiet, Kakashi, and watch. You're about to see a show unlike any other, Jiraiya said softly, looking at the scene. The others, if they found the conversation strange, stayed silent and did not comment. They noticed that Shizun didn't seem worried, but rather annoyed. Meanwhile, in the clearing, the assembled Ronin yelled and charged at the white-haired man. It was over in seconds. The young man moved, and before the observers could comprehend what had happened, all the attackers were on the ground, dead, with bodies and limbs scattered around, covering the ground in a wet slick of blood. Yet, the young man's white clothes were perfectly clean as he stood still, looking at the carnage with a detached expression. The Umbu were utterly shocked by the young man's skill. They watched the scene with their mouths agape. Fast, very fast. Even with the Sharingan, I couldn't see when he drew his sword, and I could only count half the strikes he delivered, Kakashi said softly. One look at Itake made it clear that the Uchiha prodigy had a similar experience and was unable to follow the battle completely. Tenzo and Uejo, on the other hand, had not been able to sense as much as they had, but it looked like Shizun and Jiraiya had been able to follow the entire battle. Oh, 20 seconds to handle 70 men. It seems he's finally reached a decent level, Jiraiya admitted softly, looking at the young man with something akin to pride in his eyes. Decent? This was a decent level to the Sunin, the others thought in disbelief, eyeing the Sunin and the approaching young man with newfound respect. This is the level I must reach if I am to succeed in my mission, Itake thought stiffly, looking at the young man in the clearing with calculating eyes. Who is that young man, Jiraiya-sama? Uejo asked in a somber tone, eyeing the youngster walking toward them with respect in her eyes. His name is Reiha, Senju Reiha, the grandson of Tsunadeheim and the direct descendant of the second Hokage, as well as the last living heir of the legendary Senju clan of the forest, Jiraiya spoke softly, as the visitor's eyes widened in comical awe, staring at the approaching youngster with morbid fascination. Kumagakur, Reikage's office. So, it's decided, then, Yujito asked quietly. The Reikage looked at the younger woman, knowing the reason for the plan's formation. He admitted to himself that it was a good plan, an effective one. Its boldness had elements of brilliance. But Yujito had allowed personal feelings to influence her judgment. That wasn't so good, as his brother was prone to saying. He turned to the window and watched the dark night covering the countryside of Kumagakur in a pale white glow as he thought about the consequences of what they were about to attempt. Yes. Kanahagakur no Sato, Kumo's safe house, 2 days later. The two men hunched over the enlarged map, flanked by several 8x10 photographs. This is going to be the hard one, the one on the right said. I can't help with this. What's the problem, Nakamura, the one on the left asked, even though he could see it. By asking, he could assess the skill of his new associate. He had never worked with a rookie before, and as such, he was an unknown quantity, at least in an operational sense. He always comes out by the east gate, here. This street, as you can see, is a dead end. He has to go straight west or turn north when he comes out. He has done both. This street here is wide enough to do the job, but this one it's too narrow, and it leads straight toward the Uchiha Military Police HQ. Going that way is suicide. That means the only sure spot is right here, but even if we carry out the operation, getting out is going to be a bitch. They'll have the village in lockdown in minutes, Nakamura pointed out. Both these streets are narrow and always have pedestrian traffic on both sides. This building is apartments. These are houses, expensive ones. There isn't much pedestrian traffic here, strangely enough. Your guy has to do this alone, and he's got to be quick on his feet. Otherwise, he's toast, Shigeo-san. How does he get out? Shigeo asked. It's just 3 streets away from the safe house, and once he gets here, he can use a reverse summoning seal that will be placed here. If he makes it inside, he can activate it and teleport himself to Kumo and be home free, Nakamura said softly. Why not catch him somewhere else? Shigeo asked softly. Nakamura shook his head. Too hard. The roads are too crowded in the area, and the Umbu are always on the prowl. It would be too easy to lose him. You've seen the foot traffic, Shigeo-san, and he never takes the exact same route twice. If you want my opinion, you should split the operation and do it one part at a time, like Yujito-sama suggested. In the next moment, the table was flipped over as Nakamura found Shigeo's hand gripping his neck. Don't you ever call that whore Yujito-sama in my presence, you understand, the man spoke in a guttural tone as his eyes turned bloodshot. That whore, how dare they tell me to take my orders from her? She's not even a fucking human being, and yet that overgrown mastodon orders me to take my orders from that wench. The man ranted as he loosened his grip on Nakamura's neck. Hey, calm down, Shigeo-san, okay, relax, take a deep breath. Nakamura tried to calm the man, hoping desperately that the enraged Jonin wouldn't kill him. Listen, and listen well, Nakamura, we'll do it my way, not how that wench wants it. Shigeo spoke harshly as the rookie immediately nodded in agreement. As the older man walked out, he slowly wiped the sweat from his brow. He had to inform Yujito immediately. Meanwhile, on the ground, the pictures of Hyuga Hayashi lay beneath his feet, trampled beyond recognition. Uchiha Military Police Headquarters, Konoha, the following day. In the halls of the Uchiha Military Police HQ, Sergeant Yashiro Uchiha, the deputy head of the Konoha Military Police, walked down the double line of military policemen. His long-practiced eyes missed nothing. One man had lint on his green, high-necked chinen vest. Another's shoes needed a little more work, and two needed haircuts. You could barely see their scalps under the quarter-inch hair. All in all, there wasn't much to be displeased with. Everyone would have passed a normal inspection, but this wasn't a normal institution, and normal rules didn't apply. Yashiro was no longer a screamer. He'd moved past that. His corrections were more fatherly now, but they still carried the force of a command from God. He finished the inspection and dismissed the guard detail to allow them to move on to their patrols. Though he didn't know it, he was about to have a very interesting day. At the same time, in the Kumo's safe house, Konoha, Shigeo assembled the mercenaries he had hired and assigned their duties. Although he and Nakamura were the only illegal agents in Konoha, they couldn't afford to be reckless. These men were disposable thugs, lured by the promise of easy money. As such, they had been tasked with creating a diversion that he would use to complete his mission. Renji, yes, Shigeo-san. Renji Abarai, known as Renji, hadn't stopped studying the maps and photographs of the targets since he had entered the safe house. He was one of the most experienced assassins in the Nuke Nin world. Hiring him hadn't been easy, but it was worth it. Shigeo planned to use him as the main diversion-making part of his plan, thereby allowing him to carry out his task. Assassinating a man of Hyuga Hayashi's caliber wasn't an easy task after all. Exactly at 10:20, you understand. Hi. Near the Uchiha Military Police HQ, time 10 o'clock. The watch in front of the police HQ changed at 10, and the new guard on station was young Inabi Uchiha, the nephew of Sergeant Yashiro Uchiha. As such, he was quite enthusiastic about his duty, hoping to one day make a name for himself like his famous relatives, Uchiha Shisui and Uchiha Itaki. Caught up in the solemnity of his duty, he remained in the guardhouse and didn't notice a man walk past the guardhouse and enter a cafe on the opposite side of the street. It was 10:05 by then. 50 feet away, an elderly lady who observed it from a hidden vantage point walked toward the guardhouse and calmly called out Inabi, who looked surprised at being called. Yes, madam, Inabi asked with slight curiosity as he greeted the old woman politely. Well, young man, I'd like to ask how you military police can allow a dangerous criminal like that hoodlum over there to walk around freely, she asked in a chiding tone as Inabi's eyes widened. What criminal? What do you mean? The young man asked the old woman, who hit him on the head with her handbag. That red-headed man sitting over there by the window. Honestly, you young boys are all so inept. I'm going to complain to Fugaku-kun, she trilled as she waved her hands and pointed toward Renji, who was sitting near the window, calmly sipping a cup of tea. Inabi was now scared. If this old bat knew the clan head and complained, his career would end before it began. Please wait here, madam, the young man said hastily as he ran inside to call his uncle. As the young man ran inside, the old woman walked to a corner and slowly used the shunshin to leave the area, a thin smirk gracing her face. Nii Yujito's mission was going to be handled by a government agency of Kanahagakure no Sato. Around the same time, near the east gate of the Hyuga mansion. Meanwhile, near the empty street at the exit of the Hyuga mansion, Shigeo was waiting impatiently for Hyuga Hayashi to exit the compound. He saw that the man was walking alone, without any guards from the branch house accompanying him. What luck! We'll never get a better chance than this, the Kumo agent told himself and waited patiently for the man to finish speaking with the guards at the gate and to move a little further. After a couple of minutes, the man finished speaking with the guards and moved out. About bloody time, Shigeo growled as he finally saw the man walk out. In his haste and excitement, he didn't notice the one minor detail that could have saved his life. The man he was targeting was wearing a forehead protector, when it was universally known that Hyuga Hayashi never wore a forehead protector, ever. Because of his misjudgment, things were about to take a very drastic turn in the future. Why the hell is he so late? Shigeo growled as he and his men got ready. He's a clan head, boss, sometimes these things happen, one of the men he had hired offered, for which he was rewarded with a glare. Let's roll. It was 10:10. In front of the HQ, 10:12. Well, where is that old lady? Yashiro asked in irritation, as his nephew, Inabi, had dragged him out of his office. She's gone, damn it, the old crone said she knew the captain, she must have gone to complain to the captain, Inabi swore as the older man raised his eyebrows. Well, where is this so-called criminal she wanted off the streets? Yashiro asked sarcastically, at which Inabi pointed out Renji, who was still sitting in the cafe, drinking tea as if nothing had happened. As Yashiro looked at the man, his eyes went so wide that his eyebrows shot up into his hairline. Renji Abarai. What the fuck is that asshole doing here? How the hell did he get inside Konoha in the first place? Yashiro wondered aloud as Inabi loosened the flap of his holster, seeing the look on his uncle's face. He called out to a patrolman who was standing guard at the gate and dragged him aside. Go and get the entire department outside, now, he ordered as the terrified patrolman ran inside. What do you mean by the entire department? Inabi asked in shock, eyeing his uncle, who had activated his fully matured Sharingan. Seriously, was that red-haired dude such a big deal? Had the old crone been right? Was he some sort of super criminal? Inabi would never know the magnitude of his error. Everybody, now, the older man nearly screamed as a few passers-by stopped and looked at the old man in surprise. Fortunately, Renji missed that altercation. Unfortunately, that would be the cause of his death. Inabi, go get Shisui, now. I want him here, ASAP, Yashiro ordered Inabi, who vanished instantly in a shunshin. 5 minutes later, Renji Abarai found himself surrounded by Uchiha Shisui, Uchiha Yashiro, and the entire Uchiha military police, while the frightened patrons of the cafe scrambled away. He looked at the time. It was 20 past 10. He had indeed caused a diversion, only it had not gone the way he had intended. At the same time, near the Hyuga mansion, as the Hyuga clan head walked ahead, 5 flash tags suddenly erupted in front of him, blinding him for a scant second. At that moment, an exploding tag went off in front of him, and he was blown back, broken and clearly bleeding. As Shigeo and his men prepared to flee the area, they noticed a commotion at the Hyuga gate. He nearly had a heart attack when he saw the Hyuga clan head and a few members of the Hyuga clan racing toward them and the down man. 2 of them. What was? He didn't have any time to think, as he vanished using the shunshin, leaving his hired thugs to deal with the Hyugas. As he reappeared inside the safe house, he was further shocked to his core when he saw Nakamura and Yujito teleporting away using the one-time reverse summoning seal. Just as she disappeared, Yujito gave him a cheery wave. At that moment, Shigeo realized that he had been screwed by someone he had considered his inferior. When Hyuga Hayashi noticed his twin brother being brought down by an explosion created by what appeared to be a group of assassins, he raced forward, abandoning all pretense. The ringleader vanished using a shunshin, but his men were still there. One of them had drawn a sword and was about to plunge it into Hisashi's bleeding head. He never got the chance. Hayashi's gentle fist strike blew his heart right out of his body in a spectacular shower of blood, erupting out of his back like a fountain. It fell on the ground, still beating, before it stilled, and the man crashed down, deader than a stone. The rest of the thugs went down like moths in a flame against the other Hyuga clan members, and it was all over as quickly as it began. The Umbu squad that teleported in was treated to a rare sight. The Hyuga clan head and his men were trying to stabilize a wounded man, who, upon inspection, was revealed to be his brother. They grimaced. This was going to be a real shitstorm. They began to move out and scan the area for residual explosives and any stragglers who might have stayed back to watch the proceedings. And when they did, they found that the backlash of the explosion had killed some civilians who were walking on the other side of the road as well. They swore. This was definitely not a good day. Damn, and the mess hall had prepared a feast in honor of the new Hokage's arrival, and it would seem that they would miss it. The guy who did this was in for a whole lot of trouble. Ibiki would tear them a new one over this, in Kakashi's absence, and the new Hokage was due to arrive today, Jesus, and this wasn't how they intended to make a good impression on her, was it? Yep, things were pretty bad, all right. However, they all were about to realize that in the next few hours, things would get far worse before they got better. Half an hour later, headquarters, interrogation block. Renji Abarai was escorted into the interrogation room, his hands and feet bound, and was surrounded by 3 Uchiha clan members assigned to the mission as interrogators: Uchiha Yashiro, Uchiha Shisui, and Uchiha Inabi. Well, let's get started, Inabi, the rookie, said as Yashiro scowled at him. We'll wait for the Umbu to arrive. It's standard procedure. 3 policemen and an Umbu, plus this scumbag is actually important enough to warrant an Umbu presence, the sergeant said, eyeing the prisoner with distaste. Just then, the doors opened and Fugaku Uchiha, the head of the military police, walked in, flanked by an Umbu operative. So, what's going on, gentlemen? The captain asked, without any introduction, as he looked at his subordinates. Shisui looked at Yashiro, who nodded and began. Sir, Guardsman Inabi Uchiha here was approached by a senior citizen who filed a rather loud complaint against this individual. Since the subject was unknown to him, Inabi called me in to report. I identified him as Renji Abarai, a B-ranked rogue ninja from Takigakur and the Land of Wood. We brought him in, and so far he has refused to speak with us, sir, Yashiro said, giving his formal report. What did he have on him? The Umbu asked quietly. Well, sir, he was carrying a ton of explosive tags, so we assume he was here to cause a major terrorist act, on the orders of his contractors, along with kunao, shuriken, and some poison gas pellets, you know, the usual stuff, the sergeant said, scowling. Alright, Abarai-san, could you please state your objective in coming here? This might go a long way in lessening your sentence, the Umbu operative, who was wearing a cat mask, spoke curtly. Renji continued to give him the silent treatment. The Umbu sighed, look, buddy, I'm doing this for your own good, okay? Otherwise, it's the Umbu interrogation cells for you. You'd better start talking, pal, the Umbu are in a terrible mood tonight. There's not a person alive who wants to mess with Ibiki Marino today. You'd be safer with, say, Orochimaru, than with him. I'm doing this for your own good, believe it, the man spoke softly as the Uchihas who were watching him narrowed their eyes in suspicion. What do you mean, sir? Yashiro Uchiha asked quietly. His senses were on high alert, and the old policeman knew it was not a good sign. He had a feeling that something had gone wrong, and his feelings were usually correct, most of the time. Someone tried to kill Hyuga Hayashi just a little while ago, but they missed and hit his twin brother instead, and they messed that up as well, and blew up some civilians along the way. The Hyugas took out all the assassins except one guy, who got away. The village is on lockdown right now on orders from the Hokage. The Umbu on patrol are really angry. You'd better start praying, buddy, because if you don't talk, I have no problem in handing you over to Ibiki, you understand? You know about Ibiki Marino, right? The Umbu asked quietly as Renji gulped. He knew who Ibiki was, all right, he was the boogeyman of the rogue ninja operating around Konoha. Are you serious? Inabi asked with his jaw wide open, while even Shisui stared in curiosity at the Umbu. However, the look of stony silence on Fugaku's face confirmed it. It was serious, all right. Suddenly, Yashiro connected the dots. Sir, you might want to call an Ibiki-san after all. We caught this guy around the time this mess happened. And he was armed to cause some major damage, which would have made a nice diversion for that mess. Maybe he's a part of this event, and maybe he was hired to do that very thing, to help those assassins get away. Yashiro spoke quickly, while Renji began to sweat. Wait a minute, is that true, pal? Because if it is, you're in real deep trouble, Sonny. You'd better tell me something if you want to save your neck. The Umbu spoke gruffly as he glared at Renji, but Renji still remained silent. Well, looks like we might have to call an Ibiki-san. After all, the Umbu rose when Inabi stopped him. Everyone turned to look at the rookie, who signaled them to be silent. Umbu-san, you said that the Hyuga head was attacked, but they missed and got his brother, right? If that's the case, then let's hand this jerk over to the Hyuga clan. I mean, they've got a real reason to get the truth out of this guy. It's their clan these jerks hit after all. The youngster spoke softly, while Renji became dead still, which did not go unnoticed by the others. Catching on to his nephew's ploy, Yashiro retorted, are you out of your mind, boy? The mood they're in currently, those Hyugas will eat this punk alive. You want that on your conscience? He asked in a growl while everybody became silent. Yes, I think your idea has merit. Inabi Fugaku spoke for the first time as the others nodded hesitantly as well. Seeing that, Renji finally broke. 10 minutes later, the and the Umbu had the address of Shigeo's safe house in their hands. Another 5 minutes later, Renji Abarai, a rogue ninja, was declared officially dead in the records of the Uchiha military police. Konoha Medical Center, 1 hour after the attack. Hayashi Hyuga rushed through the entrance of the shock trauma center and identified himself at the reception desk, whose attendant directed him to a waiting room where, she said firmly, he would be notified as soon as there was anything to report. The sudden change from action to inaction disoriented Hayashi greatly. He stood at the entrance of the waiting room for a few minutes, his mind a complete blank as it struggled with the situation. The Shock Trauma Center, known as the first response to all major medical emergencies, had begun at the end of the Second War as the dream of a brilliant, aggressive, and supremely arrogant medic now known worldwide as Senju Tsunade, the greatest medical ninja of all time. The department had forced its way forward by cutting a bloody path through all bureaucratic and political hurdles, sometimes literally, to emerge as the pinnacle of medical expertise in the entire world. It had blossomed into a stunning, legendary success. Shock trauma was the cutting edge of emergency medical technology, and the best medic ninja came out of this division. It had already pioneered many techniques for critical care, and in doing so had brutally overturned many historical principles of conventional medicine, which had not endeared its founder to her medical colleagues. That would have been true in any field, and shock trauma's founder had not helped the process at all with her sharp and outspoken opinions. Her greatest, but unacknowledged, crime, of course, was being right in nearly every detail. And while she had left, dejected, after suffering from the death of her fiancé, in her absence, the department still stood as a monument of testimony to her brilliance in the medical field. A shock trauma assignment was the dream of every aspiring medic in the village. But will they be good enough? Hayashi asked himself. He lost all track of time, waiting, afraid to look at the time, afraid to think about the significance of time's passing. He thought about the events, remembering that in his arrogance, blinded by his position, he had ignored his brother, who was now fighting for his life. He was not naive, and he realized that it was he who had been targeted, but it was his brother who had paid the price. His brother had been dealt a bad hand by fate. A few seconds of difference, and it might have been that he would have switched roles with his brother. That humbled him, making him realize the pain and suffering his brother went through on a daily basis, and it made him feel helpless and ashamed. For the first time, he cursed the tradition of his own clan which carelessly divided family as if they were mere toys. Sarutobi, who watched the clan head from the side, shook his head in sorrow. He had seen such things happen, far too many times, but they hurt all the same. Soon, the door opened, and a medic came in. Hayashi-sama, I'm here to tell you the condition of your brother, he spoke as he looked at the distraught Hyuga clan head. Your brother is in critical condition, the man spoke bluntly, seeing no way out of explaining the situation. Hayashi nearly choked with his next breath. We have been working on him for the past 5 hours. We had to remove the spleen. That's okay, you can live without the spleen. The medic didn't mention that the spleen was an important part of the body's defense against infection, and continued, the liver had a moderately extensive star-shaped fracture and damage to the main artery that feeds blood into the organ. We had to remove about a quarter of the liver again. There's no problem with that, and I think we fixed the arterial damage, and I think the repair will hold. The liver is important. It has a great deal to do with blood formation and the body's biochemical balance. You can't live without it. If liver function is maintained, he'll probably make it. As for the rest, the explosion caused many cracks in the bone structures, but they are easy to heal. Same thing with the shrapnel. We removed them all and healed the damage caused by them. The man stopped as he rubbed his forehead. It all depends on the liver. If it continues to work, he will survive. We are keeping a very close watch on the blood chemistry, and will know more in another 10 hours, sir. He finished his report and bowed and left, leaving a thoroughly shaken brother behind. Hayashi, a voice came from behind him, and the man turned around to see the Saname. Do not worry, Hayashi, Tsunade will be arriving in a few hours, and I will ask her to handle this case. Personally, the Hokage spoke quietly, and instantly, the man let out a deep sigh. If Tsunade were to get involved, then his brother would make it. However, I am here for another reason, the Saname continued as he looked at the feeling of relief that appeared on the man's face. We have discovered the hideout of the assassin who has done this, the Hokage concluded. Hayashi's eyes narrowed. Hokage-sama, I would like to be involved in this, the head of the Hyuga clan spoke in a cold tone. Of course, I will be conducting the takedown personally. The Saname spoke in a warm tone masked by a steely look, becoming very much the professor, as he was known. Kumo's safe house, 6 hours after the attack. Within the safe house, Shigeo quickly analyzed his situation. He had a blown mission and was now trapped in enemy territory, without any help. The situation was grim. He quickly began to search the safe house, to find anything that could help him. He had to abandon the safe house as soon as possible because he knew that the Konoha ninja would find it out within the next few hours. They were annoyingly good at such things. His eyes burned fiercely as he remembered Yujito's cheerful wave. Wait, what the hell was she doing here? Shouldn't she be in Kumo? Don't ever call that whore Yujito-sama in my presence, you understand. The memory of him threatening Nakamura came unbidden in his mind. Nakamura, that son of a bitch, had ratted him out. Shigeo growled and punched the wall in frustration. Nakamura was a rookie who had been assigned to this mission from Yujito's platoon because the mission specifications had been originally drawn by Yujito, but he had forcibly ordered Nakamura to conduct the mission in his chosen manner, abandoning Yujito's plans, and that rat-faced bastard had ratted him out to her. She was the one who had sabotaged his mission as a reply to his insubordination. That scheming bitch. He realized that his career was now over. An illegal identified by an enemy nation would never be accepted back in his home village. If he managed to escape, he would be forced to become a rogue ninja, because Kumogakure could not give asylum to a wanted fugitive, and since Kumo and Konoha were not at war publicly, he would not be a prisoner of war, but considered as a rogue ninja, and methods of dealing with rogue ninja were much harsher than with POWs. Also, revenge against Yujito was out of the question. Even though he was a pathological male chauvinist, subconsciously, even he realized that he would never be a match for the Jinchuriki of the Two Tails. But I will not forget this, Yujito, you will pay for your treachery. Meanwhile, outside the safe house, a different scenario was playing out. More than 15 squads of the Umbu were now surrounding the house, with 5 of them maintaining a close perimeter watch, while the had cleared out all civilians and set up an external perimeter watch. This mission had taken a very serious nature indeed, with the Hokage himself supervising the takedown aided by the Hyuga clan head, and the Umbu knew what it meant. Their commander was away on a mission, and therefore the Hokage had stepped in personally. Failure was not an option, not in this case. It seems that he is alone, Hokage-sama. The walls are laced with anti-intrusion seals, as well as a proximity alarm seal, and is overlaid with a level 7 trap seal, one of the Umbu reported as he bowed. The Hokage mused as he stroked his beard. What do you think, Hayashi? The Hokage asked the opinion of the Hyuga clan head, who looked at the building carefully. It would seem that he holds the advantage inside the safe house. We have no idea of what the interior defenses are, or how many people are inside, if there is more than one person inside, that is, and if they have gone to such lengths to apply basic exterior defenses, then I believe our only option would be to flush him, slash them out. Hayashi spoke in a harsh tone. Yes, I guessed as much, the Sandaime nodded. Would you do the honors? The old man asked warmly. My pleasure, Hayashi nodded as he activated his Byakugan, with veins bulging at the side of his eyes. As soon as the proximity seal on the safe house sensed a Byakugan trying to interfere with the anti-intrusion seal to breach the anti-visual obstruction ward, a number of things happened simultaneously. Shigeo, who was inside the house, instantly became alert as alarms blazed, and realizing that his hideout was blown, he moved to activate the countermeasures. The basic countermeasure for a safe house in enemy territory, when discovered, was to destroy it and all sensitive materials inside. As such, he raced to the basement, knowing that he had scant seconds before the Konoha Umbu would storm him. It was a drill he had practiced many times. He took a demolition charge and placed it in the middle of a room, whose walls were covered with explosive tags. He took the charge and attached it to a random tag, and prepared to set a time-delayed seal. However, he had not anticipated one thing. Yujito, the resourceful woman, before leaving Konoha, had left a farewell present for him, which he hadn't anticipated. She had saturated the sealed chakra within the explosive tags with a liberal dose of the Nibi's chakra, and the demolition charge was 10 kilograms of TNT. It made for a rather explosive combination. Shigeo, who was unaware of this, quickly attached the demolition charge to an explosive tag, and activated the time-delayed fusion sequence for detonation, when something caught his notice. He instantly paled as he realized what that meant. Yujito had screwed him one final time, again. When Shigeo saw the explosive tags turn blue, he knew that he was critically short on time. He quickly made seals for the body flicker technique, praying that he would make it before he blew himself up. He made it, although barely. The 10 kilograms of TNT combined with the supercharged explosive tags laced with the chakra of the Two Tails Komusted and created an explosion that roared out of the basement with a sound like the end of the world and exploded violently. The building exploded like a glass bottle, sending out a hailstorm of shrapnel in all directions. The 5 Umbu squads maintaining a close watch were shredded instantly to nothing. Sarutobi leapt into the fray and put forth all his chakra and raised a massive barrier and saved the lives of everybody else. Once the explosion subsided, the eyes of the remaining Konoha ninja turned murderous. He is escaping, he is heading to the gates, but he seems to be severely injured. Hayashi, whose Byakugan could look from one end of Konoha to another, reported after scanning the entire village in mere seconds. To the gates, Sarutobi roared as he vanished in a blazing body flicker. Nearly 100 ninja followed their leader, intent on catching the murderous terrorist. At the village gates, Shigeo knew he was dying. The explosion had incinerated his left arm to ashes, and he was badly burnt. He was having difficulty breathing, and blood ran down his sides, freely splattering the ground. Despite all this, one name was constantly ringing in his mind. Yujito. Betrayal. A new set of eyes will now be observing the sentences and finding the right words to use. The man's strength waned, his final steps toward the village gate faltering. He knew his body was giving up, his lifeblood seeping out, organs failing from grievous wounds. He wouldn't make it. Then, a flicker in his peripheral vision, a blonde woman and her retinue stood at the gate. Yujito, so you came to watch me die, you demon whore. With a guttural roar, the dying man lunged at the blonde woman, who stared back in stunned surprise. But her moment of shock was fleeting. She wound her arm back and delivered a brutal punch, instantly severing his head from his neck. Sarutobi and his men, who had been in hot pursuit of the rogue ninja, stopped dead in their tracks, watching the bizarre scene unfold. A single punch from the woman at the gate had been enough to decapitate their target. They watched, transfixed, as the man's head flew through the air like a lunch ball, soaring at least 200 yards from the gate before it hit the ground and rolled to a stop at Sarutobi's feet. Well, that was rather anticlimactic, Hayashi stated bluntly, a slight twitch in his eye as he looked down at the head of the man who had tried to kill his brother. Who the hell is she? Inabi Uchiha, a member of the pursuit squad, asked, his voice shaking with fear. He wasn't the only one. Most of the shinobi were now eyeing the blonde woman with a mix of apprehension and genuine terror. You guys see that? Holy shit, she punched his head clean off like it was nothing. Damn, that's one scary chick. I bet she's single. The commotion died down as Sarutobi raised his hand. Once the silence returned, the Hokage spoke with a small smile. It appears our new Hokage has arrived in Konoha a bit sooner than expected. Konoha's hospitality seems to have declined recently, Sarutobi-sensei. This is quite a welcome, Tsunade said coolly, raising an eyebrow as she surveyed the assembled shinobi on the other side of the gate. An uncomfortable silence hung in the air. Most of the ninja present lowered their gazes in collective shame. A single man had led them on a chase, causing so much destruction, and despite their best efforts, the new Hokage had to deal with the problem herself upon entering the village for the first time. It was a humiliating blow to their pride and egos. She had arrived to find them wanting, a far cry from the welcoming they had envisioned. A lot has happened today, Tsunade, and not all of it has been good, I'll admit, Sarutobi said in a reproving tone, looking at her as if to scold her for her sarcastic remark. I can see that, Tsunade acknowledged, taking in her surroundings. Looks like an enemy raid, though it seems pretty sloppy. So who was it? Kumagakur, she asked as she walked forward, her entourage following silently. It would appear so, but we can't be certain, a new voice chimed in. Everyone turned to see the three village elders Homura Mito Kato, Yuriten Koharu, and Danzo approaching the scene. Homura, who had spoken, continued, It's good to see you again, Tsunade, although I wish the circumstances were different. The old man's gaze was soft as he looked at the new Hokage. Regardless, the announcement must be made. Genma, Hayate, informed the villagers that the new Hokage has arrived and has personally resolved the situation. The villagers need to be reassured that everything is under control, Koharu ordered crisply. The two jonin bowed instantly and vanished. It's good to see that our new Hokage can be decisive when needed. Welcome back, Tsunadeheim, Danzo said in a curt but respectful tone. Tsunade gave a brief nod in return before looking at her teacher. Well, Sarutobi-sensei, shall we get on with the matters at hand? I planned on getting some rest, but it seems I've already walked into a mess. So, do you want to handle this, or should I? She asked wearily, gesturing to the chaos around them. You are the Go-Dame now, Tsunade, even if you haven't officially taken over. I am Hokage in name only at this point. Deal with it as you see fit, Sarutobi said with a pleased look, happy that his student was finally embracing her duties. Alright, guess I'm back in business then, Tsunade announced loudly, ensuring everyone could hear. The new Hokage had arrived and was taking charge. Kakashi, she barked, and Kakashi immediately stood at attention. Jiraiya has to be around here somewhere. Take your squad and find him. Bring him to the Hokage Tower, by any means necessary. Tell that pervert that if he doesn't agree, I'll be upset, she said with a beautiful, but terrifying, smile. Kakashi and many other men gulped in fear. Kakashi and his squad vanished instantly, choosing to escape her fury. Next, Tsunade continued in the same commanding tone. When she took charge, she went all in. I want the village on lockdown. No one gets in or out. I want the Umbu to man the perimeter, and anyone who tries to violate that order is to be arrested and interrogated, she instructed swiftly. The Umbu present bowed and vanished. Shizun, go to the medical center and take charge. Deal with all the injuries. Fugaku, good, you're here. I want the military police to arrest all visitors and tourists in the village. Have them detained and questioned regardless of their nationality or status. I don't care if they have diplomatic immunity. Start with the Lightning Country ambassador and the Kumo diplomat. Move, she ordered curtly. Fugaku nodded and left, though he looked uneasy. Shizun gave her master a nervous glance before she, too, departed. Tsunade, that could cause a diplomatic incident, perhaps, Kohara began, but Tsunade raised a hand to silence her. I've been traveling for 5 days. I'm tired, I'm sore, and I had to take down an enemy myself, something you people failed to do. Now is not the time for niceties, and I don't give a damn what happens. Someone attacked us, and me, and I want to know who they were. And I will get answers. I don't care what I have to do. Sarutobi-sensei, let's go, the infuriated blonde said harshly. The counselor's eyes widened, while Danzo wore a look of approval. Looks like she's changed, for the better. This is a welcome surprise. Reiha, come. She beckoned to the young man standing in the corner in an imperious tone. For the first time, the eyes of the counselors and the remaining ninja fell upon the young man who had been silently observing. Koharu and Homura, who, along with Sarutobi, had been students of Tobirama, quickly noticed the resemblance. Danzo did, too. The boy was of medium height with a slender build. If not for the brown markings on his face, at the bottom of his chin, his features would have been perfectly androgynous. Dressed in all white and with a sword strapped to his back, the young man looked like a younger version of the second Hokage, though there were some noticeable differences in his facial structure. Reiha-kun, it's good to see you again. My old eyes have missed you. I'm afraid this village will need you before long, my boy, Sarutobi said in a friendly tone as he walked toward the boy. Sarutobi-jisama, it is good to see you again. I am glad you are in good health, the young man said in a monotone voice, his face showing no emotion. Sarutobi laughed at that. Tsunade, who is this boy, and why does he look like? Kohara began, her eyes moving from the boy to Tsunade's face, expecting an answer. Tsunade sighed, knowing a major scolding from the counselors was imminent. His name is Reiha. He's my grandson. Well, technically my grandnephew, I suppose. He's the great-grandson of Tobirama Otuji, and I've been raising him in secret all these years, she concluded wearily. The boy gave a formal bow to the 3 elders. What, Tsunade? Kohara shrieked, her eyes filled with fury. How could you keep something like this a secret from us? From us, she repeated, putting emphasis on the word. Exactly, Homura added, his face also flushed with anger. This is not something to hide from the Goikenbane. The village has a right to know such an important secret. To think the Senju clan had an heir, and you, of all people, kept it from us. And Sarutobi, how could you? We were also students of Tobirama-sensei. How could you not inform us of this? Why, the man's face showed genuine hurt, and Sarutobi bowed his head in apology. Enough, Tsunade roared. The 2 counselors immediately composed themselves, though their eyes were still mutinous. This is neither the place nor the time to discuss this. Now, move, she all but yelled. The 2 elders nodded stiffly but continued to look rebellious. Reiha, Tsunade called out. The boy stiffened. Grandmother, please go ahead. I will join you shortly, he said in a rigid tone. Tsunade looked him over and gave a stiff nod. Don't take too long, she warned before leaving with the elders, who all gave the boy a curious glance. Do not worry, Godame-sama, I will personally escort him to the towers, Hayashi, who was standing to the side, said. Tsunade nodded curtly in agreement. As soon as she was out of earshot, the whispers began. Did you hear that? Yeah, her grandson, whoa, the great-grandson of the second Hokage, wow, the last male senju. Hot damn. Wait until the others hear about this. Ignoring them, Reiha walked toward the medical team that was bagging Shigeo's corpse, with Hayashi following silently behind him. Please stop for a moment, the boy said curtly but firmly. The medics, who had heard the exchange between the Hokage and the elders, respectfully nodded and stepped back. As he neared the corpse that the medics had put back together, Reiha knelt down, took a scroll from his pouch, and unrolled it on the ground. Hayashi remained silent, watching as the newly revealed senju boy went to work. Reiha rapidly went through a series of hand seals. When he finished, the 3 middle fingers of his right hand began to glow. He placed them on the forehead of Shigeo's corpse. Senju Heihatsu Kainen Ishoku, Senju Hidden Technique, Memory Transplant. He recited the name of the technique. Various symbols and characters began to form on the corpse's forehead and move into his 3 glowing fingers. After a few minutes, he stopped, withdrew his fingers, and placed them on the empty scroll. The characters that had entered his fingers immediately reappeared and began to rearrange themselves on the scroll until they filled 3/4 of it. He then rolled up the scroll and looked at the medics. You may dispose of this corpse, he informed them. Hi, Reiha Dano, they said, and carried the body away. Reiha turned to face Hayashi. I apologize that we haven't been properly introduced, sir. My name is Senju Reiha, and you are? He asked quietly, looking at the Hyuuga clan head. My name is Hyuuga Hayashi, Reiha-san. I am the head of the Hyuuga clan. It's a pleasure to meet you, the man said, offering his hand. The young man clasped it and released it after a very brief shake. Shall we proceed to the Hokage Tower? Reiha asked. The Hyuuga head nodded and started to walk, with the youngster following. If I may ask, what was that you did? I've never seen a technique like that before, Hayashi asked quietly. Reiha's reply was curt. You will know at the tower. I will reveal everything there. Please wait until we are in the presence of the new Hokage. The young man's tone was polite, and a slightly miffed Hayashi nodded in agreement, his curiosity about the enigmatic youngster growing. Unacceptable. There is no excuse for this. How do you justify yourself, Tsunade? You had no right to hide the boy's existence, Kohara said harshly, her eyes fixed on the younger woman. The old woman was furious to learn that her sensei had a descendant and even more incensed that she had not been informed. The men in the room watched the exchange in silence, not wanting to get involved. Both women were known to have explosive tempers, and no one wanted to be caught in the crossfire. And Sarutobi? How could you? I thought we were colleagues, friends, and yet you kept the existence of our sensei's legacy a secret, even from us? How could you? The old woman turned her wrath on the Sandaime, who began to fidget. Enough, Tsunade roared, slamming her fist onto the Hokage's desk, which shattered into pieces. The elders were too shocked to respond, staring at her in surprise. Your opinions hold no weight with me. As Reiha's only living relative and elder, and as the person who raised him, I alone have the right to decide what is best for his upbringing. My personal family matters are not the concern of the Goikenbane. Do I make myself clear? Tsunade growled, her eyes fixed on the very offended elders. Am I clear? Tsunade growled again, looking at the 3 elders. They all nodded stiffly. Kohara sat down with a huff and crossed her arms, glaring at the younger woman. I guess I can't talk her down like I used to when she was younger, the old woman thought with a snort as she looked at the new Hokage. I think they got the message, Tsunade. A chuckle came from the window. Everyone turned to see Jiraiya perched on the sill. Still, may we at least know the reason why his existence was kept secret? Homura asked in a more reasonable tone, looking at the blonde woman. I wanted him to have a normal childhood, that's all, Tsunade said softly, looking at the 3 elders, who had incredulous looks on their faces. And you couldn't provide that in this village, where he could have had everything at his disposal? You chose to raise the last living male heir of the Senju clan in a remote forest because you wanted him to be normal? I'm afraid I don't understand your reasoning, Tsunade, Kohara said shrilly, looking at the younger woman in disbelief. This is exactly what I meant. If I had raised him here, the villagers and the people would have pampered and spoiled him because of who he is. Famous before he could even walk or talk, all because of his heritage. It would have turned any child into an arrogant and egotistical person, and I didn't want that to happen. Don't deny it, you know what happens to the so-called prodigies from bloodline clans who are pampered and spoiled beyond limits just because of their heritage. I didn't want that for him, Tsunade said curtly. The elder's anger began to deflate slightly. Not to mention it would have made him an immediate target for the rest of the world. Every hidden village would have sent agents to either kidnap or eliminate him. After all, the potential of the Senju clan is known to the entire world, is it not? Sarutobi asked in a rational tone. The elder's ire dissipated further as they grudgingly accepted the 3rd Hokage's words. Fine, Kohara conceded, but we will be having words later, Sarutobi, she spoke in a steely tone as she eyed the Hokage, with a promise of much more tongue lashing to come, while Sarutobi winced at the thought. If you have decided to reveal the boy's existence, Danzo spoke for the first time, it must mean that he is now capable of defending himself from any threat. Just what sort of abilities does the boy possess? He asked quietly as he glanced at the new Hokage. He will surpass Sakumo in another 3 years, Jiraiya spoke bluntly, at which the 3 elders shot up in their chairs so fast that it appeared as if they had used the flying thunder god to stand up. Looking at the silent looks of confirmation on the faces of Tsunade and Sarutobi, they slowly sat down as their minds came to terms with the information. I guess that the senju blood does run true after all, Danzo spoke in a soft tone with a small chuckle while the other 2 elders remained silent and poker-faced. When will he join? Homura began when the door opened and Reiha and Hayashi entered the chambers. All talk stopped as Tsunade introduced him to the elders as the boy bowed down in greeting to them. All of them relocated to a small table at the end of the room, as Tsunade had smashed the desk in her outburst, and sat down while a secretary brought in some refreshments and served them all and walked out with a quick bow. Not even 2 minutes on the job, and she has already broken a desk, must be a new record, Jiraiya smirked as he eyed the room, and more importantly, the new Hokage. After everyone had settled down, Reiha took out the scroll which he had prepared and placed it in front of Tsunade's grandmother. This scroll contains all the details of what has transpired in the village today, he spoke curtly as he stood in a corner in rigid attention, while the jaws of the elders dropped. What? But how? That technique didn't. Hayashi began to protest as Tsunade raised her hand and stopped in mid-tirade. Indeed. The investigations have not even begun yet, how could you have? Kohara began as she looked at the boy in apprehension. Reiha, please explain to them, Tsunade ordered as she closed her eyes with a sigh after realizing what the boy had done. The technique that I used is a secret jutsu passed through the Senju clan for generations. It is a variation of the Yamanaka secret jutsu, and when used, it transcribes all the memories of a dead person into a scroll, thereby giving a detailed account of all his memories in the last 7 days. As such, I used the technique on the corpse of the intruder who was terminated by grandmother at the village gates, and I have compiled the events of his memories of the last 7 days. Reiha spoke in a drab monotone, while the eyes of the elders went wide. Even Jiraiya, Hayashi, and Sarutobi were surprised. Impressive, most impressive, Danzo admitted softly as he evaluated the youngster quietly. I don't have time to read this now, I will look at it later, just give me a brief summary, Tsunade ordered him, at which he nodded. The dead man was an illegal agent of Kumagakure, and he had indeed been ordered to assassinate Hyuga Hayashi-san. However, his operation was sabotaged by his own superiors. Reiha spoke curtly at which even Tsunade's eyes narrowed. What does that mean? Kohara spoke in surprise as she tried to assimilate the facts. It means that not everything is hunky-dory in the Kumo forces, Jiraiya spoke wanly. Internal dissension, perhaps, Sarutobi spoke out in speculation at which Reiha nodded in agreement. That indeed appears to be the case. Apparently, the person in charge of this mission was a female shinobi, and it would seem that this man chafed at being under the authority of a female, and as such, decided to disobey the female superior's orders and proceeded to conduct the operation in his own way, ignoring his orders. As a reply to his insubordination, his female superior sabotaged his operation, resulting in the mayhem that has occurred. Reiha concluded as the eyes of the elders narrowed. Jiraiya whistled, quite a feisty female. I don't recall ever hearing of a female shinobi in Kumagakure who has enough clout to be assigned to such a sensitive mission. No offense, Hayashi, Jiraiya spoke wanly as he eyed Hayashi, who jerked his head narrowly in acceptance. Did you get any names worth salvaging? Tsunade asked after a moment as she contemplated the information that was given. Only 4, Shigeo, the deceased's name, Renji Abarai, a hired mercenary, Nakamura, another illegal who seems to have been residing in Konoha as a sleeper agent, and Nii Yujito, the aforementioned female. Nakamura and Yujito seem to have been the ones responsible for the sabotage, before they escaped to Kumagakure, Reiha concluded. And you got all this information, through one technique? Homura asked in surprise at which Reiha nodded. The technique that I used, through judicious use of a combination of sealing jutsu and human anatomical knowledge, transcribes all the memories of a deceased person into the medium chosen to transcribe the details upon. Unless specifically warded, all the memories residing in the brain will be copied, transformed, and transcribed, given the proviso that the brain has suffered no significant damage. Reiha concluded, at which everyone became silent. Memory transplant, huh? Tsunade asked gruffly, at which the young man nodded silently. Well done, Tsunade spoke into a small smile as she looked at him. One more thing, Reiha spoke out softly, at which everybody turned to look at him. It would appear that this Nii Yujito is in fact a Jinchuriki. The Jinchuriki of the Two-Tails Cat, at least according to the memories of the deceased man. It was as if a nuclear explosion had been set off inside the chamber as the elders exploded into a cacophony of swearing and curses. To go so far as to use a Jinchuriki against us, that is an act of war, Homura growled as he banged his fist on the table. There is no way that this was not condoned by the Raikage. Such a mission would never have been attempted without his tacit approval. Kohara spoke in a dark tone. As if Killer Bee was not enough, dear God, Jiraiya sighed softly as he remembered the eccentric Jinchuriki of the Eight Tails. Killer Bee was someone who Jiraiya had no desire to tangle with, ever, apart from Salamander Hanzo. Whatever we do to tackle this can wait until Tsunade's inauguration as the 5th Hokage tomorrow. We can discuss a proper response after tomorrow, by which time we can corroborate this information from other sources as well. Sarutobi spoke out as everybody else nodded. What about the boy? Will he be joining the shinobi forces of Konoha? Danzo asked quietly, at which the 2 Sannin and the 3rd Hokage began to fidget while everyone turned to look at Reiha. I have some personal obligations to fulfill before that eventuality, Danzo-san, therefore, I will not be joining the shinobi forces of Konoha until I take care of those personal commitments. Reiha spoke curtly, at which the 3 elders jumped to their feet. What? 1 year later? Are you sure that it is feasible, Yujito-san? Gashir, the High Jonin of Kumo, asked Yujito, who nodded emphatically. It is simple in concept, Gashir. All you have to do is get the package to the embassy, and once inside, you are practically as safe as you would be in Kumogakure. Not even Konoha ninja would dare to assault a diplomatic embassy building in public view. Once inside, use the reverse summoning seal arrays devised by Nakamura and transport the package to Kumo. She spoke softly while Gashir nodded. The new Hokage. Gashir began with a frown, when Yujito interrupted him. Will not do anything. In fact, she cannot do anything at all, even if she wants to. That is the beauty of this operation. Your cover will be your trump card. Even if you kill somebody in public view in Konoha, you will still not be held accountable, Yujito pointed out as Gashir nodded slowly. Even though it was a bit of exaggeration on Yujito's part, the implication was clear. As long as he held to his cover, he was untouchable. The concept was so simple, and yet so daring, he admitted softly. In the turbulent world of shinobi, diplomatic mission buildings were the only buildings that were considered inviolate. And to date, despite the numerous shinobi wars, no shinobi village had dared to assault an embassy belonging to an enemy nation, because all nations knew the fact that wars did not last forever, and that there would be an after-the-war scenario, in which all of them would have to re-engage each other, and ambassadors were the only people capable of achieving that. Ambassadors were probably the only politicians most insulated from assassinations. Their rulers and masters were targeted, but not them, because they were more vital than any others were. Attacking an emissary was considered the ultimate taboo in the shinobi world. In addition, if he conducted his mission under the cover of being an ambassador, then even if his operation was blown, Konoha would still not dare to attack him, because the repercussions would be severe. Gashir thought smugly, as he nodded his acceptance to the mission, which Yujito had assigned to him. He was wrong, he was very wrong. As the people and ninja of Konoha watched stupefied, Senju Reiha stood atop the roof of the burning embassy of the Land of Lightning, holding Gashir by his throat. Then, as the horrified civilians and ninja alike watched, he calmly twisted and broke Gashir's neck and threw his corpse down the burning roof to the ground below. A moment later, he vanished as a loud explosion occurred, raising a cloud of dust, 10 meters high. As it cleared, Reiha could be seen walking out of the rubble that was once the embassy of the Land of Lightning, and in his arms was the unconscious figure of one Hinata Hyawaga, the 4-year-old daughter of Hyawaga Hayashi, whom he handed over to a much-relieved Yuhai Kurane, who hastened to hand over the unconscious child to her father, who was arguing with the council to request permission to assault the embassy of the Land of Lightning to reclaim his daughter, something that he wouldn't need to do anymore. As he watched the jubilant cheers arising from the gathered crowd, Nakamura slowly made his way out, deep in thought. For the first time in his life, the man was flustered, and rightly so. Disregarding all political ramifications, the 5th Hokage's grandson had single-handedly assaulted the embassy of the Land of Lightning to retrieve the kidnapped daughter of the Hyawaga clan head, whom the shinobi of Konoha had seen being taken into the embassy. He cursed Gashir for the man's incompetence, and the ninja of Konoha, who had kept the embassy in round-the-clock surveillance. If the idiot Gashir had had the sense to make his way out of Konoha, instead of going into the embassy gambling on the fact that Konoha would not assault an embassy, then everything would have gone properly. True, he had been told to use his diplomatic cover as a shield, but that was on the proviso that he maintained his cover intact. The idiot, panicking after realizing that the ninja of Konoha had discovered that he had kidnapped the girl, had run full tilt into the embassy. Dumbass, there was only so much protection that diplomatic immunity could offer. Konoha knew they had the girl, and the embassy had been besieged on all sides, and eventually, even if they did manage to get the child back to Kumo, they would have been forced to return her, now that Konoha knew that Kumo had violated the integrity of the diplomatic mission. If he had brought the child in undetected, then Kumo would have gained the Byakugan by now. Nevertheless, the idiot had ruined everything. In his panic state, not only had he compromised his cover, he had also dealt a severe blow to Kumo's reputation. By an international treaty between all major shinobi nations, it was decreed that an embassy could not be used for staging shinobi operations. To date, none of the Great Five had violated that agreement. The success of Yujito's plan depended on the very fact that nobody expected them to use this avenue. However, due to the panicked reaction of one man, not only had the operation been compromised, but also their reputation was now tarnished forever. What he had truly not expected was the action undertaken by the Hokage's grandson. As soon as the young man had learned of the situation, he had simply blitzed into the embassy single-handed, and had executed Gashir, a fully accredited and recognized ambassador, in full public view. Something which even a cage would hesitate twice before doing. He had then systematically executed every person inside the embassy, destroyed the building, and had retrieved the kidnapped girl. From what he had heard, the young man was an extremely shrewd and calculative person, one not prone to giving into impulsive actions like this, and that puzzled him greatly. Nakamura realized without delay that there existed at least one person who had the ability to make life very uncomfortable for Nii Yujito. Moreover, Yujito was not the kind to take to interference in her work in stride. Things were about to get very unpleasant, of that he was sure. As immersed as he was in his thoughts, he did not notice Reiha's eyes on him, assessing and calculating his every move. Who the hell do they think they are? I report to the daimyo and even he is smart enough to not ask me how I do my job. Have you ever seen such a bunch of self-righteous ass-covering pricks? They do not care about what we do. They care only about the publicity these things generate, and how the hell could he be so careless? I fight tooth and nail with the Goiken Bane and allow him to remain a civilian, and how does he repay me? By blowing up an embassy. Is he deranged? Moreover, where the hell is he? In the old days, if one of my ninjas were to act so carelessly, he would have the good sense to defect or become rogue. God, I miss the wars. Tsunade raged as she walked back to her office, while Shizen hurried after her, cringing at the venom in her master's voice. As she neared her office, everybody in the area became quiet, sensing that the fifth Hokage was in one of her infamous tempers, and wisely opted to remain silent. Tsunade opened the doors of her office, and entered in, only to see her grandson sitting in front of her desk, gazing at the portraits of the previous Hokages. You've got a bloody cheek, Tsunade spoke coldly as she eyed her grandson, who gazed at her indifferently, while Shizen began to chew her nails in anxiety. I will try to be more diligent the next time. If something like this happens again, he spoke nonchalantly while Tsunade snorted as she sank down into her chair. If not, you had better kill yourself, she retorted coldly as she stared down her grandson, who looked back at her with the same icy indifference. You stormed an embassy, Tsunade pointed out. You broke the only absolutely inviolate rule in the area of international relations. Do you have any idea of the damage you have caused? She snarled as she pounded her fist on the table. I did try to mitigate the damage, Reiha pointed calmly, at which she snorted. You broke a man's neck in full public view and threw him off the roof of that embassy. I would hardly call that showing restraint, especially since that man you killed also happens to be the High Jonin of Kimagakur, who is here as the chief negotiator for the peace talks between our nations. She spoke curtly while Reiha's eyebrows rose a tiny bit. I find it hard to believe that you are the one who is lecturing me about restraint, considering who you are and what you did all those years ago. Reiha began when Tsunade interrupted coldly. Utter one more word, and grandson or not, I will have you killed, she finished as the young man nodded and stopped. Frankly speaking, you are overthinking this matter. In reality, there is nothing they can do, Reiha continued while Tsunade raised her eyebrows. Really? Care to explain that, grandson mine? First of all, their protests are flimsy at best. I proved it beyond doubt when I stormed that building and rescued that young Hyuga child, and an embassy is hardly the place to provide asylum to a fleeing criminal. By blatantly housing a known criminal who had kidnapped the heir of the Hyuga clan, they stand to lose all credibility. An embassy and its personnel are granted diplomatic immunity from all sorts of prosecution from local laws, in order to create trust between two nations. While it is true that they are granted immunity from most of the laws, that does not give them the right to blatantly violate our laws in such a flagrant manner, and then use their diplomatic immunity as a shield. By storming that embassy, I have saved the child from a terrible fate, and saving an innocent child's life and honor is more important than maintaining a shallow pretense of diplomacy with a treacherous nation. I have also proved that they do not adhere to the principles expected by nations in international relationships, and this incident will further dent their credibility worldwide. And furthermore, as far as accountability for this goes, let me remind you that I am a civilian, and not a ninja under your employ. That is a matter of public record, and it is indisputable. Therefore, if the Land of Lightning and Kimagakur intend to hold me accountable, they will find it particularly hard to do so, especially since the Land of Fire and the Land of Lightning do not have an extradition treaty, and trying to assault me personally would be even more problematic for them, because then they would have assaulted the grandson of the Hokage, and that is a guaranteed cause for war, a war which they certainly do not intend to fight as of now. Therefore, the only option left to them would be to file a legal complaint against me in the daimyo's court, to have me prosecuted, and the last time I checked, the daimyo's court had a backlog of cases worth 10 years. You should have realized by now, grandmother, that I do not attempt anything without calculating all possible outcomes. Have a good day, Reiha concluded softly and left his grandmother's office, leaving her speechless. Reiha had nailed it spot on. There were no miscalculations, which was his greatest miscalculation. In addition, as he had intended, everything was about to fall into the worst-case scenario because of his actions, which was vital to his plan. Nii Yujito was about to have a very harsh dose of reality assault her. A brass plaque and a nostalgic feeling. He noticed the brass plaque that was emblazoned with these words, and which he had hung in his office. Danzo could not help but feel a wave of nostalgia wash over him. This was perhaps one of the finer lessons that he had absorbed from the Nidaime Hokage, and it had been a lesson that was learned with great success. A maverick's legacy. Tobirama Senju was known far and wide as a maverick, a man who gave heed to no one but did not listen to anyone either. For years, when his advisors offered advice on how to deal with situations, he would listen to their counsel and yet make decisions completely on his own, entirely ignoring whatever counsel had been offered to him. Trust no one, that had been his personal motto. Moreover, it seemed that his descendant was following in his grandfather's distinguished footsteps quite admirably. A surprising alliance. He had never quite trusted the diplomatic mission sent by Kumo, and he had been pleasantly surprised when Tsunade had ordered stringent surveillance on the diplomatic group. However, he had not expected them to take such a bold approach as to attempt to kidnap the heir of one of Konoha's most distinguished bloodline clans. A plan of genius. In retrospect, it was a plan that was bordering on outright genius. If the kidnapper had managed to carry out his operation without being detected, then Konoha would never have been able to recover the child. Their only saving grace was in the fact that the kidnapper had been identified beyond any possible doubt during the mid-execution of his mission, and that was their only saving grace, otherwise the repercussions for the actions undertaken by the boy would have been quite severe. A risky move. However, when the kidnapper had brazenly taken shelter in the embassy of Kaminari no Kuni, even Danzo had come to the conclusion that attacking an embassy was too risky, even for a non-sanctioned force like his. He had expected a siege situation, where the embassy would be surrounded by thousands of ninja, thereby preventing the possibility of them escaping with the child, but that, he knew would never have been a foolproof guarantee. A whirlwind of justice. And then, he had arrived, the grandson of the Hokage, and the great-grandson of the Nidaime Hokage, the last of the Senju, and like a whirlwind, he had brazenly broken down barriers, stormed the embassy, and summarily executed every single living being that had existed in that edifice, and had brought it down, and had retrieved the child. The world's demand. And now, the entire world was baying for his blood. It would be an interesting thing to witness how Tsunade would handle this challenging situation. He had received reports of the infamous conversation she had had with her grandson in the aftermath of the butchering of Kumo, as the event had been termed, and he had realized then and there that this boy was what the village of Konoha now truly needed. A special summit. The Royal Council of Hai no Kuni was today hosting a very special summit. In attendance were the diplomatic delegates from all of the major and minor nations, here to protest the murder of diplomacy, as they had so claimed, and along with Koharu and Homura, Danzo had arrived with Tsunade to attend that very special summit. A room full of suspicion. In attendance were the diplomats from Suke no Kuni, Mizu no Kuni, Kaminari no Kuni, and Kaze no Kuni, along with the diplomats from other minor and major nations as well, in attendance with their bodyguards, who were most certainly disguised shinobi. The security for this entire event was watertight, with the entire armed forces of Hai no Kuni and ninja forces of Konoha on full alert and present in full force. Even Danzo was very interested in seeing how these things were going to play out. The ironic aggressors. What was ironic, Danzo reflected idly, was the fact that Konoha and Hai no Kuni, despite being the true victims in this affair, were being portrayed as aggressors, while the true culprits were being portrayed as victims. This event did not actually concern any of the other nations in the slightest, but since it was an attack on a diplomatic embassy, a situation that no one currently present in the room had ever thought possible, they were all here to demand accountability from Hai no Kuni and Konoha, in view of the damage done to international diplomacy as a whole, or so they had claimed, which as far as Danzo was concerned, was a steaming pile of horseshit in his opinion. Re-evaluating Konoha. They were here, because they were rattled. Konoha was known as the most peaceful of all the 5 hidden villages. Tree huggers, that is what they were called. How the mighty had fallen, Danzo mused idly as he looked at the smirks on the faces of the other diplomats. To think that a village, which had produced ninja like Hashirama and Tobirama Senju, and Uchiha Madara and Namikaze Minato, was called weak was an unbearable affront. An unprecedented event. No, they were here, because they wanted to re-evaluate the village and the new Hokage, because as far as world opinion was concerned, this was an unprecedented event, and they wanted to confirm whether this was an unfortunate accident, or whether Konoha actually possessed enough political will to conduct such an incident again. A career pacifist. The ambassador of Kaminari no Kuni, Lady Miyako, was a career pacifist, who hated violence of any sort. In a career that was dominated by males, she had risen to her current position through sheer tenacity and a lot of intelligence, although she grudgingly accepted the fact that she also happened to be the niece of the daimyo of Kaminari no Kuni had played a part in it. Horrified by the massacre. She abhorred violence on principle, and as a result, she also abhorred women who practiced them, namely kunoichi, and for that particular reason, the current Hokage, Tsunade, was on the very top of her list of people who she did not like so much. When she had learned of the massacre of their embassy, she had been horrified. To learn that somebody had dared to attack harmless diplomats was something which she had never thought possible. But then, they had received information that their hidden village had tried to suborn the goodwill of international relations, and had flouted those rules to conduct their detestable missions. Detesting the ruthlessness. She accepted the fact that Kumagakure, as much as she hated to do so, had violated the laws of international diplomacy, and was the guilty party. However, what she detested even more was the ruthlessness with which Konoha had reacted to this travesty. Surely, there had been no need to massacre all those people. If Kumagakure had broken the covenant, then Konoha should have left it to Kaminari no Kuni to discipline their overzealous hidden village, instead of resorting to such brutal retaliation, she told herself as she prepared to make her arguments in the meeting. A detestable decision. True, they had tried to kidnap a little child, for a bloodline, and although she found it a detestable act, she knew that she had no say in protesting against making such decisions. Hidden villages were granted autonomy on an equal status with the countries they served, and they had the authority to conduct such missions. However, because of the overzealousness of Kumagakure, now Kaminari no Kuni had been left feeling embarrassed, and it had fallen upon her to regain her country's honor. A determined woman, and she intended to succeed. The call to order. This meeting has been called forth primarily by the representatives of Kaminari no Kuni, and as such, Lady Miyako now has the floor. Kohara spoke out curtly as all eyes in the room turned towards the chief ambassador of Kaminari no Kuni. The diplomatic mourning. The events of the past week have been difficult ones for everybody who has been involved, Miyako began, and we mourn the loss of so many of our valued retainers. We accept the fact that the hidden village of Kaminari no Kuni was indeed at fault here, and we assure everybody that we shall take steps to rectify that very grave problem. While we are gratified that the hostage in question was successfully rescued, we cannot condone the methods that were used to put an end to the crisis. The success of diplomacy and international relations is dependent upon the forbearance of the host nations in which the diplomatic missions are situated. We have requested the convening of this council for the purpose of accomplishing two very important goals. First, to ensure that such violations of international relationships do not happen again, and second, to make certain that the people responsible for these deplorable events are brought to justice for their crimes. An interesting situation. Many of the diplomats of the other nations were carefully eyeing the reactions of the Hokage, to better judge how she would deal with this situation. This was an interesting situation, and they wanted to see exactly how things played out. The question of violations. Just to be clear, Lady Miyako, Kohara began again, when you talked about events that have undermined the sanctity of international relationships, were you referring to the kidnapping attempt conducted by your hidden village against one of the premier clans of our hidden village? She asked smoothly while everybody in the chamber sat up a bit straighter. The daimyo of Hai no Kuni had a rather amused look on his face, as he carefully observed the banter. A separate issue. No, Lady Koharu, that is very much a separate issue, one that we can address at another time. I was referring to the uninvited attack by the grandson of the Hokage on our embassy, she pointed out stiffly as Kohara slowly nodded her head. Ending the hostage crisis. Ah, I see, you are referring to the attack that ended the hostage crisis so successfully, she said pleasantly, while the face of Miyako colored up with a blush. Danzo was watching the proceedings with a suppressed smile. If negotiations were an ocean, then Kohara was the great white shark that lived in it. It was a pleasure to watch her negotiate and fluster her opponents with delicately placed phrases and inconveniently brought up truths. Concern with the means. The result is not the issue, not at the moment, Miyako countered firmly. At the moment, I am deeply concerned with the means. The request. I see, Kohara said quietly as she gazed at the woman softly, and what would you like to do about this great concern? I wish for the Hokage's grandson to be taken into custody immediately, and handed over to us for questioning, Miyako spoke out while the temperature in the room dropped quite a bit. That was a bold and audacious demand to make. Ascertaining the law. And what do you hope to accomplish with that particular move? Koharu asked again, just to be sure. We need to formally ascertain whether any laws were broken and if any boundaries were overstepped, Miyako replied with confidence. I'll look at other actions. I see, and what about the overzealous actions committed by your very own shinobi village? One could almost construe that move as an outright act of war. And may I bring to your notice, that in recent weeks, preceding this unfortunate event, Konoha has been hit with a spate of raids, conducted by enemy shinobi, and again, most of them have been solely focused on the Hyuga clan, in whom your hidden village is known to have an unhealthy interest. We also have actionable intelligence that all of these attacks were again conducted by your hidden village. Are we to consider this as a declaration of war? Koharu asked quietly while Miyako stumbled with a look of surprise that was clearly etched on her face. Lack of knowledge. I have no knowledge of this matter whatsoever, she admitted truthfully. However, if you were to share your intelligence with us, I will make sure that your concerns are addressed, and if it is indeed proven that our hidden village has exceeded its mandate, I assure you, we will bring them to justice. She spoke out while silence reigned in the room for a long moment. The Raikage's response. Danzo snorted, he had no doubt they would. The Raikage would produce a disposable ninja and lay the blame squarely on that unfortunate person's shoulders by terming it a rogue operation, and have them executed while at the same time absolving himself of all responsibility. A denied request. Very well, leaving that matter aside, Kohara continued, I am afraid that we cannot grant your request for the custody of the boy, she concluded while Miyako narrowed her eyes in suspicion. The culprit's identity. Is it because the culprit is the grandson of the Hokage? Miyako asked quietly while everybody in the room stilled. The highly gifted civilian. Almost assuredly not, Kohara waved her hands to indicate as if it was a trivial matter. As you know, the boy is a civilian, and not a ninja under the employ of Konohagakure no Sato, and therefore, he cannot be tried under laws that pertain to shinobi. And unfortunately, I must remind you that since Hai no Kuni and Kaminari no Kuni do not possess an extradition treaty to hand over criminals to each other, I am afraid that we cannot hand him over to you. We truly wish we could have been able to help you, but laws are laws and our hands are tied because of them. You are welcome to file a complaint against him in the daimyo's court though, she concluded without any emotion showing on her face at all. A look of incredulity. You expect us to believe that the grandson of the Hokage is not a ninja? Do you take us all for fools, Lady Koharu? The representative of Kaze no Kuni interjected, with a look of pure incredulity on his face. Not under employ. You misunderstand me, gentlemen and ladies, Kohara spoke again. I said he is not a ninja under the employ of Konohagakure no Sato. I never said that he was not a practitioner of the ninja arts at all. Even though he practices the shinobi arts, technically, he is still a civilian, a highly gifted civilian, but a civilian nonetheless, she concluded with a thin smile, while the other delegates looked extremely cross at the explanation. Filing a complaint. So, you tell us that the only way that we can make this murderer, who butchered innocent civilians in his zeal to get to a kidnapper, account for his crimes, is to file a complaint against him in the daimyo's court. Is that the way it is? Miyako asked sharply. A long wait. Indeed, Kohara replied demurely, although I am afraid that it may take some time to process, she added with just a little bit of hesitation at the very end. A backlog of cases. How long would that be? The representative of Tsuki no Kuni asked wanly, as if he had already expected this exact response. Well, the last time we checked, it appears that the daimyo's court does have a backlog of cases, just around 10 years worth, that is all, but I assure you, he will be brought to justice, Kohara concluded while an angry hiss escaped from many of the present delegates. The outrage. This is an outrage. You are trying to protect a murderer who has murdered innocent people. Miyako began shrilly, when Tsunade stood up, and at that moment, Miyako stopped her rant and stared at the woman while the room fell into complete silence. The most well-known salute. Up yours, sweetheart, Tsunade spoke calmly, and in full view of the entire royal council and the assembled delegates, she gave the noble woman from Kaminari no Kuni, the most well-known salute in the world, the finger. A shocking response. Pin-drop silence prevailed in the chambers, as everybody was too shocked to react to this outrageous response by the Hokage in contravention to all known diplomatic behavior and norms. No crime committed. I will say this now, Tsunade began curtly, ignoring the extremely offended looks on the faces of all the assembled foreign delegates who were present. My grandson is not a ninja of Konoha, and as such he cannot be held accountable for his actions under the guidelines that are prescribed to shinobi personnel internationally. And personally, I believe that he has committed no crime, not when he acted unilaterally to save the life and honor of an innocent child, she concluded while Miyako's face reddened with fury. Killing innocent people. That does not give him the right to kill innocent people. We would not have minded if he had killed the kidnapper, but your grandson mindlessly slaughtered innocent diplomats and workers, who were not associated with that crime in any way whatsoever. The woman from Kumo snapped back in anger. Judge, jury, and executioner. So you say, but at that time, how was he to be sure that who was innocent and who was not? For all we know, all of them could have been involved. Tsunade spoke casually while the eyes of everybody widened in shock. Danzo was now paying more interest to Tsunade's words. A welcome surprise. I knew that she had changed, but I had no idea as to how much. This is a welcome surprise. These people have become too used to Sarutobi's pacifist tendencies. Now they will learn that Konoha will no longer accept such aggressive behaviors. Not a jungle. So he decided to do a judge, jury, and executioner act on them? This is not a jungle, Tsunade-heim, this is a civilized world, and there are rules which are expected to be followed by everyone, if they wish to exist in this very society. Miyako spoke angrily. An act of a gentleman. If the acts of your people, such as the kidnapping of a 4-year-old child, as conducted by that so-called ambassador of your hidden village is the standard you set for civilized behavior, then I regard the actions undertaken by my grandson as the act of a true gentleman, Tsunade quipped back, and a very tense silence followed that statement. Not nearly far enough. You go too far, Miyako snapped back as she glared at the Hokage with hatred. Not nearly far enough, Tsunade retorted, at which Miyako's jaws fell open in utter shock. You are very lucky in the fact that my grandson is not an official ninja of Konoha, because otherwise, your hidden village's actions would have elicited a response under our new doctrine, Tsunade concluded. A new doctrine. Instantly, Danzo, Koharu, and Homura sat up straighter and looked at each other in confusion. Tsunade had told them nothing of that sort. New doctrine, the representative of Tsuki no Kuni asked in a careful tone while everybody else in the room became silent. Even the daimyo of Hai no Kuni began to pay more attention. A lack of intelligence. Indeed, perhaps your hidden villages have failed to gather intelligence on this important matter, Tsunade spoke offhandedly, at which the eyes of many of the delegates narrowed in suspicion. A brutal retaliation. No matter, I shall inform you all personally, so please listen very carefully, Tsunade continued, oblivious to the furor she had caused. As of now, the official doctrine and policy of Konoha is to meet unwarranted acts of violence with extremely brutal retaliation. In other words, if your military forces engage our people outside of authorized shinobi missions or wars, then their actions will be countered with extremely lethal retaliation, similar to the one that was executed by my grandson. We will make the cost of conducting such terrorist activities in Hai no Kuni and Kanahagakure no Sato so horrific that no one will dare to even think of conducting such acts against us in the future. The new policy. If you kill one of us, we will kill 10 of you. If you kill 10 of us, we will kill 100 of you. If you kill 100 of us, then we will kill 1,000 of you. If you kill 1,000 of us, then we will raze you to the ground to the point where nothing will survive, not even fucking bacteria. That is as of now, the official policy of Kanahagakure no Sato, Tsunade concluded grimly, wide open in shock. For the first time in many decades, Danzo's jaws were wide open in utter shock. To think that he would hear such words from the granddaughter of Hashirama Senju, and the student of Hiruzen Sarutobi, Danzo had never expected this in his wildest dreams. A threat to the world. The reaction to the Hokage statement produced an extremely tense and awkward silence. Tsunade had just threatened the entire world, a feat that no one had dared to do before, and frankly speaking, they had never expected something like this to occur. A different Hokage. Finally, the representative of Mizu no Kuni spoke out, your grandson is not your grandfather, you would do well to remember that, he concluded in a gravelly and angry tone as everybody glared at her with malice. I believe I am a better judge of that, considering that unlike any of you, I have actually had the chance to know both of them, and I am in a far better position to make the judgment apart from others, she quipped back while a ripple of unease spread through the present diplomats. You can't take on the whole world, you know, the representative from the land of wind said softly, his eyes fixed on the Hokage. You seem to forget, sir, we already have, and we still came out on top, Tsunade replied quietly. At this, most of the diplomats flinched, remembering the First and Second Shinobi World Wars, when Konoha had fought against all the other hidden villages and emerged victorious. Daimyo-sama, Miyako began again, does the Hokage speak for you in the Land of Fire, she asked in a low voice, and everyone grew silent. The daimyo, who had been observing quietly, spoke for the first time. No, Lady Miyako, she does not, he said, and a smile appeared on her face. It quickly vanished as the daimyo continued, I speak for the Land of Fire and Kanahagakure no Sato, but in this instance, Hokage Dano's words are my own. The daimyo's quiet declaration caused worried frowns to cloud the delegates' faces. And what of our request to have Senju Reiha handed over to us for judgment? Miyako asked again. That will not happen. Not when your hidden village has the arrogance to so blatantly disregard the conventions of international relations and attempt such a heinous crime against an innocent child, and then dare to call us the offenders. As of now, we consider the words of your hidden village and your realm to be worth less than the dirt beneath our feet. And may I ask you to inform your uncle that if he intends to wage war with us over this incident, then let him know that we can do the same, and that we are far more adept at warfare than his own forces are capable of, the daimyo concluded softly, standing up to signal the meeting's end. As the assembled delegates left, they walked out with heavy hearts. They had not expected the meeting to go so far off track. So used to Sarutobi's pacifist tendencies, they had never expected the new Hokage to take such a heavy-handed approach in her replies. They realized immediately that Konoha would no longer allow others to run roughshod over it, and this truth was a sore point in their minds. As the delegation from the Land of Lightning departed, Lady Miyako's attendant was surprised to see a female attendant beckoning to her. Surprised, she paused for a moment as the woman approached. Miss Yujito, the Hokage would like a word with you, the woman spoke softly. Yujito was taken aback. As far as she knew, no one knew of her existence, and certainly not her true identity as the third in command of Kumagakure's shinobi forces. How did Konoha know about her? Everyone had thought she was a lady-in-waiting for Lady Miyako, and not a kunoichi. How did Konoha see through her disguise? Please follow me, the woman asked again, and Yujito nodded absently, following her. Why does she want to speak with me? She asked after a while. The attendant replied softly, she wishes for you to deliver a message to the Reikage. Yujito's eyes hardened as she considered the implications of that fact. As she entered the Hokage chambers, she noted that the Hokage was seated behind an ornate desk while three other elders were seated in a corner of the room. When the attendant came in, followed by Yujito, Tsunade thanked and then curtly dismissed her. After a cursory look from the Hokage, the three elders also walked out, leaving the two of them alone in the chamber. May I know why I have been called, Hokage-sama? Yujito asked quietly as Tsunade gazed at the young woman softly. You are Nii Yujito, yes? Tsunade asked quietly, and Yujito nodded in agreement. I have a gift for you, from my grandson, Tsunade spoke softly, gesturing to a small burlap sack on the corner of the desk. Intrigued, Yujito slowly walked toward the lumpy sack and opened it, then immediately stepped back in revulsion. Inside the sack was the severed head of her subordinate, Nakamura. What is the meaning of this? Yujito asked Tsunade sharply, beginning to analyze the situation. If Nakamura had been captured, then that meant Konoha was probably aware of her true identity. Don't overestimate yourself, girl, Tsunade spoke curtly, glaring at Yujito as if she were reading her thoughts. We had him under surveillance since before you planned the raid on Hayashi Hayawaga, Tsunade concluded, causing Yujito's eyes to widen. If it helps you know this, I personally took down Shigeo, Tsunade continued, and Yujito involuntarily took a step back. Tsunade excelled at deception, and she realized that her mixture of truths and lies was deeply unsettling the young woman in front of her. With a slight smirk, the Hokage continued. We let him be, because there is a saying in Konoha, hit him 3 times and even Buddha will get angry. This was the second and final warning we will give. Next time you try something like this, even I will not be able to hold back my grandson, little kitty, Tsunade spoke with a cruel smirk, causing Yujito to finally pale and sweat a little. Oh, please, Tsunade smirked, seeing the discomfort etched on the girl's face. Did you really think I wouldn't realize what you are? Girl, my grandfather used to keep that little furball in your stomach as a pet in our family backyard along with its other companions, and I have seen them all, even together. And you thought I wouldn't recognize that furball in your stomach? Hell, I used to kick it around in my childhood myself, along with my grandfather. You Kumo ninja truly do overestimate yourselves, Tsunade snorted while Yujito began to tremble in shock and outright humiliation. As she turned to leave, Tsunade gave one final parting shot. Tell that overgrown mastodon you call a cage and his equally bull-headed brother that next time your village pulls something like this, the consequences will be very unpleasant for him and his village. She spoke curtly while Yujito nodded jerkily and hastily walked out, trembling and shaken to her core. As she watched the girl leave, Tsunade let out a small smile. The girl was truly a tough and resourceful young woman, and given a few more years, she would be even more impressive. Of that, Tsunade had no doubt. She is like a shark in a pond of fishes, Tsunade thought quietly as she analyzed the girl. However, like Yujito, Tsunade too was a shark. But for all the bluster and bravado that the young woman had displayed, Tsunade had something the young woman lacked. 40 years in the water. As she watched the young woman leave, Tsunade heaved a silent sigh of relief. With any luck, once he heard of that confrontation, he would back off from making any more provocations. The man was extremely hard-headed, and his stubborn attitude was a minor legend in the shinobi community. To be honest, Tsunade had not truly relished taking such a hard stance, but she had belatedly realized what the other elders already had. In his zealous efforts to keep Konoha safe after the devastation caused by the Kyuubi, Sarutobi had unintentionally weakened Konoha's standing on the international scene. Now, it was up to her to make sure the situation did not deteriorate any further. She was sure that she would face a lot of dissension from the council for taking such a drastic step. She frowned. That was another thing she intended to change soon within the village. The council was beginning to overstep its authorities again, as they had with Sarutobi after he had assumed control following the Kyuubi's attack. She would have to show them exactly who was in charge again. Her grin turned feral as she imagined that delicious prospect. Well, that went well, a voice muttered quietly, and she turned around to see Jiraiya lounging on a chair at the opposite end of the room. That was all right, you know, at the conference, Jiraiya continued with that same infuriating smirk on his face. You did all right, Haim. You showed the world that you had guts, and for once, I don't mean those 2 hanging on your chest, he grinned wanly, while Tsunade just sighed. Although, in any other situation, that phrase would have seemed extremely crass and corny, for the moment she understood what her teammate was saying. Heh, you sure put a burr under everybody's saddle. Hell, I think you almost gave Danzo a hard-on, he chuckled as he continued in the same tone. One thing is for sure, they will now think twice before trying to poke their nose in our affairs again, Jiraiya concluded softly, as his gaze turned serious. All, except Kumagakur, and even you know it. He will have to do something drastic after this. He cannot afford not to. With what I have done here, he will face enormous loss of face at home, and he will have to do something drastic, if only to save his face and reputation, Tsunade replied softly. So, that is why you went so hard on that girl, huh? Jiraiya nodded, as if something had made sense. I guess so, but you know, with your declaration here, the other villages will probably make at least one aggressive probe toward us, just to check whether you were bluffing or not. And now, we will have to retaliate brutally against the next blow that will happen, which I can bet my ass is going to happen soon, Jiraiya warned her as he looked at her. I am not worried about them, Jiraiya. I am more worried about what will happen at home, Tsunade retorted calmly. Well, for the first time, I think even Danzo and the elders will be on your side, but Sarutobi-sensei is gonna kick your hide 6 ways to Sunday after what you have done here, not to mention the clan heads. Yep, the council is going to bitch about this royally, Jiraiya too agreed as he smirked. Then I will just have to show them why they are the council and I am the Hokage, but even I am worried about Sensei's reaction, Tsunade admitted softly. Yeah, well, we will deal with it when it happens, Jiraiya spoke out softly. Coming back to that, what happened with the task I gave you? Tsunade asked as she glared at him. In response to her question, she was rewarded with a slip of paper that he slid over the desk. "It is Akio's writing. I just received it when you were talking to that girl," that was all he said. "Who then is this Akio?" Tsunade asked. Akio, Tsunade, is a nom de plume, a mere identification mark, a name with which my informant has chosen to identify himself whenever he has sent me extremely sensitive information. He is important, not for himself, but for the great people with whom he is in touch with, if he actually is, for I have no means of verifying it. He is like the jackal with the lion, anything that is insignificant in companionship with anything that is formidable, not only formidable, but also sinister in the highest degree sinister. That is where his services become invaluable. For instance, he was the one who gave us the meager evidence we have against Danzo, and that's just an example of one of his major successes. That damn old criminal, Tsunade muttered with distaste as she wrinkled her nose, as the name of the former commander of Root was mentioned. "You give the man too little credit, Heim. I don't think you understand the scope and reach of that man, and neither did I, until Akio provided me with some of the information he had gathered. By calling Danzo a criminal, you are uttering libel in the eyes of the world, and there lies the wonder of it. The greatest schemer to have ever been born, the controller of the underworld, a brain that might have made or marred the destiny of many nations, that is the true extent of his capabilities. However, he is so aloof from general suspicion, so immune from criticism, so admirable in managing his public persona, that he could probably drag you, the Hokage, to court, when a case of defamation, and take compensation from you. A Hokage who uses her authority to bully a crippled old mana. That is how it would have played out if that were to happen. I have to admit, until I learned of the true extent of his activities from Akio, even I had underestimated the man. His involvement in clandestine affairs goes far beyond what we might have expected. Sarutobi-sensei should have disposed of him long ago," Tsunade growled in reply as she heard Jiraiya state his point. "But why then, did he not? Think on it, and you will notice the shroud that Danzo has woven around himself to ensure his safety. Tell me, have you ever entered his office in the Hokage Tower?" "Yes. Once or twice, when I have had the misfortune of doing so. Rather Spartan, isn't it, in its appearance?" "I suppose," Tsunade nodded gingerly. "Tell me, did you by any chance notice a small painting hanging behind his chair on the wall?" "Yes, but I didn't give it much notice." "Maybe you should have. That painting, Tsunade Heim, is a painting by Kondo Kurosaki, and it is worth more than 8 million ryo. Kondo Kurosaki is one of the most famous painters this world has ever seen, but that is not the point here. Haven't you yet wondered how a retired shinobi who was just a commander of a defunct Umbu division managed to acquire such a priceless piece of art? In addition, may I remind you, according to the records that Konoha has, his personal assets don't exceed the value of 6 million, and he receives an annual pension of only 400,000. By all accounts, he should have become a pauper when he bought that painting, and yet Jiraiya stopped as finally a flicker of interest came upon Tsunade's face. "How indeed?" Tsunade muttered thoughtfully as she too gazed at the tiny piece of parchment in front of her. "That's what amazed even me," Jiraiya admitted softly. "However, you have now seen the point of the picture. It shows him to be a very wealthy man. How did he acquire said wealth? He is unmarried, he has no rich relatives, and his personal familial inheritance is non-existent. And yet he owns a painting worth 8 million. Well? Oh, come on Tsunade, even you must get the inference," Jiraiya complained as he looked at the Hokage. "He has an unknown source of income and we don't know what it is," Tsunade concluded softly as she gazed at the tiny note, her respect for this unknown Akio raising a notch. "Exactly, once I got the information from Akio, I set my own information network on the trail, and do you know what we have found? Something of monumental importance, no doubt," Tsunade spoke up as she looked at Jiraiya expectantly. "Nothing." The answer rocked the Hokage right back on her heels. "That's," she began in a hushed tone, at which Jiraiya nodded. "Intriguing, isn't it? So, we have the ends of both sides, namely, we know that he has a clandestine source of income, which in its scope is enormous, and we know he controls it. But what we don't know is, what is it?" Tsunade asked quietly. "You don't understand the full picture, Heim. The man has hidden himself so effectively, that you underestimate him now more than ever. I mentioned the painting just to get your attention. I have no doubt that he has dozens of similar sources of income, each carefully hidden in a dozen different nations, no doubt," Jiraiya concluded. "And this Akio fellow found it all out?" Tsunade asked in a skeptical tone. "Not exactly. He was aware of them, of course, but he told me that if I wanted to find out more, I would have to do it on my own. He just nudged me in the right direction, that is all. I have no doubt that he knew everything, even before he told me," Jiraiya explained in a serious tone. "So, what has he sent you this time?" Tsunade asked as she gazed at the illegible writing, illegible to her at least. "Well, you see, what we have is a curious partnership. He sends me information, and in return, I send him information, and this time, he has sent me quite a juicy tidbit. Heh, looks like I will have to pay his price after all," Jiraiya chuckled. "Just what kind of information? And more importantly, who is this Akio, and why haven't I heard of him before?" Tsunade asked as she looked at Jiraiya with an inquisitive look in her eyes. "I don't know who he is," Jiraiya replied dismissively, at which Tsunade stood up in shock. "Are you serious?" she snarled as she gazed at her teammate. "Calm down, Tsunade," Jiraiya replied in a soothing tone, while she glared at him. "Jiraiya, how can you be so stupid? He could be an enemy of the village. He could be someone who could use your information to," Tsunade began when Jiraiya raised his hands, and she stopped her tirade. "Believe me, I have tried to find out who he is myself, but even I cannot find out. He contacted me 4 years ago, and offered the first bit of information as an opening deal between us. I would give him the information he needed, and in return, he would give me the information I needed. No personal contact between us at all, and that was his only condition. He also assured me that he had no desire in gaining any information on Konoha from me, and let's face it, if he can uncover all this information on Danzo, which I myself could not, then what is to say that he couldn't gain that information himself?" Jiraiya asked reasonably, while Tsunade considered that. "Well, this is a surprise," Jiraiya muttered as he looked at the parchment. "Tell me, Haim, have you received any proposals for a marriage between Reiha and a member of the Yamanaka clan, or the Abarame, or even the Kurama clan?" "Why, yes," Tsunade replied in a startled tone, "not just them though, even Seminyazuka has offered her daughter's hand in marriage, as have at least another 12 prominent families. It seems that the Gowai Kenbane is desperate to ensure that Reiha marries at the earliest, so that the Senju clan may be further revived. I however told them that the ultimate decision lies with him, and that I will not force him," she concluded quietly. "And you are lucky that you did so," Jiraiya replied softly. "What do you mean?" Tsunade asked quietly. "It means, Tsunade Haim, that Danzo has already made a move to ensnare Reiha in his web," Jiraiya replied grimly. "What?" Tsunade exclaimed in shock as she gazed at Jiraiya with widening eyes. "You don't know this, but when Sarutobi-sensei nominated your name for the position of the Godame, Danzo protested it, saying that you were unreliable because you had abandoned Konoha, and not looked back once. At that, Sarutobi-sensei replied that you had an extremely important reason to do so, and he further stated that it was so important that it could not be revealed even to the Gowai Kenbane. And boy, did Danzo flip at that. However, after that, Sensei conferred with the daimyo in private, and immediately after that, the daimyo nodded his assent to your appointment, flatly overriding all protests," Jiraiya explained quietly. "So Sensei," Tsunade began as she realized what had happened. "Yeah, he had to reveal to the daimyo that you were raising the great-grandson of the Naidame Hokage, who was the sole heir of the Senju clan, and against that, Danzo's protests were thrown out like waste paper. It seems that he had it planned out completely. That old monkey. When I get my hands on him," Tsunade stood up raging madly, but after a while, she sat down with a huff, with a wry smile on her face as she composed herself. "Yeah, he still hasn't lost his touch," Jiraiya chuckled as he looked at the princess. "So, what has this Akio sent to you this time?" Tsunade asked quietly. "It was he who informed me that Danzo was still maintaining and running Root as his own private militia, and that they had infiltrated almost all quarters of Konoha's government. Therefore, I asked him to find out who were his main supporters, and he has delivered. It appears that the Yamanaka, Abarame, and the Kurama clans are allied with him, and the majority of his militia is made up of their members," Jiraiya concluded as he gazed at Tsunade, who looked shocked beyond comprehension. "But, I know Inoichi and Shivi, Tsunade spluttered incoherently as she gazed at Jiraiya in shock. "I don't know about Shivi, but I will bet that Inoichi is as unaware of this as we were. He may be the clan head, but that does not mean that his clan members cannot go behind his back. I will bet that most of the Yamanaka clan members who are with Root have maintained their true allegiance with that division in utmost secrecy, and the Abarame, well, their mentality almost matches Danzo's, so I would not be too surprised if they were allied with him. Moreover, the Kurama, well, with what happened with the clan head's family, the clan has lost most of its prestige in the village, and unlike the other clans, they are not that well known, so I guess that they must have allied with Danzo in desperation to revive their lost status," Jiraiya concluded softly. "But what does this have to do with Reiha?" Tsunade asked in agitation as she glared at the piece of parchment. "Don't you see it, Haim? Reiha's arrival in the village threw all of Danzo's schemes into total anarchy. He is the great-grandson of the Naidame Hokage, and by that account the great-grandnephew of the Shodai, not to mention being your adopted grandson, of you, who is one of the Sunin and the current Hokage, and to top it all, he is now the last male Senju. By all accounts, a most enticing target for anybody looking to increase his or her political prestige in the village. By my information, he has already replaced even Uchiha Itachi as the most eligible bachelor in the village. Moreover, apart from all that, his capabilities are well known as well. Therefore, it was of the utmost importance to Danzo to ingratiate himself with the boy, but, you, were in his way," Jiraiya explained softly. "Me?" Tsunade asked incredulously as she took in the information. "Yes, you," Jiraiya replied authoritatively. "You raised him in secret, and moreover, you did not allow his existence to become public to the village, and that was a slap on the face to the Gowai Kenbane. If he had been raised in the village, they would have found a way to get the boy under their influence, but that was not possible. In addition, when you returned, you granted him his wish, and did not allow him to be a shinobi, placing him further beyond their reach. They are getting desperate, Tsunade. For them, the boy's heritage and the influence that comes with it is too great a chance to pass up. They will do anything to get the boy to endorse their ideology and viewpoints. And since you have forbidden any form of official contact with him, the only way they can get close to him is through someone who is close enough to him. And the only ones close to him are Sarutobi-sensei, you, Shizun, and me. And that will not work. So, they want someone else close to him. Someone who they believe can subtly influence even him, and thus, indirectly, gain a chance to influence even you. And who can be closer to a man than his wife, son of a bitch? Tsunade swore as the implications of what Jiraiya was explaining sunk into her mind. Ingenious, isn't it? Jiraiya chuckled quietly. Only a convoluted mind like Danzo's could come up with a scheme like this. The proposals from those 3 clans, specifically those 3 girls, you must avoid at all costs. I have no doubts that they are agents of Root. Jiraiya spoke quietly while Tsunade's face began coloring up. I am going to rip their freaking heads off, she roared as she smashed the desk into pieces and began to move ahead to deal with them immediately. Jiraiya instantly pulled her back. Calm down, he roared as the woman began to struggle to get out of his grip. Have you forgotten what Reiha is like? Hell, they would have a better chance of influencing a stone than him. That is why I said that you had done a good thing, by declaring that you would leave the choice to him, and those girls can never make him interested in them, no matter what they try, so he is safe for the moment, Jiraiya concluded as Tsunade ceased her struggles. Her eyes took on a hardened glint. The next time when the council would gather, they would be in for a very rude shock. But sooner or later, their patience will run out, and then we will have a problem on our hands, Jiraiya admitted quietly after a moment as he too gazed at Tsunade. So, what do you suggest then? She asked snidely as she gazed at him. Get him hitched, Jiraiya replied bluntly, while Tsunade's eyes widened. Get him hitched before the pressure on him by the council becomes too much, that will cripple all their plans, Jiraiya spoke quietly while Tsunade's eyes narrowed. You have got to be joking. Where in the hell will I find a girl who can match his temperament? You can't be serious, Tsunade replied haltingly as she gazed at Jiraiya. Where is he anyway? Jiraiya asked, at which she frowned. He said he had some personal business to take care of. Well, apart from that there is another way we can appease the council, Jiraiya began as he looked at her slyly. What is it? Tsunade asked, her eyes twitching. Well, the council is desperate for the Senju clan's revival, right? And this is an alternative if you don't want Reiha to be bothered, he began quietly, at which Tsunade narrowed her eyes. Go on, she spoke softly, as a suspicion began to form in her mind. Well, you are a senju as well, and if Reiha can't get hitched, then maybe you could get hitched instead, with me, and I assure you, I am more than manly enough to ensure the revival of your clan, Jiraiya replied with a lecherous grin on his face. With a sigh, Tsunade palmed her face, as her suspicion was proven true. The next moment, Jiraiya was punched through the door of her office and he went sailing through the air as he crashed down in a broken heap as he collided with the wall opposite to the room, while she left, and although she was furious, a small smile was still present on her face. Meanwhile, in Omega-Kur no Sato, was a minor shinobi village, which had had the misfortune of being located between 3 of the Great 5 nations. And despite being a small village in a backward nation, contradictorily for it, it was a highly industrialized village. It had been the hotbed of numerous wars, which had been fought on its ground, some by itself, which it had declared on others, and at other times, other nations had fought their wars on this ground as well. Overall, Omega-Kur was known as the most violent place in the shinobi nations. In addition, it was a rather loosely knit village, with many of its shinobi being missing nin or criminals. Lacking the power to have a cage status, it however had a leader, who while not being a cage, was a ninja whom even the other cages did not dare to offend. His name was Hanzo, and he was known all over as Salamander Hanzo, the man who had single-handedly defeated the 3 Sunin and bestowed upon them their title. However, today, Hanzo was in no mood to ponder upon all these facts, for he was busy in trying to find out why his village had been invaded by this person, who by all accounts, should not have been here in the first place. Senju Reiha, news of your exploits has reached even these aged ears, Hanzo spoke out in a guttural tone as he gazed at the young man who stood in front of him. The young man neither acknowledged him, nor did he deign to reply. He seemed to be scouting out the location. I have declared that my nation is in lockdown, and that shinobi from other nation are not to be allowed in, and yet, you have brazenly broken the decree, and invaded my home. Give me one reason as to why I shouldn't slay you where you stand, the man asked quietly as he gazed at the youngster. I am not a ninja, I am a civilian, the boy replied finally, as he gazed at the man who was standing on his summon, the king of salamanders, looking down upon him. Ah yes, I had heard something of this sort, the civilian ninja, or something of that sort, isn't that what you are known as nowadays? Begone, boy, I have no desire to bandy words about with Hiruzen's toys, or you will face my wrath. And this time, I will show you no mercy, as I once did, with your grandmother, the man growled as he looked at the boy. I must however, decline. You see, I am here, to reclaim vengeance on my clan's part, for the treachery you dealt it with. Today, you will perish, and I will see to it, Reiha replied softly, as he gazed at the legendary shinobi. You think you can beat me, who defeated even your grandmother, when she was with her team, a team that was said to be unbeatable in the entire world? Do not forget, boy, not only have I beaten your grandmother, but I was even responsible for, Hanzo snarled when Reiha interrupted him coldly, treacherously killing my great-grandfather, the Nidaime Hokage, after you betrayed him. Yes, I do know about it, the boy spoke out coldly, while Hanzo glared at him as he was stopped mid-tirade, before he could claim responsibility for having defeated the Nidaime Hokage. Your penchant for betraying your allies surpasses even your fame, Hanzo of the Salamanders. It is well known that you formed an alliance with Senju Tobirama and Konoha, and that you then betrayed him, by attacking him when he was with just a few of his guards, with an overwhelming force. And I also know that you are still forced to wear that breathing apparatus to survive, because of the crushing damage that he dealt to your lungs, before you treacherously killed him. Reiha spoke out quietly while Hanzo glared at the boy, cursing him for daring to look at him with such insolence. Instantly, he formed some hand seals and a javelin made of ice hurtled towards the young Senju. However, just as the javelin reached him, the boy unsheathed his sword, and in a brilliant streak of yellow light, slashed it into a dozen pieces. The Raijin, Hanzo exclaimed in shock as he warily eyed the blade in the boy's hands. He had not forgotten the damage that blade had inflicted on him all those years ago. So, reclaimed your family's weapon, have you? Hanzo muttered gutturally as he gazed at the blade wearily. He seemed surprised at the blade's size though. Instead of the broadsword, which it usually looked like when wielded by Rokusho Aoi, it seemed more like an ordinary sword. Only thing was, its blade was composed entirely of lightning. Yes, from that fool, called Aoi, I believe. Reiha replied softly. I suppose you are wondering why it looks so different. Well, this blade was designed so that it could be controlled by the user's chakra. The more uncontrolled and unrefined it is, the more heavier and ungainly it becomes, and its size makes it too unwieldy. However, in the hands of a senju, who is its rightful wielder, its true power is released, he finished. Hanzo, with a look of quiet intensity, gazed at Reiha, who was standing across from him with a cryptic look. Even so, its power is nothing compared to the might of my summon, Hanzo declared, his eyes fixed on the boy. Yes, I agree. Since you've shown me your summon, allow me to reveal my own. This isn't a true summoning, technically, but their power surpasses any known summon in the shinobi world, Reiha replied in a low voice, rapidly making hand seals and plunging his hands into the ground. Summoning Jutsu, Impure World Reincarnation. Hanzo, the salamander, watched in surprise as two coffins, bearing the tags 1 and 2, emerged from the earth. When they opened, for the first time in 50 years, even Hanzo took a step back in fear. Standing before him were the only two people he had ever feared in his youth. The Senju brothers, Senju Hashirama and Senju Tobirama. Author's note. Just one thing I'd like to clarify upfront. I'm sure many of you will complain that the council doesn't have this kind of power or authority, as you have in many of the complaints I've received, but I say it does, at least in my story. Let me explain. As a history major, I've studied such political structures. A feudal dictatorship, which is the closest parallel for a village like Konoha, often operates this way. In such places, nobility and councils hold immense sway over decision-making. While the strongest feudal lord is nominally the leader, a clear parallel to the Hokage, even they cannot afford to constantly antagonize their fellow feudal lords, even if they aren't as strong. I don't see why I can't use this kind of real-world realism in my story, and frankly, I don't see why you should complain either. Oh, and regarding his use of the Impure World Reincarnation, remember that he's originally Orochimaru's experiment. He has knowledge of many of Orochimaru's methods and techniques, so it's not unreasonable for him to use it. The wind swept hot across the desolate land. The soft whisper of its passage was the only sound in a place that had, moments before, echoed with the terrible music of war. But the war was over now. The battle was ended. The ancient shinobi, once a renowned icon throughout the ninja world, now lay helplessly on the ground, his back against a wall, his body covered in countless wounds. He could only stare at the young man who had done this to him. Who are you, to be able to do this? To me of all people? Hanzo of Omegakure wheezed out, coughing up a considerable amount of blood. He looked at the youngster standing before him, the Raijin no Ken glowing in his hands, flanked by the immortal bodies of his ancestors, awaiting the boy's commands. I don't see why that's relevant, Hanzo-san, Reiha replied matter-of-factly, his gaze fixed on the old shinobi. You were an enemy, and I did what anyone would do to defeat their enemy. It's to be expected in a battle, the boy concluded, as the old man snorted. You aren't a senju, boy. I know the senju well. No senju worthy of his blood would have dared to do what you have done here today, this emotionless slaughter, this precise and calculated massacre. I haven't seen such methodical destruction even in the era of warring clans. Even Danzo of Konoha's infamous drones had a shred of conscience, despite his claims otherwise, a shred that you completely lack. So, why are you doing this? Hanzo asked, but Reiha remained unfazed. I see. Reiha paused, looking at the old man. So you want a reason for why I've destroyed everything you hold dear. But reason exists for those who can't go on living without clinging to them. Vanish. Hanzo. With your death, the destruction of everything immoral in the shinobi world begins. Someone like you could never understand my reasoning, for it is beyond all reason. With that, the rage in no Ken flashed one last time, and a spray of blood flew into the air, ending the life of Salamander Hanzo. The teenager turned to face the immobile forms of Hashirama and Tobirama, who were staring at him with unreadable expressions. You disapprove of my actions, don't you? He asked, but the two ancient shinobi remained impassive. Your actions are not ours to judge, boy, Hashirama said softly, while Tobirama just glared at him. What you are doing has the potential to destabilize this entire world, but not doing so poses an even greater danger, so I will withhold judgment for now. Remember, there will be consequences for using this technique, but somehow, I think that for you, it won't matter. The second Hokage sighed, looking at his descendant before the teenager nodded. Hanzo's remaining supporters have been routed, he said, watching the commotion near the base of Hanzo's tower. Most are abandoning the hidden rain, but those who still have the will to resist us, a few dozen in total, seem to be regrouping near their leader's residence to make a last stand. Eliminate them. Leave no shred of Hanzo's tyrannical legacy behind, he ordered, as the two Kage leapt down to obey his commands. Even as these events unfolded, he didn't notice a pair of eyes watching his every move, assessing him, evaluating him, and etching his image into their minds. What do we do, Pain? Konan asked quietly, looking at the Deva Path, who was observing the events with a critical eye. Nothing, we do nothing. The palace of the daimyo of the Land of Lightning, around the same time. Lord Toranaga, the chamberlain of the daimyo of the Land of Lightning, took one look at his ruler's face and knew that blood would be shed soon. My lord, the chamberlain said, bowing deeply. Mori Masanari, the daimyo of the Land of Lightning, gave an imperial nod of acknowledgement in return. Lord Toranaga, my honored niece has informed me that the Grand Council of Daimyo and all the hidden villages hold our hidden village, Kumagakur no Sato, responsible for creating the situation that led to the destruction of our embassy in the Land of Fire and the subsequent deaths of our loyal citizens, who were blameless. The daimyo paused, trying in vain to control his rage. We are displeased. We are also displeased that the Raikage allowed his shinobi to create a situation that has nearly led our country to war. My niece tells me that Lord Shimazu, the ruler of the Land of Fire, is most irate and suspects foul treachery on our part. It seems he has issued orders to his own shinobi to deal with any of our shinobi without quarter. Therefore, I believe the time has come for us to show our shinobi forces why our word must be obeyed and make them aware of the consequences of disobedience. The chamberlain cautiously considered his ruler's bold suggestion. It was one thing to have a give-and-take relationship with the shinobi where they each played their part, but it was another thing entirely to openly threaten their subordinates. Still, he knew his lord would not back down. This was now a matter of prestige for the ruler, and he would not yield even if his life depended on it. Summon Darui and also, summon the Gold and Silver brothers, the daimyo ordered, and the chamberlain finally looked up at his ruler in shock. My lord, surely you don't mean to. The chamberlain half rose to protest, but his ruler raised his hand, stopping him mid-tirade. I think it's about time the Raikage learned there are limits to what I will tolerate from him and his shinobi, the daimyo said forcefully, glaring at the chamberlain, who bowed stiffly, his brow damp with sweat. As the chamberlain slowly turned to leave, he heard his ruler command him, Lord Toranaga, also please send a message to the Raikage, and ask him to select a replacement to serve as the new vessel of the two-tailed cat. Since it's because of the actions of the current vessel that our honor and our nation's honor have been stained, let him know that nothing less than her execution will expiate that stain. Our station and our dignity as the daimyo demand it, and we will accept nothing less. Inform the Gold and Silver brothers that this is our will. Yes, daimyo-sama. Meanwhile, at Kanahagakur no Sato, the Hokage, on the other hand, faced a problem of a very different nature. As rumors of her extraordinary performance at the Grand Council meeting spread, the gossip mills inside the village were churning non-stop. Nevertheless, the ninja of Konoha unanimously agreed that the Hokage's bold decision to address the world from a position of strength had been a shrewd move. The other shinobi villages had no doubt expected Konoha's ninja to be their usual reticent selves in the face of adversity. Not this time. Senju Tsunade had proven herself a formidable foe. Many of the ninja felt comforted knowing that the Hokage was taking control. The Hokage was the one person in the village for whom both civilians and ninja held the most respect. Some ninja thought of the Hokage as a zealot whose love for the village bordered on obsession, but even they agreed that when it came to fighting the village's enemies, the Hokage was the one who would stand up and play hardball. Most shinobi had actually relished the change Tsunade's rule had brought to the village. The sort of complacency that had been present during Sarutobi's reign had all but vanished, as Tsunade had introduced many radical changes to improve the village's efficiency, and they were thriving on it. However, some of the council heads were not too pleased. They believed that the Hokage was moving too fast and becoming too reckless. Then came the kicker. When the details of the meeting were made public, many members of the council decided it was finally time to rein the Hokage in before she endangered them all with her reckless actions. The poor fools had no idea that Tsunade intended to return their favor with a vengeance. As she entered the council chambers, flanked by Jiraiya and Shizun, Tsunade knew this would possibly be the stormiest council meeting in the village's history. The Konoha Council was divided into two parts, the shinobi and the civilian. The Shinobi Council comprised all the clan heads and the leaders of the village's major shinobi organizations, including the Umbu, TNI, the Medic Corps, and so on. They generally advised the Hokage on matters related to the village's military forces. Similarly, the Civilian Council held sway over all non-military issues, like the economy, trade, agriculture, and local administration. By law, the Civilian Council was not allowed to interfere in the Military Council, but recently, it had brazenly encroached upon this forbidden territory, and now, she intended to rectify it. After the fourth Hokage's death, the third Hokage had been forced to hand over the general administration of the village to this council, as the Military Council was up to its neck in its efforts to ensure the village's safety. By the time the third and the Military Council had managed to secure Konoha from foreign threats, the Civilian Council had firmly entrenched itself in the village's military infrastructure, and the Hokage had found it difficult to dislodge them from this position for fear of risking a civil war. As she entered the council, Tsunade noticed that many of the shinobi were giving her glowing looks, while the civilians were looking at her with a range of emotions, from fear to loathing. Tsunade-sama, Shikaka Nara, the Jonin commander of Konoha, began with a grim smile, "Welcome back to Konoha. You've been missed." Shikako paused to allow the council members to greet her, then made his request. "Please, come with us. The Elder Council has assembled. There's much to be discussed." "Fine," the woman muttered, crossing her arms. "Let's get this over with." The various mutterings inside Konoha's council chamber went silent when Tsunade entered the room, with the third and the two advisors, Homura and Koharu, at her back, followed by Shimura Danzo and Jiraiya. "Now, since that irritating Grand Council meeting is over," the Slug Princess replied as she strode across the chamber to assume the Hokage's place at the head. "Let's get right down to business," she continued, sitting down. "I want a complete report on the border situation. I've been brought up to speed a little, but I want details. I especially want to know if any of the other villages have moved forces near our village, and I want a complete analysis of the intelligence reports in my hands by the end of the day." Tsunade's clipped, businesslike tone caused several Civilian Council members to stir nervously. She had no interest in tolerating the ceremonial niceties her esteemed predecessor had. The clan heads and other shinobi representatives concealed their grins. "Well, Tsunade-sama," Homura began, looking at the reports in front of him, "as of now, all the other villages are maintaining their distance from us, but we expect a sharp spike in skirmishes with Kumo in the near future, and we need to decide on how to deal with that as soon as possible. Pardon my interruption, Hokage-sama, but we wish for you to provide us with some clarifications about certain rumors that have been permeating through this village, about certain events that have occurred at the Grand Council meeting." A member from the Civilian Council spoke up, looking at the Hokage, who had narrowed her eyes at the interruption, a vein pulsing in her forehead. She noticed that many of the Shinobi Council members seemed resigned to such interruptions. Just how deep did this rot run? "I was under the impression that military matters were of no concern to the Civilian Council," Tsunade questioned, her gaze sweeping the elders for an explanation, who had the decency to look sheepish, while the Civilian Council appeared flustered. "It is our concern when your actions have the potential to drag our village into a conflict with not just one, but every village in existence." "Tsunade-sama," the counselor spoke again, a hint of venom lacing his tone as the room's temperature rose noticeably. This was a thinly veiled diplomatic accusation that the new Hokage wasn't performing her duties efficiently. The blonde Sunin held the counselor's stare, determined to assert her dominance. She was Hokage now, and the Civilian Council's constant meddling in the leader's affairs would no longer be tolerated. Perhaps it would be a whole lot smarter," Tsunade shot back, knowing he was right but unwilling to admit it, "not to insinuate that I'm a liar. I know what I'm doing, and that's all that matters. I won't hear this issue again." But the Civilian Council, too accustomed to Sarutobi's gentle diplomacy, failed to notice the signs of impending doom that many shinobi recognized. This was not going to end well. "As of now," another counselor interrupted, "Konoha has precious few resources to spare, given the mounting situation on our borders," he said, looking at the Hokage. "It is a matter of concern to us, as this has the potential to escalate into something beyond our control," he concluded gently, a logical point laid on the table. "Despite not being shinobi, we too live in this village, and this is our business as well since it affects us. That fact alone gives us all the authority we need. On behalf of the citizens, you must listen to us." The first counselor spoke out again, causing many eyebrows to raise at the bold statement. "We are not unsympathetic to your position, Counselor," Tsunade spoke curtly. "But the shinobi have held dominion over the village since the foundation of hidden villages, to safeguard an ancient, mutually shared destiny. We do not have the luxury of considering the interests of others. We are required to make hard choices, driven by self-interest. These may, at times, not suit the rest of the village." She paused, as the subtle, implied message that the civilians had no choice but to listen to the shinobi was delivered once again, causing many Civilian Council members' faces to redden as she continued. "But the rest of the world now threatens us. They have repeatedly threatened us and injured us. Only a fool would not expect us to defend ourselves. "Are you a fool, counselor?" she asked directly, as everyone froze, witnessing the blatant dressing down being delivered by the Hokage. "And so you decide to place the lives of everyone in this village at risk, just because they demand your grandson's life as payment? What hypocrisy!" That was as far as the man got, for in the next instant, he found himself hoisted into the air, as Tsunade's hand crushed his throat in a vice-like grip, dangling in mid-air with his feet kicking wildly. "Listen very carefully to what I say, civilian," she enunciated clearly as a terrified silence reigned in the chambers. "The fact that I even allow you to speak to me directly in this chamber is a gift I bestow upon you. You do not order me. You beg for my appreciation and then wait to see if I choose to bestow it upon you," she growled, as the man's eyes rolled back and he began to lose consciousness. "Tsunade, that's enough." Sarutobi's booming voice cut through the silence, shearing it like a scythe through a stalk of wheat. With a disdainful snort, Tsunade flung the now terrified civilian counselor with a jerk of her hand. He flew through the air, colliding with the wall on the opposite end and sinking into a dead faint. Though Tsunade's method violated all known debate procedures, it had an immediate impact on the council, halting all conversation instantly. The elders looked at the Hokage in shock, noting the vein pulsing on her temple. The clan heads looked at their shocked civilian counterparts with a bit of amusement, though the degrees varied. The Inyazuka pack leader almost burst into mocking laughter. As the dust settled, it revealed a small impact crater where the unconscious counselor had struck the ground. The Slug Princess looked around the room, demanding order, and not a soul dared to challenge her. "Just because the Sandaime chose to indulge your whims and fancies, do not dare to assume that I shall allow you the same liberties. Do not delude yourselves into thinking that I know nothing of what you have all done behind his back," she retorted, staring at the now terrified civilian council members who were looking at her in absolute horror. You can't." Another terrified member squeaked out, as Tsunade gave a cruel smile. "Oh, are you afraid that your dirty laundry is about to be aired in public? Let me see if I can clear the air a bit," she spoke as she looked at Jiraiya, who silently handed her a sheaf of papers. "Inside this are the detailed descriptions of every fraudulent activity you all have undertaken under the council's name. These lists contain the details of the properties you have misappropriated, the innocent victims you have framed and sentenced to various punishments to settle personal vendettas, the amount of wealth you have embezzled from the village, down to the last ryo. Everything is in here," she spoke harshly, throwing the documents across the desk carelessly. The chamber became a literal din as the various counselors suggested theories and made wild accusations, while the shinobi council members took their time examining the documents. They were surprised to see the documents were completely accurate, even mentioning the exact time the fraudulent activities were conducted. "As of now, you have a choice," Tsunade continued, looking at the quaking civilian counselors, who all had the look of a deer cornered by a predator. "All of you will leave here voluntarily and surrender your positions in the council, and pay back to the village every last dime you stole, after which, you and your families will quietly leave the village with your lives intact, never to return, on pain of death. Fail to do so, and I shall have every single one of you executed and have your families and clans dispossessed of all their belongings and banished, with the stigma of being traitors attached to their names," she concluded, as Sarutobi looked at her in shock. But after a few minutes, the old man resigned himself to what was occurring and shrugged it off, signifying his assent. Slowly, the civilian council members stood up, as Umbu members came forward to escort them out of the building. Sighing deeply, Tsunade sank into her chair, looking at Sarutobi. "Sarutobi-sensei, once this is all over, I want you to personally select and create a new civilian council, and please make sure that this time, it is made up of civilians who are, or were, in any case, shinobi. Having pure civilians in the council was just a disaster waiting to happen, especially in a military society like ours," she concluded, as many of the shinobi council members murmured their assent. "Now that this trifling matter is over, I think it is time we return to the original matter at hand," Kohara spoke curtly, deftly steering the situation away from the tense atmosphere. "Indeed, but I would like to know how the Hokage managed to gather such incriminating evidence against the traitors of the former civilian council in such a short time," Danzo mused, looking at Tsunade, who gave a thin smile. "I am the Hokage, Danzo-san. There is nothing in this village that remains a secret from my eyes, nothing, not even those which are considered inviolate," she spoke curtly, as a ripple of unease spread through all the clan heads, specifically the Uchiha and the Hyuga, whose knuckles whitened in tension as all the clan heads shared an uneasy look. "Which brings me to the point, I have a few decrees to issue as of now," she continued, looking at all the clan heads, who seemed to sit up a bit straighter. "As of now, the Uchiha military police is disbanded. Instead, it will be reformed as the Konoha military police and will no longer be manned solely by Uchiha clan members," she announced curtly, as Fugaku rose to protest, only to be silenced by a glare from Jiraiya. "Furthermore, I hereby grant the request of the Uchiha clan to move their enclave into the village. This can begin as soon as the Uchiha clan finishes their preparations." That nearly caused an uproar, as Fugaku Uchiha finally fell back into his seat, an astonished look on his face. However, as he looked at the Hokage's face, she gave him a curt nod, at which his heart nearly skipped a beat. She knew. She knew what they were planning, and she was offering an olive branch before it came to that. Hokage-sama, surely, there is no need for. Homura began hesitantly when Tsunade cut in with icy clarity. No need? I think you underestimate the gravity of the situation we face, Elder, or did you just forget the fact that we have just forced every hidden village in the world to reassess their opinion of us? Do you think that any of those villages, and especially Kumagakure, will sit still when we have so blatantly humiliated them in front of the entire world? Now, more than ever, we need every single one of our shinobi to stave off the skirmish that is about to come. And I don't think that having the most powerful members of the most powerful clan in the village confined as mere policemen in such a crucial time is a viable option, considering their task can be conducted by mere chinin. Frankly speaking, it is an insult to a capable clan like the Uchiha, and I will not see such valuable assets squandered in such a crucial time, she retorted harshly, while Homura and Kohara frowned. Tsunade knew the actual reason the elders wished the Uchiha to be confined, and frankly, she thought the rationale was pure bullshit. However, she wanted to see if the counselors had the courage to voice their true reasoning in public, but she knew they would not. They couldn't afford to, as they didn't have a shred of proof. Do not think that I favor your clan unduly, Fugaku. Tsunade turned to the Uchiha head, who was looking rather smug, as she gave him a dose of harsh reality as well. Time and again, your clan has claimed to be the best in the village, now it is time for you to prove it, she retorted calmly, as Fugaku nodded curtly. We will not let you down, Hokage-sama, the man promised, as his mind began to analyze the rationale behind such a radical move. She knows more than she is letting on. Maybe there is still a way out. Concerning the events that have occurred in the Grand Council meeting, Kohara continued, looking at Tsunade with an inscrutable look. It is guaranteed that the other villages will now definitely try to make at least one aggressive attempt against our forces to determine if the Hokage's statements were true or a calculated bluff. Therefore, I believe we have no choice but to react in an extremely brutal way to the next aggressive probe by any of the other villages, regardless of the situation. The response must be so brutal that all the other nations must become aware that Konoha will no longer tolerate such insults, the old woman continued, as the other members gave their assent, albeit hesitantly. So, all that needs to be done is for us to see who will take the first plunge, Kumo, or any of the other villages, Shikaka mused, as everyone fell silent. Suddenly, their concentration was diverted by the sound of a small toad, which had just teleported in front of Jiraiya with a scroll tied to its back. Frowning, Jiraiya took the scroll out and began to read the contents. As his eyes progressed further, his shoulders slackened considerably, and his eyes widened to comical proportions. Jiraiya! Tsunade called out as the toad sage finally handed the scroll to his teacher, who was sitting next to him, wiping his brow. I don't think anybody will be conducting any aggressive probes against us in the immediate future, Tsunade. Your grandson has just seen to that, he spoke wanly, as Saratobi suddenly began to cough, accidentally choking on the ashes from his tobacco pipe. His eyes, too, went wide after seeing what was written inside. What do you mean? Reiha has just killed Salamander Hanzo in single combat. Shin, Fu, Torun, I have a mission for the three of you, Danzo spoke out as he eyed the three ninja kneeling in front of him. The new Hokage has taken a somewhat surprising turn in her attitude towards our village. While I still remain concerned about her ideology regarding our village and the ninja world in particular, here Danzo paused, as he looked at the three kneeling ninja in front of him. Even I have to admit that she is probably the most powerful shinobi in the village at the moment. The elder concluded with a gravelly tone as he paced around. This brings much greater complications than before, the commander of Root continued. With the recent upheavals from Kumo, we were anticipating a violent testing of our defenses, and more importantly, our will, by the other villages to test the new Hokage's resolve, but now, the condition of the shinobi world is more critical than ever. I knew, or rather, suspected, that Tsunade would not have made such a boast in front of the Grand Council without an adequate ace up her sleeve. Danzo paused, his eyes narrowing. But sending her grandson to assassinate Hanzo was a masterstroke that even I would not have expected of her. Unspoken but implied in that message was the fact that even Danzo had actually been shocked to learn that the senju boy had pulled off such an impossible feat on his own without any support. Hanzo was a name known to every shinobi in existence. The man had single-handedly protected and successfully guarded a megakure through 3 world wars and had managed to thwart the Great Five villages many times. He was the man who had single-handedly defeated the 3 Sunin when they were in their prime and had given them their title. A megakure was, for all purposes, even if unacknowledged, the 6th great village, and Hanzo was, for all purposes, the unofficial and unrecognized. A mekage. For a single teenager, even if he was a senju, to best Hanzo's personal defenses, eliminate the man himself, and then escape from a megakure alive was a feat worthy of being hailed as nothing short of legendary. A feat which would instill in every one of their enemies a sliver of fear about Konoha's new ruthlessness and prowess, which he suspected was the purpose behind this assassination. He knew from personal association, of course, just how paranoid and fanatical Hanzo's security apparatus was, and he knew that regardless of what had transpired, the remnants of Hanzo's regime would be baying for blood, and it would not be sated until they had Reiha in their clutches. This event. Danzo paused, has now given us the opportunity we need to cement our new status as a true village of assassins, a village of true shinobi who have shed the shackles of pacifism that had been forcibly imposed upon us, but above all else, for this to happen, the senju boy must be protected at all costs. If the information I have received is correct, then at the moment, the boy is making his escape from the land of rain and is making his way back home. However, his path leads him through a route that will take him through the borders of Ta no Kuni and Kaminari no Kuni. Few finished for him, as Danzo looked at his subordinate without any emotion. Exactly. Danzo grunted gutturally. And rest assured, just like us, I am sure that the other villages, too, have by now been notified of exactly what has transpired in the land of rain. If the Kumo-nin are even remotely intelligent, which we know they are, even they, too, should have come to the inescapable conclusion that Reiha must pass through their borders first if he has to reach his home. Having the senju, the one who is responsible for all their current misfortune, alone and unaided within their territory is a chance that they cannot afford to ignore. Konoha cannot officially send its troops to that side of the border right now. However, fortunately for us, we are not bound by the red tape of bureaucracy. You three are to immediately head to the border regions of Hai no Kuni and infiltrate Kumo's borders. Make contact with the Hokage's grandson and escort him safely back to our village. Konoha's victory over the Grand Council will not be complete until the Hokage's grandson returns to the village in triumph. Besides, for our new image to be upheld in the shinobi world, this is essential, the old man concluded, while the three men in front of him vanished instantly to execute his orders. Danzo was right on most points, except for two. First, he had assumed that Reiha had assassinated Hanzo on Tsunade's orders when actually, even Tsunade was just as in the dark about this event as he was. Second was his guess that the Kumo-nin would be planning to ambush Reiha as he made his way through their borders. In a normal scenario, it would have been true, however, Kumo at that moment was in an upheaval of its own, namely, trying to recapture the jinhyuriki of the two-tailed cat, Yujito Nii, who had just become a nuke nin. Yujito Nii, the jinhyuriki of the Nibi no Nikomata, was currently trapped in the most dangerous situation she had ever found herself in. Currently, she was running for her life in the forests within the borders of Kaminari no Kuni and Ta no Kuni, as a horde of men chased her, armed to the teeth. The reason she was in this predicament was that the daimyo of Kaminari no Kuni had ordered her execution, holding her responsible for the massive loss of prestige his land had suffered, and orders had been sent to the Reikage, demanding nothing short of absolute compliance, lest Kumagakure no Sato itself be razed to the ground. Realizing the dire situation, Ei had complied after reassessing his priorities. Even the Yondaime Reikage could not afford to risk the daimyo's wrath any further, lest he endanger himself. Besides, from a tactical point of view, even she, the jinhyuriki of the two tails, was expendable. After all, compared to the eight-tailed beast, she was on the lower scale of the food chain, not to mention the fact that B was more valued than her, and that was ignoring the fact that he was Ei's brother. Besides, executing jinhyuriki and making new ones at a whim was nothing new to her village. It was basically a time-honored tradition in Kumo. However, Yujito was not willing to lie down and let herself be killed. It was not out of a desire to live, but a matter of pride. All her life, she had served her village faithfully and loyally, and her record had always been spotless. A matchless record and a stellar array of skills, and her absolute loyalty to her village had seen her name in contention for the position of the 5th Reikage, no less, along with Darui's name. The first woman to ascend to the post of Reikage, which could and should have been her fate. However, fate, it seemed, had other plans in store for her. Her spotless record had been tarnished for the first time when her mission to assassinate Hayashi Hyuga had the misfortune of being intercepted by none other than the new Godame Hokage herself. As good as her men were, they were never a match for the likes of someone like Tsunade Senju in person. The fact that her team member had mutinied was the only reason she had escaped official censure. The second case, again with the Hyuga, she snorted. Ei was obsessed with obtaining the Byakugan since it had been his father, the 3rd Reikage's last wish, and now, just for obeying her orders like a true shinobi, she had been left to the proverbial wolves. If death was to be her reward for being a loyal soldier, then she would rather live by being disloyal and deliver Kumo an even greater blow for the treacherous way it had treated her. A rogue jinhyuriki could never survive individually, she knew that. A jinhyuriki without allegiance to any village was too tempting a prize to be ignored, and she would have hunters from every village, and without, after her head. Nevertheless, she would not give up, not until she had taken the life of the man who was the cause of all her misfortune, Senju Reiha, the grandson of the Godame Hokage. Darui, she, and a battalion of Kumo ninja were currently in hot pursuit of Yujito, along with the special shinobi contingent of the Lightning Daimyo's court, the king and Kyode, and their shinobi contingent, who served as the daimyo's immediate and personal guard and, more importantly, executioners. Darui was currently contemplating how the situation had gotten out of hand so quickly. After receiving the daimyo's orders, a near mutiny had broken out in Kumo because despite her recent failures, Yujito was a highly respected ninja, and tempers had run high. However, the law prevailed and the Reikage's will was absolute. Only Darui and she knew how dire the situation was. Kumagakure's very survival now depended upon Yujito's execution. The daimyo had made it crystal clear. It was both a warning and a punishment, reminding Kumo that they were subservient to the daimyo's power. Moreover, they could not resist, lest they spark a civil war along the lines of Mist and Kirigakure. Already, a terrific fight had ensued between Ei and B, when B had flatly refused to go after Yujito, so much so, that he was willing to lay his life on the line for his fellow Jinhyuriki, something that despite the situation, Darui could not help but admire. However, the fact remained that Yujito, despite everything to the contrary, was the third strongest shinobi in Kumagakure, a position that had been contested hotly for between the two of them. Darui knew that only the skills he had acquired under the tutelage of the third Raikage allowed him to compete as a near equal to her. However, should she ever manage to completely tame her beast like B, then even he too, he knew, would not stand a chance against her. But they might, he thought uneasily, as he looked at his companions, the infamous King and Kyode, the descendants of the even more infamous Kinkaku and Ginkaku, the two most powerful and most reviled criminals in Kumo's history. The original Kinkaku and Ginkaku were two infamous brothers who had managed to survive after being eaten alive by the Kyuubi no Kitsune, wherein they had actually eaten literally the flesh of the Kyuubi itself, inside its stomach, and had survived for 7 days, before the beast itself spat them out. Because of this, a sliver of the Kyuubi's chakra resided within the brothers, imbibing them with the abilities of a Jinhyuriki, even without housing a Baijuyu within them. This conversely made them actually strong enough to wield the 5 treasures of the Rikudo Sennin, without any of the fatal drawbacks usually accompanied with using the said items. Pseudo-Jinhyuriki, with all the abilities of one, without any of the drawbacks involved. These abilities made them prideful beyond belief, and their violent tendencies became even more pronounced, until they became criminals, willing to overthrow the village itself. In an attempted coup, they had managed to kill the Naidame Raikage and brought the Naidame Hokage, Tobirama Senju, close to death, when they had ambushed a peace summit between Kumo and Konoha, thereby effectively wrecking any chance of peace with Konoha forever. The second Raikage had been killed, while the second Hokage had barely managed to escape with his life, and afterwards, had again run into the misfortune of running into Salamander Hanzo, who used this chance to betray Konoha, and had managed to kill the weakened Senju leader by effectively exploiting the situation. Finally, in a gigantic battle, costing nearly a quarter of the strength of Kumo itself, the two brothers had been killed. However, when it became apparent that their imbibed ability of wielding the Kyuubi's power had been passed on to their descendants had run straight to the daimyo and offered the services of their family in perpetuity in return for protection from Kumo. The daimyo at the time was quick to see the benefits of having a clan of shinobi capable of taking on a shinobi village single-handedly, and had granted them his patronage and protection, and that clan had forever served as guardians of the lightning daimyos. When it became public that the abilities inherited from Kinkaku and Ginkaku had mutated, allowing the clan members to tame and subdue a tail beast's chakra, it had worried even Kumo. A clan capable of subduing Kumo's 2 Jinhyuriki, its most powerful weapons, who served as the daimyo's personal executioners. It was simply a message by the daimyo, stating that he held within his hands the power to subdue even the village's greatest weapons, should they ever rebel in the future, and forever the clan had hung over Kumo's head like the perpetual sword of Damocles. However, all that had come to a head, after nearly 20 years, when the clan members had desired to fully gain the power of the Kyuubi, and had attempted to kidnap the second Jinhyuriki of the Kyuubi, Uzumaki Kushina. What was not known, however, at that time, was that Kushina was the fiancé of the Yellow Flash. When the Yellow Flash had learnt that his betrothed had been kidnapped, he had single-handedly pursued them, and in the ensuing battle, the clan had been subjected to what could only be termed as genocide under the enraged Namikaze Minato's hands. The two brothers, the current king and Kyode, the grandsons of the original Kinkaku and Ginkaku, had been the only survivors of that massacre. But, for the daimyo to send them again, meant that he was now truly willing to risk even civil war, just to soothe his hurt pride, by ordering the execution of Yujito, who had predictably retaliated, and now, they had a robed Jinhyuriki on their hands. This was too troublesome. Senju Reiha, on the other hand, had a different problem. After wiping out Hanzo's retainers in his tower, he had made his way out of Omegacore's borders, when he realized that he had underestimated the loyalty Hanzo's men had towards their fallen leader. He had underestimated it very badly, if the nearly 80 Omegacore Jonin chasing after him were any clue. He was currently making his way through the northwestern border of Kumo and Ta no Kuni, when one of his shadow clone scouts dispelled and relayed him some information, some very interesting information. It was time to go to work. Yujito was getting nearly desperate. She knew who was chasing after her, of course. The king in Kyode, the bane of every Jinhyuriki in Kumo, and accompanied by Darui, and she, no less. With the best censor in Kumo helping them, she knew that her chances of really making it out was dire. Her only hope was to cross out of Kumo's border, and infiltrate the borders of another village. And if she was lucky, she could maybe lure her pursuers into the patrol routes of a Megacore ninja. Then, the Kumo ninja would have no choice but to abandon their pursuit. Daimyo orders or not, she knew that Darui would never let Kumo Ninja get into conflict with Salamander Hanzo's men. No one messed with Hanzo on their own. No one human at least. Even more important was her desire to avoid falling into the clutches of the king and Kyode, because she knew that if she fell into the hands of those two, then staying alive would be the least of her concerns. The two brothers' penchant for kidnapping young women and brutally using them as pleasure slaves, before they disposed them off, was well known. The daimyo had turned a blind eye to these misdemeanors, because of their usefulness, but she knew, without a doubt, what her fate would be, if she fell into the hands of those two brothers. As engrossed as she was in her thoughts, she was caught completely unawares, when suddenly, a hand covered her mouth, and dragged her up into the canopy of trees. Before she could attempt to even struggle, a soft whisper came into her ears: "If you wish to survive, do not make a noise. This cloaking genjutsu can protect us, only if we remain completely still." Just as Yujito prepared to retort, the Kumo battalion that was pursuing her came to the bottom of the very tree, upon which she and her mysterious rescuer were situated. "She is gone," she muttered quietly, as he looked around at the surroundings. "Her chakra has completely vanished." Vanished, or cloaked, Darui mused, as he looked at the surroundings. For some reason, his eyes were inexplicably drawn towards the panoply of trees, which hung overhead. "She is here, I can smell her beast," a guttural voice came out, as one of the two brothers came forward. He was a burly shinobi, with a muscular build and towering stature. He seemingly possessed long, gold-colored hair with prominent dark tips, arranged in a style reminiscent of a Native American headdress. These features are accentuated by the presence of two distinctive horns that emerged from the abundant hair on his head, as well as a light-colored rectangular marking on his nose. His attire was comprised from the standard Kumagakure flak jacket, worn over a high-collared sleeveless uniform, and a pair of simple wrist guards. The kanji 4 gold was tattooed upon the shoulder of his exposed left arm. All in all, he looked like an exact replica of his grandfather, the original Kinkaku. "When I find that whore, she is gonna regret making me chase after her. Damn, no one does this to us, no one. That bitch is going to pay, big time," he growled, while the Kumo ninja looked at him, with unease in their eyes, while a few of them growled, knowing full well what the man intended to do to Yujito. As his mind thought about Yujito, Kinkaku's mind recreated the image of the beautiful woman in his mind. "I will kill tonight, and you will be my prize. You will serve me and my brother." Kinkaku, even cold and wet, felt himself stiffen. Kinkaku knew that he deserved this woman. He and his brother had served the daimyo well. The woman was a spoil of war, and when he and his brother finished with her, he would pull her and force her to her knees. She would service him again. The ultimate submission. Then at the moment of his own climax, he would slit her throat, and wrench that beast out of her corpse. "Where is she? Any luck?" Darui asked again, while the censor shook his head. Kinkaku growled, turned around, and roughly pushed the men around him as he made his way towards his brother, who had been silent the entire time, and had been staring at the top of the elder tree at the end. With a smile, he reached for his younger brother, and laid his hand on his younger brother's shoulder, only to jerk back in shock as he watched Kinkaku's head roll off its shoulders. His primal roar of rage shook every Kumo shinobi out of their reverie as they raced to the man. One look at the decapitated corpse of Ginkaku had them all pull their weapons out, searching for threats. Kinkaku gave a guttural roar of rage as red-colored chakra poured out of his body, in a trickle, even as he raced into the forest, roaring like a beast. "Shit! Manji formation, all of you, in teams of 4, Darui growled, as the Kumo ninja gathered in groups of 4 and took guarding positions. Darui watched camouflaged within the large redwood tree that stood opposite the elder tree as his group took flanking positions around the area. The team's movements were fast and fluid, professional. The men charged into the areas with their weapons drawn. They fanned out quickly, moved in pairs. They checked every tree, every branch, and every single shrub in the area, even the roots. Atop the tree opposite the area, which was nearly 140 meters tall, from his extremely well-concealed vantage point, Darui watched the search, with what appeared to be a calm and dispassionate eye. However, if anybody had looked carefully beyond those opaque eyes, they would have noticed that he was a seriously pissed-off individual. In fact, Darui was not annoyed at the attackers per se. Sure, at first, he'd been annoyed with himself for not picking up the arrival of the attackers far earlier. It was only after Ginkaku had bit the dust did he realize that he had walked into one spectacular ambush. What really made him angry, however, was that he had lost the initiative in this little skirmish. The assaulters had caught him off guard, and had forced him to abandon his comfort zone, thereby denying him room to maneuver. Well, he would soon fix that, permanently. He tried desperately to fight his anger. He couldn't allow himself to be angry. He couldn't afford to feel that way. Whenever he found himself beginning to get angry, Darui always remembered the lesson that the Sandaime Reikage had imparted to him. The third had had a cocky, hard-edged lecture style that Darui had liked, a rapid-fire series of questions and answers that had proceeded in a simple, logical procession. In any combat exchange, he had said, be it a world war or an isolated one-on-one standoff, or even if it is a one-against-many scenario, the first question you always ask yourself is, what is your opponent's objective? What does he want? Unless you know the answer to that question, you'll never be able to ask yourself the second question, how is he going to get it? And I will tell you right now, Darui, that the second question is of far greater importance to you than the first. Why? Because what he wants is insignificant insofar as strategy is concerned. What he wants is an object, that is all. World domination, unlimited wealth, women, it does not matter. Who cares? Knowing of it means nothing, in and itself. How he plans to get it, on the other hand, means everything, because that is action. And action can be stopped, because every action has an equal and opposite reaction, but armed with such foreknowledge, it becomes an opposite and a superior reaction. So, once you have answered this second question, then you can proceed to question number 3, what are you going to do to stop him? When he had been speaking about command and leadership, the third Raikage had repeatedly stressed the need for cool-headed reason. A ninja, acting under the influence of rage or frustration, would only get himself killed. As a ninja, he had said, you simply cannot afford to get angry or upset. Perfect, phase 1 complete, phase 2 starts, now, Reiha muttered, even as he noticed Darui take effective measures to prevent any further attacks. Just as planned. Then, as Reiha had expected, the Omega-core ninja, who had been chasing him from Omega-core, walked into the area where the Kumo ninja had hidden themselves. A perfect setup. To the eyes of the Kumo ninja, the Omega-core nin were trespassers and initiators of hostilities. Yujito watched in horrified fascination as the Kumo ninja led by Darui descended upon the last remaining followers of Salamander Hanzo, like a thunderstorm in all its glory. That takes care of this problem. One loose end remains to be tied up, before we can leave, Reiha muttered coldly, even as Yujito stiffened. Kinkaku. Meanwhile, the Omega-core ninja had walked into a spectacular ambush, as Darui and his team began to decimate their ranks, with a methodical slaughter. However, now, he had another reason to be pleased. He could now abandon the search for Yujito, who he had no desire to harm in the first place. Ginkaku's death could be attributed to the Omega-core ninja, thereby absolving him and his team of any responsibility. As for Kinkaku, he knew that Yujito could take care of him. A fair trade in his opinion. For ridding Kumo of the threat of the two renegade brothers, she would be allowed to escape, a mutually beneficial transaction in his opinion. He smirked as he turned his attention to the AIM ninja, who were now getting more desperate. Ironically, he would never realize what a grave mistake he had made. In another area, a few miles away from that location, after a couple of hours, as she made her way towards the outskirts of the borders, Yujito was finally feeling the rush of adrenaline leave her. She had left the area where the Kumo team and the AIM team had engaged in a skirmish immediately, after blindsiding her unknown helper, and had made her way back to the border. She did feel a little guilty about betraying the man who had helped her, but she couldn't take any chances. She was in too dangerous a situation to trust anyone implicitly, as of now. What worried her was the fact that she could no longer feel the chakra of the person who had helped her, and that gave her pause. Who was he? Why did he help her? And what was his purpose? Suddenly, she was cut out of her reverie, as she noticed what was in front of her. Kinkaku. A very angry, and very pissed Kinkaku. With a roar, Kinkaku began a blitz of strikes against Yujito, and Yujito found that they were indeed all of them, aimed at her vital points. If she failed to deflect even a single one, she would most likely be skewered. Attack, defend, counterattack, dodge, the two of them clashed and broke apart in a dance that anyone less powerful than a cage couldn't even begin to follow. The landscape around them was torn to shreds, Kinkaku's attacks creating gouges in the ground, Yujito's attacks demolishing the buildings around them. When they finally stopped, both of them were still uninjured, but they were panting as though they'd just run a race. I am so going to enjoy this, whore, your suffering will be legendary, you will pay for what you did to Ginkaku. Kinkaku growled, as the red chakra became more pronounced and covered his body. Yujito slouched down, as the Nibi's chakra flared around her body, even as her nails elongated to claws, while she took on a more feral stance. In his rage-induced state, Kinkaku failed to notice that her cloak was more potent than his own. With a roar, the man charged at her, and at the very last moment, Yujito ducked and swiped at his torso, with her Baijuyu chakra-enhanced claws. The flimsy coating of Kyubai's chakra, covering Kinkaku, was shredded like tissue paper, even as the woman literally eviscerated him. How the down man moaned in a piteous whimper as he looked at her, while Yujito scoffed, "Be told you once, and I will repeat it again, pseudojin Hiraki, such as yourselves have no right to bare your fangs at someone like us, who is the real deal." She slowly made her way towards the man, who was bleeding to death, and with a roar, she drove her fist right into his head, which literally exploded with the force, showering her with blood and brain matter. "Well done, Yujito-san, it would seem that my intervention was not warranted after all," a voice came from behind her, even as she instantly whirled around and lashed out with her claw, only for her forearm to be gripped by an arm with a vice-like grip. As Yujito got a good look at the person, her eyes widened as she finally discovered the identity of her rescuer. Senju Reiha. As he looked at the injured and bleeding woman in front of him, Reiha could see a myriad of emotions flit through her face. Shock, surprise, rage, and finally, curiosity mixed with a bit of reluctant gratitude. As she opened her mouth to speak, Reha cut her off. As he looked at the woman, his mind raced with a myriad of possibilities, and finally settled upon a particular train of thought. Yes, she could be useful. I have no need for your gratitude, Yujito-san, Reha replied curtly as he looked at the woman, who was sitting in front of him, with her head hunched down, even as she tried to staunch her wounds to prevent them from bleeding further. My saving your life has nothing to do with any sort of kindness or charity. Your presence provides me with a unique solution to a very unique problem that has been hounding me ever since I returned to Konoha, he continued, even as the woman looked at him in surprise. Solution? She asked hoarsely, as the teenager nodded curtly. Yes. If you agree to my proposal, you shall be granted a safe haven in Konoha, and Kumo will not dare to lay its hands upon you, ever again. You will be allowed to live your life, freely, and without any burdens nor restrictions placed upon you as well. He paused, even as he looked calculatively at the young woman, who looked surprised at the unexpected offer. What sort of proposal? She asked shrewdly, even as her mind tried to analyze the motives behind the senju's unexpected offer. You must consent to becoming my wife. Sometimes, the human mind sometimes cannot bear shocks of such magnitude, and it felt as if her mind temporarily shut itself up. Finally, she recollected her bearings and looked at him, with pure unadulterated shock. You must be joking. You cannot seriously expect me to believe it, she whispered hoarsely, as she looked at him, wondering whether the young man in front of her was actually insane. I assure you, I am in complete control of my mental faculties, Yujito-san. Besides, this provides with you a very elegant solution to your problem. You must realize by now that with the deaths of Kinkaku and Ginkaku, the domineering control of the royal family of lightning has been lifted from Kumo. The daimyo will not leave this standing. This could very well lead to a civil war in your country. Furthermore, you will be hunted down to the ends of the earth. Every hidden village in existence will send its hunters after you. A powerful female kunoichi, who is also a robed jinhyuriki, is too enticing a target to ignore for anyone. You will never know a moment of peace, he concluded, while Yujito snarled in impotent anger, realizing that he was correct. However, if you were to accept my offer, it would give you the absolute protection that you need. You will become the daughter-in-law of the Hokage herself, of the leader of the most powerful hidden village in the world. The entire might of Konohagakure will stand before you and any potential threats you face. As powerful as he might be, even the Lightning Country daimyo will not dare to wage war against the Fire Country. Besides, I suspect he will be too busy in trying to reassert his lost control over your former home. Reha paused, as he looked at the young woman, and he could see that she was giving it some serious thought. Yujito's mind was a whirlwind of possibilities. The logic behind the senju's words made sense, but accepting him as a husband, as the future father of her children, was a life-altering decision she wasn't ready to make. He wasn't unattractive, but, what's in it for you? Why do you want me as your wife? Surely, a man of your status in Konoha could have any woman he desires. That's true, but it's not my concern, Reha replied with an air of indifference. You see, there are certain factions in my village putting immense pressure on my grandmother to force me into a marriage with a suitable bride to revive my clan and promote their ideology. I have no interest in marriage or anything that comes with it. Excuse me, Yujito erupted in anger. What the hell do you mean? You ask me to marry you and then say you're not interested in marriage? Why the hell are you doing this? Or do you think I'm not suitable for the great Senju clan? Is that it? You want me as some kind of trophy wife to symbolize your victory over Kumo, she roared, her eyes clouded with rage as Reha remained impassive. None of the above, he responded in a monotone voice, observing Yujito. By marrying you and presenting you as my wife, I can effectively block all attempts by those various factions to exert control over my grandmother's work and life through such an alliance. If I present you as my wife, I won't have to marry anyone else, and their paths will be effectively locked and barred. As for you not being suitable, I assure you, your physical attributes are not a concern in the least, he spoke quietly, while Yujito snarled in anger. For a female, you are quite attractive according to the prevalent standards of the world, but Reha continued, I assure you, if you become my wife, I will in no way force you to perform the conjugal duties that come with marriage. You shall have complete freedom and control over my home and my clan, as the clan head's daughter-in-law and the future head's wife. Your safety will be guaranteed, and you will have a position of honor and respect. All I ask in return is for you to be my wife in name only, so that I can ensure my grandmother's well-being. This I swear, he concluded, and Yujito's eyes went wide. You're serious, aren't you? She whispered in shock as the magnitude of his revelation sank in. The young man in front of her was willing to sacrifice his entire future, his life, and his family line just to ensure his grandmother was not inconvenienced. In return for such a sacrifice, he was offering her a new life, safety, and so much more. This meant she would never have a true life, a true family, or children of her own if his monastic abstinence held true, but considering the alternatives, it was a small price to pay. Besides, he seemed sincere, and she had nothing more to lose. She shrugged fatalistically, it seems I have no other choice. Very well, I accept. Have you made up your mind? Reha asked the woman, his eyes fixed unsettlingly on her face. Knowing that her acceptance would forever bind her fate to the man in front of her, Yujito snorted indelicately, of course. What other option do I have? Turning to leave, Reiha remarked, don't flatter yourself. It was your only option, and you know it. Gnashing her teeth, Yujito followed him as they rapidly made their way toward the village of Konoha. A few miles away, the team of root ninjas dispatched by Danzo was hurrying toward the route where they planned to intercept the Hokage's grandson on his way back to the village. As they approached their target, their sensor, tensed for a second. Instantly, both Torun and Shin moved their hands to the hilts of their swords. What is it? Torun asked Fu quietly. He knew better than to doubt his friend. Fu was the best sensor in all of Konoha, even though the village itself was unaware of that fact. 24 enemies are rapidly making their way toward the Hokage's grandson and his companion. Their intent appears to be hostile, their gait and chakra natures indicate they are from the land of wood. Companion? I wasn't aware that Reiha-sama had anyone assisting him, Shin mentioned thoughtfully, while Fu shook his head. Whoever this woman is, here both Torun and Shin looked at him in surprise. She has a massive chakra reserve. The only other female ninja I've seen with that kind of chakra capacity is Lady Hokage herself. We need to hurry, Torun muttered as the three of them sped forward, trying hard to force down the sense of foreboding they felt from that piece of information. Soon, the other two also became aware of the enemies racing toward the Hokage's grandson alongside them. They had no doubt they had been detected but were left alone. It was a logical decision. The Hokage's grandson was the target, not some three no-name ninjas like themselves. The greater prize warranted the greater attention. It had now turned into an all-out race to reach the Hokage's grandson. You do realize that even if we get there first, we're still vastly outnumbered, Torun muttered quietly, while his friend was silent. We may be stronger, and quality may be better than quantity, but quantity has a quality of its own. They are remnants of the assassins from the land of wood, if my history lessons serve me right, aren't they? Why would they assault the Hokage's grandson? If anything, shouldn't they be aiming for Danzo-sama for spearheading the destruction of their clan and village? Shin asked in confusion as he looked at his two seniors. They are doing so because the one who ordered Danzo-sama to eliminate the land of wood was the second Hokage. During the Second Ninja War, they were allied with us first, but they betrayed us, and in doing so, were indirectly responsible for the deaths of nearly half the members of the Senju clan during the Battle of Mikado-Jiehara. That battle hastened the decline of the Senju clan, and the second Hokage ordered the razing of their land and village in retaliation. We wiped out the village hidden in the land of wood and permanently destroyed any chances they might have had for reviving their village. The second Hokage was aware of Root, Shin asked in surprise, as he found that dubious. He founded it and ran it when the first Hokage asked him to create a special unit within the newly formed Umbu during the First Ninja War. When he became Hokage, he handed over its reins to Danzo-sama, he replied glibly, while Shin fell silent. But the war has been over for a long time. Besides, none of us even existed back then. Why are they attempting to take revenge after so many years of inactivity? Shin asked as they sped forward. I guess the news that the Senju clan has been revived must have been more than they can bear. If I'm right, every last person from that land capable of being a shinobi has come here today to take revenge and to kill the last male Senju, Torun observed, while Shin fell silent. There is one thing you must learn, Shin. If politics makes strange bedfellows, then covert actions make even stranger ones. Diplomacy demands that politicians bury their differences when the need arises. However, shinobi do not. They nurse their grudges forever, Fu spoke softly. Offhand, it was possibly the best advice anybody from Root had ever given him. As they made their way forward, Reiha suddenly stiffened and stopped in his tracks, even as Yujito instantly moved her hands toward her weapon holster in reaction. What is it? We're about to have company, Reiha muttered softly, just as three ninjas wearing Konoha Umbu uniforms without face masks came into view, looking like they had just run all over the world. Reiha-sama, our deepest apologies, but we were ordered to come to your aid. The leader began, only to be interrupted by Reiha. By Danzo, yes, I know. You knew, and you were expecting us? How? The leader seemed flustered, while his men's body posture slackened considerably. Because Danzo is Danzo. I know how people like him think and act, better than most, perhaps better than he himself, he concluded, while the two Root lieutenants stiffened. If the boy is as smart as I suspect him to be, then he will have anticipated your arrival for his assistance beforehand unbidden. The memory of Danzo uttering these words came back to Torun's mind. It would seem that Danzo-sama was correct in his estimations. Then their eyes fell upon Yujito, and they immediately froze in shock as they recognized her. By default, their hands went to their weapons. Then, after composing themselves, they noticed she was standing beside Reiha without any injuries or any sense of discomfort. More importantly, they noticed her slashed forehead protector, indicating her current allegiance, or rather lack thereof. Their eyes widened considerably in shock at the implications of what they were seeing. This mission had just become more complicated than they could imagine. As the three Root ninjas slowly tightened their guard, Reiha muttered softly, I would appreciate it if you do not antagonize my wife. I cannot guarantee your safety otherwise. Within a second, all three stared at him in open astonishment and gazed at the woman in wonder. They are the remnants of the Hanya assassins from the land of wood, Reiha-sama. It would seem they are here to exact vengeance upon you for the casualties they suffered at the hands of Root Ninja when the second Hokage ordered Danzo-sama to deal with them during the second ninja war. Shin spoke out quietly even as his seniors just seemed dazed at hearing the man's words, while Reiha became silent as he pondered over the information. From the land of wood? But they have been defunct for decades. Yujito spoke out in shock as she eyed Shin. Not as defunct as we thought, apparently, Fu grunted as he too began to prepare for an imminent assault. Hanya assassins, eh? Yes, I believe I know how to deal with them now. Reiha spoke as he began to concentrate his chakra. You too, he said as he turned to face Fu and Torun. Identify yourselves and state your abilities. I need to know the abilities of everyone present to form a battle plan, Reiha ordered as he looked at them squarely. Fu, sensor, as well as trap expert and wielder of the Yamanaka bloodline. Torun, infiltration, as well as the wielder of the Abarame bloodline. Shin, demolition expert and pictomancer. What the hell are they waiting for? Yujito spoke out in agitation as she eyed the area surrounding them. Let's find out. Fu, which one is closest to our location? Reiha asked, at which Fu scouted around. There, 15 yards, southwest direction, in the trees, Fu pointed out, and Reiha nodded. Can you use the Shinton Shin on him from here? Reiha asked quietly. Fu nodded in agreement. Do so. Find out what they are planning, Reiha ordered, and the man nodded. Torun, guard my body, he spoke softly and made the seals as his partner grabbed hold of his body. Shintenshin no jutsu, and with that, he forcibly took over the target's mind using astral projection and viewed his memories, returning instantly. Reiha-sama, they are waiting for reinforcements, another 100 shinobi to arrive to their aid momentarily, Fu spoke out quietly. I see. Under the circumstances, I suppose this is unavoidable. We must first get rid of these people and then prepare an ambush for the expected reinforcements. Reiha spoke out quickly, at which everybody nodded and moved forward to take offensive positions. After gathering the necessary chakra, Reiha made 5 hand seals rapidly and plunged his palm to the ground. Kukios no jutsu, summoning technique, he intoned as he flared his chakra through the seal matrix that appeared within his palm, and a large amount of smoke covered the area. The root ninjas stiffened, unaware that their target possessed a summoning contract. Yujito was watching the proceedings with a gimlet eye. When the smoke cleared, 3 rabbits, each the size of a full-grown dog, stood in front of them. All 3 rabbits wore what appeared to be the apparel of a samurai, with a daisho and light leather armor covering their front and back, along with leather bracers on their forepaws, which were similar to a human hand, they noticed. The white rabbit on the left had green eyes and possessed an air of inherent nobility. The black rabbit in the middle had an air of authority, while the brown rabbit on the right looked dispassionate and uninterested in the proceedings. Laozi, Sunzi, and Chaozi, thank you for your prompt response. Reiha bowed in greeting as the rabbits bowed in return. Did you know there was a rabbit summoning contract in existence? Torun whispered, while Fu shook his head minutely, watching the creatures in fascination. Konoha had only 5 known summoning contracts. 3 of them were major contracts, the ape contract of the 3rd Hokage, the slug contract of the 5th Hokage, and the toad contract wielded by the 4th Hokage and his teacher. The minor contracts were the dog contract of Kakashi Hatake and the turtle contract of Might Guy. The snake contract had been lost when the snake's son defected, and although his apprentice could summon the minor creatures of the clan, the traitor had ensured his apprentice could not summon the clan leaders and gain their blessings to use the contract completely. They also knew that Danzo had a contract, but they didn't know what creatures it was for. So, Konoha had 5 publicly known contracts and 1 hidden, and it appeared that this number had gone up by 1 more. At Fu's whisper, the black rabbit in the middle twitched and turned toward him with a stern glare. There is a lot you don't know, child, at which the man began to sweat, feeling an enormous amount of killing intent hit him from the creature. Peace, Sunzi, he did not mean anything by it, forgive him, Reiha spoke in a quiet tone, even as the rabbit relented. Name your reason for summoning us, boy, Sunzi commanded, while the watching humans raised their eyebrows, seeing such a forceful summon. Master Sunzi, we are currently surrounded by 24 enemies, and 100 more are to arrive. I humbly request your assistance in dispatching this threat. Reiha made his request, and the rabbits paused. As one, the 3 rabbits turned, their long ears twitching for a few seconds. My blades have grown dull, yearning for the wetting of blood. We shall aid you, Sunzi muttered, and in a flash, he vanished. To raise my blade and cut down unworthy foes is beneath my noble status, but the rabbit clan honors its debts. Laozi, the white rabbit, sighed, before he too vanished. Though cast from my home's hearth, black tears trickle from my eyes at the thought of coming bloodshed. The brown rabbit sighed, as it also vanished. Did that rabbit just make a haiku? Yujito asked, perplexed, while Reiha remained still. Reiha-sama, pardon me, but I was unaware that a rabbit contract existed. If it's not too presumptuous to ask, when did you acquire it? Torun asked. Reiha looked at him with the same impassive gaze. After a few moments, he began to speak. The Rabbit clan is one of the 12 major summoning contracts. They are exclusively sworn in service to the Senju clan, much like the Ape clan is sworn to the Sarutobi clan. They are the greatest masters of Kenjutsu and possess exceptional skill in Raiten Ninjutsu and Genjutsu. But the reason they are so feared and respected, despite their weak physical stature, and why they are considered a great clan in the summoning realm, is because of their unparalleled mastery of Jakuken Ninjutsu, more commonly known as Spacetime Ninjutsu. The second Hokage's mastery of Jakuken Jutsu was acquired under their tutelage. Yujito gulped in no small amount of fear and looked askance at the place where the rabbits had stood just a few minutes ago. She wasn't the only one to do so. Spacetime techniques were considered the holy grail of ninja arts for a reason. Even the slightest knowledge of such techniques automatically made its owner a grave threat. To this day, the fourth Raikage still raged about the fourth Hokage and how the Yellow Flash had cheated his way to victory every time they fought, using those techniques of his. "Where did you get this contract?" "I thought it was lost with the second Hokage's death," Yujito asked, aware of the rabbit contract's existence, though not the details that had been revealed today. The rabbit contract was known to Kumo because the second Hokage had used them in his last stand against the Kinkaku force, decimating them completely, even though he lost his life in the battle, having been betrayed by Hanzo. However, it had been assumed that the contract was lost, as Tobirama had not allowed anybody else to sign it. "That, my dear wife, is a discussion for another time and another place," he replied blandly, and Yujito nodded, even as the Root Nin lamented a lost opportunity. Danzo wasn't going to be pleased with this incomplete report. Soon, screams began to emanate all around them, and everyone, apart from Reiha, watched in fascination as a literal rain of human body parts began to fall from the canopy of trees above them. A slight, sporadic rustle of a breeze, followed by the hoarse screams of the victims, permeated the air. After 10 minutes, the three rabbits appeared in front of them. Lao Tzu was wiping his blade clean with an expensive scarf, while Chao Tzu again stood to the side, composing a new haiku to commemorate this battle. Sun Tzu, his blade still dripping with blood, walked forward. "That was a good battle. Now, Reiha, do you have anything else for us to do?" "Yes, I want you to assemble a hunting party," he replied, and the other two rabbits instantly gazed at him with a steely look. "You understand the consequences of your actions?" Even Tobirama did not assemble a hunt unless the situation required it, Sun Tzu replied after a moment's silence. "Yes. Name the target of the hunt. Hunt down the survivors of the Hanya group. Eliminate every last living being in that clan and village, down to the last breathing child." Yujito sucked in a deep breath as she looked at her husband, as he casually issued an order for genocide. Although she wasn't aware of the history between the Senju and the Land of the Wood, she knew when some things were beyond the norm. "What have I gotten myself into?" The three Root Nin, on the other hand, remained perfectly still. In their opinion, it was a valid and logical solution. If the Hanya assassins could wait 50 years for vengeance, there was no telling what they could do in the future. Fanatical hatred of that sort could not be appeased, no matter the effort expended. The only alternative left was to enforce the kind of action being taken by the Hokage's grandson now. After a moment, Sun Tzu nodded. "Very well, but you will need to speak to Seijuro-sama after this," the black-colored rabbit warned, as the three rabbits dispelled themselves. "Very well, now that there are no more obstacles in our path, let us be on our way," Reiha muttered, at which all of the remaining members in the group regained their bearings and followed him. As they neared the village, Yujito became more and more apprehensive. Noticing her discomfort, Reiha looked at her. "Do not worry, you will not be harmed, you have my word." Mollified, she hardened her resolve and sped forward. As they moved ahead, at his suggestion, she removed her forehead protector and placed it inside her coat as a precaution. As they neared the gates, they could see that the village wore a festive look for some reason, and they could see the Hokage standing at the gates, along with many other ninjas and a considerable retinue of people. "What's going on? Is there some sort of celebration happening in the village?" Reiha asked Fu, their point man, who shook his head. "When news of your deed in Omegakure reached Konoha, the people automatically began to revel. It has been many years since Konoha has achieved a victory of this nature, and the fact that you have avenged the Senju clan was enough of a reason for everyone to start celebrating," he replied, and Yujito became confused. "Wait, what exactly did you do in Omegakure?" "Nothing much, I just killed Hanzo." Yujito stopped dead in her tracks. Hanzo of the Salamanders. Hanzo was a name known to every shinobi in existence. He was the man who had single-handedly protected and guarded Omegakure successfully through the 3 world wars and had managed to thwart the Great 5 villages. He was the man who single-handedly defeated the 3 Sunin when they were at their prime and had given them their damn title. Omegakure was, for all purposes, even if unacknowledged, the 6th great village, and Hanzo was, for all purposes, the unofficial and unrecognized Omekage. "You killed him." "Him? But, wait, that's why those AIM Jonin were chasing you, weren't they? And you did it single-handedly and without any backup or support?" Yujito asked shrilly. Reiha looked at her in surprise. "I didn't need any, it was not that difficult, to be honest," he muttered as he made his way forward. Yujito and even the 3 root nin stopped. They had to. Well, are you coming or not? Reiha-sama, pardon us, our duty was to escort you to the village gates. We must now take our leave and report to our superior. Please excuse us, Shin replied after gathering his bearings. Reiha nodded. Tell Danzo that I wish to speak with him, soon, he replied back, and Fu nodded in acceptance. Tsunade rubbed her forehead angrily as she stood outside the village gates. Accompanying her was the entire shinobi council and half the ninjas present in the village. When the news had broken out that her grandson had killed Hanzo, a sort of revelry had broken out in the village, unseen since the end of the Third War. Her people were thinking it was a great victory and that they had been avenged for the betrayal and death of the second Hokage. True, she had expected she would need to make a forceful statement to prove to the world that she had not been bluffing in the Grand Council. But killing Hanzo had been taking it too far. The unsanctioned, though no one knew it, assassination of a head of state was not a deterrent for future war. It was an invitation for one. The fact that apart from Hanzo, there was no one in AIM who had the skill to go against her and the cage-level shinobi in Konoha might be the only thing that could restrain AIM from declaring war over this. She had already been bombarded by a flurry of messages from the daimyo himself and was nearing the end of her tether. Suddenly, her musings were cut short as she watched her grandson come into view, walking steadily toward the gate. She paused as she saw another person step behind him. A woman. That set off all sorts of alarm bells in her head. To this day, the only women with whom he interacted were herself and Shizun. And the woman walking demurely behind him was most definitely not her student. The woman was wearing a traveling cloak over her ninja uniform with a hood that covered her face. The people surrounding her also stiffened, and whispers began to emanate as they noticed his companion. She fervently prayed to all deities who would listen, hoping beyond hope that her grandson had not done anything reckless that might lead to a war. Killing Hanzo was bad enough, she hoped it wouldn't get any worse beyond that. Then, the woman removed her cloak and showed her face. As soon as she recognized her face, Tsunade's heart nearly jumped to her mouth. Standing before her, right next to her grandson, was the Jinchuriki of the Nibi no Nikomata, Yujito Nii of Kumagakure no Sato. Apparently, it had gotten worse. If a war doesn't erupt over this, then I am not a ninja. Damn it to hell. The idiot. What the hell was he thinking? Killing a head of state was one thing, but stealing a Jinchuriki, what the hell was wrong with this boy? Even as Tsunade remained in a semi-trance, Reiha approached her. Grandmother, please allow me to introduce my wife, Yujito. That broke her out. A dead silence prevailed over the area as every single person became silent and gazed at the two of them. As she gazed at her grandson, Tsunade began to smile, and then she began to laugh, and continued to laugh harder and harder, until the people around her began to edge away, fearing for their safety. Then, without pause, she suddenly whirled around and delivered a devastating punch to her grandson's face, sending him flying. He crashed into a tree at the opposite end of the road, groaned in pain, and sank down. Then, smiling in the same feral manner, she turned toward Yujito, whose face was blanched with fear, and placed her arms around her shoulder. Come, daughter-in-law of mine, let us go and have a chat, she spoke with a charming smile, and Yujito squeaked in fear as she was led away, while her husband collapsed on the opposite side of the road in a dead faint as Shizun and a group of medics raced toward the unconscious man. As he heard the report of his underlings, Shimura Danzo was, for the first time in his long life, struck dumb. Repeat yourself, he snapped at Torun, who seemed distinctly uncomfortable at being put on the spot. Lord Reiha introduced the Jinchuriki of the Two Tails as his wife. From what I can guess, she has completely defected from Kumagakure and is now with Tsunade-sama, who seems to be in the process of debriefing her. I am unaware of how this situation came to be. We had no indication that Lord Reiha had someone accompanying him, much less someone of this stature, Torun replied, and Danzo gripped his cane in sheer frustration. Just as I think I have a bead on the boy, he does something more outrageous than his last actions. He growled gutturally as his frustration finally boiled over, despite his ironclad control over his emotions. He idly dismissed his men as he began to pace around in his chambers. Be calm, let me analyze what has been revealed so far. Kumo comes for a peace treaty, but it is a ruse to kidnap the heiress of the Hyuga clan. However, the boy immediately counters the plot and resolves the situation. Too quick a reaction, as if he had precise information about the plot beforehand. With the revelation of his wife, it makes more sense. Come to think of it, Tsunade had a chat with the girl after the council. How did I forget that? This means Tsunade had planned for all of this in advance. With Orochimaru's betrayal and Jiraiya's buffoonery, we all just pushed her down the totem pole in importance, to speak nothing of not bothering to care about her whereabouts in her self-exile. A critical lapse on my part, seeing as this allowed her to raise the boy in secret. I should not have forgotten that for all her vices, she is the granddaughter of the Shinobi no Kami and the grandniece of my mentor. Clearly, even in its direst straits, the blood of the senju runs potent. It is as if Tsunade has remade herself into the senju toka of this generation. Danzo got up and began to pace around as he tried to reorganize his thoughts. With my delicate political struggles with Hiruzen, I actually blinded myself to events occurring outside the village. To lose interest in tracking a critical asset like Tsunade was an extremely major lapse on my part. Or was this a part of Hiruzen's ploy? By keeping me engulfed in a shadow political war, he diverted my attention away from such matters. Well played, old friend, well played indeed. He sat down on his chair as he began to jot down his observations on a piece of paper to outline his views. 1. Tsunade clearly has a lot more secrets than she has revealed so far. It seems as though she has completely transformed herself in her extended exile. 2. The boy was clearly trained exceptionally well. From what I can see, he has been given access to Tobirama-sama's notes and journals, and he is well on his way to mastering those skills. This is clearly a plus point for Konoha. Hiruzen and I are old, and Tsunade and Jiraiya, while capable, cannot continue to protect Konoha for more than another 10 years at best before age gets to them as well. With Minato's death, there is nobody in the new generation to whom this village and its future safety can be entrusted. Of the new generation, Heitake, Mato, and Itaki were originally the only prospective candidates. Heitake is too damaged mentally by his past, and while Mato has the strength, he does not elicit the level of respect a Cage needs. Itaki is capable, but his health is weak. And now, suddenly, with his appearance, Reiha checks all the requirements, but he lacks the experience as an active shinobi to build up his credibility. Which, here Danzo paused, as a metaphorical light bulb went off in his brain, is what his current actions amount to. Here, Danzo chuckled as everything became clear to him in a flash. Tsunade is grooming the boy to take her seat. All the actions the boy has taken to date have been extremely beneficial for Konoha with absolutely zero losses. Kyumo has been neutered for at least the next 3 years. Of all the current Cage, only the Raikage was an active threat. When Minato was alive, he had been cowed, but as soon as the fourth died, he began to flex his muscles. Now, with Reiha's actions, there is an active civil war in the Land of Lightning. The Gold and Silver brothers and their lineage were a threat used by the Lightning Daimyo to browbeat the Hidden Cloud village. Now, with their death, Kyumo has a chance to get rid of the tyrannical Mori clan, which has ruled Kaminari no Kuni with an iron grip for nearly 2 centuries. But, with the defection of one of their 2 Jinchuriki, Kyumo's strength has been greatly weakened. It will take nearly 3 years at most for everything to settle. After that, even if he wants to, the Raikage cannot take action against us, because his forces will be depleted in the civil war. Furthermore, we will have accurate intelligence on the Cloud Village's capabilities due to the boy's wife. Kyumo will have to rebuild before it even thinks of revenge, which means they will have to rethink strategies, deployments, and training methods to account for the loss of intelligence from the Jinchuriki's defection, which will again affect the cohesion of their forces. All in all, it will take another 4 years for Kyumo's forces to stabilize. Overall, we have gained 7 years of peace with one single assassination. By that time, the next generation of the village will be ready and prepared for the next war. Absolutely flawless. This is an epitome of what shinobi strategy is meant to be. Danzo chuckled in appreciation, even as he relaxed for a bit, before going back to his thoughts. Added to this is the fact that we have gained a new Jinchuriki. With the destruction of the 9 tails, we were in a precarious spot. But now, we have gained a Jinchuriki who has been trained to wield her beast's power without any drawbacks. Only the 4th Mizukage and the 4th Raikage's brother can claim greater control over their beasts. But with access to the 1st Hokage scrolls on the tailed beasts, she can also be trained to get complete control over her beast as well. All that is needed is to ensure her loyalty to the leaf, but considering the boy and his precision, I need not be worried too much on that front. Still, it would be wise to keep a minor detail on the woman for a few days, just in case. Here, Danzo stood up and moved towards his desk, and pulled up his roster of agents to see who could be placed as minders for their new Jinchuriki. It seems that I will have to bring this up with the boy when he speaks to me. He has conveyed his intentions to speak to me via few already. Besides, if Tsunade is grooming him to be the next Hokage, 7 years is more than enough to burnish his credentials. All that is needed is to ensure that the other clans not resent the fact that the Hokage post is being monopolized by the Senju clan for the most part. Hiruzen and Minato were the exceptions, but even they were Senju influenced. If the boy is taking after his grandfather instead of his granduncle, then he will be a superb Hokage. Something which even I have no problems with, but I will still need to soothe the egos of the other clans, the Uchiha foremost despite my reservations. Tsunade has already eased the restrictions on their clan. Wait, is this the reason why she, clever, most clever? The girl is already laying down the foundations for the boy's ascension. It seems I will need to speak with Kagami to gauge the mood within the Uchiha. Perhaps I need to ease my surveillance on them as well. As a peace offering, Danzo chuckled, and feeling quite content for the first time in many years, left to take a well-deserved rest. Ironically, for all his self-indulged gloating and brilliantly deducting the rationale behind the events in the village, he did not realize that every single point that he had theorized was factually incorrect. He had just imposed his own thoughts and biases in his deductions and assumed that Tsunade had morphed into some sort of super strategizing genius, which she clearly was not. While his estimations on what was happening in Kumo was correct, everything else was wrong. But as self-assured as he was, he did not even realize that he had completely fallen into a trap of his own making. A few days later, in Iwaigakur, as he sat in his office, Oniki, the third Tsuchikage, was trying to come to grips with the fact that things were completely out of order in the shinobi world recently. I thought we IWA ninja were supposed to be the hard cases of the ninja world. Not those damn hippies. Damn it, I am too old for this shit. The Tsuchikage growled in consternation as he read through the various reports in front of him. For the last few days, he had been continuously bombarded with emergency missives from his spies, some of whom had even gone to the extent of breaking their cover by sending their reports via summons, something which he expected them to do only when there was a threat of an imminent invasion or an outbreak of war. Then again, the current situation was still fluid enough to snowball into the next world war. Although, he chuckled, it is good to see that muscle-brained punk humbled for a change. The Reikage had been the only one to not adhere to the pledge of universal disarmament that the 5 nations had agreed to at the end of the last world war. The arrogant fool had resorted to stockpiling weapons, kinjutsu, and had even resorted to bloodline theft to bolster his village's strength. Not that it did him any good. Oniki had had the heads of the fools who had attempted to kidnap a child with the explosion release bloodline mailed to the Reikage, along with an envelope full of dust. All attempts by Kumo to infiltrate Iwa's borders had fallen by half within the following weeks. But the stubborn idiot had persisted in his efforts. From what his spies had reported, the Kumo ninja had attempted to enter the mess that was the Kiri Civil War next. The Reikage had attempted to bribe the survivors of the bloodline purges with a safe haven in Kumo in return for their loyalty and their bloodlines. Oniki chortled in mirth when he recalled seeing such a crude attempt of blatant power grabbing. At this point, the rebels were beyond caring about their safety and were hellbent on killing the Yandere Mizukage, even if it meant their own annihilation. He recalled that the leader of the rebellion, a woman named Terumi, if he was correct, had melted the messengers alive with lava as a warning, and had left one blubbering schmuck alive to take the message back to Kumo, ordering them to not interfere in Kiri's matters. The girl had spunk to blow off the Reikage of all people like that, he chuckled. It was pointless to note that the messengers the Reikage had sent with a similar offer to Yagura, with contrasting terms, offering to take care of the rebellion in return for gaining those bloodlines for Kumo, had fared even worse. Even Oniki shivered for a second when he had learned of how, the by now clearly insane, Yagura, had dealt with those hapless mugs. The Kaze Cage on the other hand was far more subtle and efficient. He had simply had the men who had attempted to kidnap a child with the Scorch release bloodline buried in the desert, alive. Needless to say, all further attempts by Kumo of that particular sort had ceased in the Land of Wind. Not being content with that, and maybe to complete the set perhaps, the Reikage had attempted to strike Konoha last. With Namikaze dead, I guess he thought he could prevail, Oniki thought with a huff. And maybe he would have succeeded, Oniki grudgingly added to himself, if Hiruzen were still in charge. His erstwhile peer had clearly been burnt out by handling the Leaf Village for 4 decades, dealing with 2 world wars and a Baijuyu attack. He would have buckled under the threat and the strain of mitigating the damage from the attack of the 9 Tails on the Leaf Village. However, he had retired and let his student take over before that happy possibility. Of all the people he had expected to see succeeding Sarutobi Hiruzen, Senju Tsunade had never even factored as a potential candidate in Oniki's eyes. And now, we have to deal with the second coming of Tobi Rama fucking Senju himself. The fact that the Senju girl had been secretly raising the grandson of Tobi Rama Senju had hit the shinobi world like a thunderbolt out of the blue. He had nearly roasted his head spymaster on a rake of coals for missing out on such a monumental piece of information. His only consolation was the fact that the rest of the world was just as unaware as him, mitigating the shame that he had felt when he had originally learned of this news. Curiously, the boy had declined to join Konoha's forces, and somehow Tsunade had indulged the boy, much to the shock of the shinobi world. Oniki, however, had not bought that charade for a second. He knew by experience how dangerous a powerful and capable Senju truly was. It was a miracle that Hashirama had died in the First War, taking the first Mizukage, first Reikage and first Kazekage with him along the way, and that the girl had not inherited would release, thank God. With Tobirama's death in the early stages of the Second War, the last heavyweight of the Clan Wars era had died. Hashirama, Madara and Tobirama, all 3 of them were the reason why Konoha had survived the First War and why the system of hidden villages had proven itself viable in the first place. For the short period that he had stayed with the Leaf Village, Madara had certainly done his best to ensure its survival before becoming the most famous rogue ninja in the history of the world. There was a reason why Mew had been forced to wear bandages from head to toe for his whole life after attempting to fight that monster. And remarkably, he had gone to face Madara a second time, taking him along for the ride that time, and scarring him for life as a consequence. He had nearly drunk himself to death, celebrating, when the news came that Hashirama had put that mad dog down. Now, with his harebrained stunt, the Reikage had once again provoked the wrath of a Senju, and the boy had proven that he was no less capable than his illustrious predecessors. Taking out Hanzo, stealing a Baijuyu in retaliation from Kumo, and destabilizing the Land of Lightning itself, if the news of the newly breaking civil war was true, Oniki shook his head in reluctant admiration. The Raikage had burnt himself beyond recognition this time, and it would be a miracle if he managed to hold on to his position. The losses that Kumo had suffered were that severe, which means that the threat of a war is greatly lessened, as even the Raikage, as hard-headed as he is, has to realize that a war with Konoha is not a viable proposition at the moment. If that boy can cause a civil war and destabilize a nation in retaliation for just an attempted bloodline theft, I would hate to see how he reacts to an actual declaration of war. Oniki, at that moment, decided to halt any and all attempts to infiltrate the Land of Fire for the next 2 years. Konoha deserved a gift of sorts for curbing the excessive behavior of that arrogant Raikage, and he was a man who paid his debts after all. As an afterthought, he put his stamp of approval on a missive declaring Senju Reiha an S-class threat with a bounty of 200 million on his head. He idly wondered what the other cages were thinking about regarding this issue. I hope that they are having as much of a headache as I am with this mess. He had no idea.